New York, Manhattan. This is the most prosperous place in New York, with many high-rise buildings. Even though it is only 1962 and there are still decades before the 21st century, it is still as prosperous as later generations. Especially in the very center of Manhattan, where stands a majestic building. Next to this building is the Empire State Building in Manhattan, but in front of this majestic building, the Empire State Building pales in comparison. Stark Industrial Building. A young and handsome Asian young man is standing in an extremely dirty street at the moment, looking up at the bustling city ahead. The extremely dirty streets formed a stark contrast with the cosmopolitan city in front of us. Oh, Stark Building. Lancelot Lee looked at the Stark Industrial Building in front of him with complicated eyes and couldn't help but smiled wryly. Is this a trip to Marvel? Lancelot is not from this world. One second, he was in his living room revisiting superhero movies, and the next second, he came here. He also became a handsome Asian guy named Lancelot Lee, who was just 19 years old this year. If it was just time travel, it would not make Lancelot fall into a sluggish state. But after seeing the Stark Industrial Building next to the Empire State Building, Lancelot knew that he had time travel to the Marvel world. However, this is not something that confuses Lancelot. What really confuses him is the current time and his identity. The time now is 1962, when the two superpowers are at the peak of the Cold War, and the third nuclear war may go off at any time. If this is just the Marvel movie universe, then Lancelot doesn't have to worry about the immediate Cold War issue at all. After all, in 2008, it was the time for superheroes and supervillains to debut. Before that, there was nothing in the Marvel movie universe. Danger. If possible, this time the Cold War will subside as quickly as a bubble, and then the whole world will usher in rapid development. However, the existence of Lancelot now makes the above if become a fantasy. Because of him. Is a mutant. Yes, Lancelot's current identity is a mutant who has been awakening for 3 years, which is why Lancelot judged from the beginning that this is not a pure MCU universe. Look, that freak with pink eyes is really disgusting. Do you think his pink eye disease will be transmitted to others? Mommy fuck, let's stay away. Who knows if this disease is contagious? There were waves of disgusted looks and voices around, but Lancelot was used to it. According to the memory of his predecessor, he had a happy family 3 years ago, but one night, his predecessor suddenly had a high fever, and it lasted for 7 days from that day, and the fever did not subside. The predecessor's parents tried everything, but it still didn't work. Just when they were about to give up, the predecessor's eyes suddenly changed. The originally black pupils turned blood red, like 2 rubies, and his high fever subsided. But his predecessor's parents were not happy because he recovered. Instead, because of his blood red eyes, they fell into even greater worries. They were worried that their predecessor had some strange disease, and they were also worried about being discriminated against by the neighbors around them. So they strictly asked their predecessor to stay at home. However, paper can't always contain the fire. A neighbor's Thanksgiving gift accidentally made the neighbor discover the abnormality of the predecessor. After that, rumors about the former red-eyed stranger began to quietly rise. In this era, being an Asian originally is a target of discrimination, not to mention the pair of eyes that were identified as pink eye disease in the predecessor. The predecessor family was discriminated against because of the pink eye disease of the predecessor, and even became difficult as time went by. In just a few months, the former parents had to be forced to move out of their original place and live in the most chaotic West Midtown, which is the famous Hell's Kitchen in later generations. The environment in Hell's Kitchen is even worse. There are all kinds of desperados, criminals, gangsters, and the most stinky drug addicts. It's even worse. In just 1 year, the former parents were robbed by 2 white thugs because of an outing, and then shot dead on the spot. Losing the protection of their parents, the predecessor was truly placed in hell, abused, discriminated against, and even bullied. These people treated the predecessor like a human being treats a monster. Yes, the predecessor was regarded as a monster, a red-eyed monster. 3 years of living in hell has made the predecessor cautious and even forced to wander. However, even so, he will still be regarded as a monster. Some people even regarded their predecessors as vampires and threatened to burn them to death in order to protect the peace of the world. It's too miserable. It's really too miserable. Lancelot couldn't help but sigh while empathizing with the previous experience. The mutant among the human race is really miserable. Strictly speaking, even the predecessor didn't know that he was a mutant, and it really let Lancelot know that he was a mutant. It was 3 days ago in the memory of the predecessor. 3 days ago, 2 equally young people suddenly came to the dump where the former lived, found the former, and introduced themselves as Charles Xavier and Eric Lyncher. They told the predecessor that the predecessor was a mutant, a human evolutionary at the genetic level, and they were the same kind of predecessor, and showed his variant ability to the predecessor, manipulating metal and reading mind. Immediately, the predecessor was extremely excited. He felt that in the past 3 years, he had finally found the same kind, and was finally no longer alone. When he was about to follow them and leave, they let the predecessor show his mutant ability, and when they learned that the mutant ability of the predecessor was this pair of blood-red eyes, the two left immediately disappointed, leaving the predecessor to fend for itself. So, am I rejected by the 2 giants of mutant? Lancelot smiled bitterly again. He didn't expect that the famous Professor X and Magneto would find him, and then he was disappointed because his mutant ability was only blood-red eyes leave. Lancelot really realized the difficulties of mutants. Their own mutant genes make them incompatible with humans, but the weak mutant is not recognized by the fellow mutant brothers. It really is. Fact, Lancelot couldn't help cursing. The start of his time travel was really bad. Ding, it is detected that the host has become a mutant, and the God-level pupil technique lottery system is starting. It is detected that the host has a novice gift package, whether to receive it. In the extremely dirty and foul-smelling streets, Lancelot looked at the system panel in front of him with great excitement. Sure enough, the traversers are systematic, and Lancelot just got his own gold finger. God-level pupil technique lottery system. According to the system's explanation, this is a lottery system specially used to draw those terrifying pupil techniques in the second dimension. Those God-level pupil techniques that exist in the second dimension. Sharing eyes, reincarnation eyes, copy eyes, evil king's true eyes, emperor's eyes, devil's eyes, magic eyes of straight death, Jianjigu, etc. As long as they are in anime, Lancelot was able to extract all the pupil techniques that had appeared before and use them perfectly. What made Lancelot even more satisfied was that the God-level pupil art lottery system only had a lottery function and did not require Lancelot to complete tasks to obtain lottery points. Every 3 months, the system will get a secondary pupil technique lottery draw, which can draw some not very powerful but very practical pupil techniques. Or, instead of using secondary lottery draws, accumulate 4 secondary lottery draws and conduct a God-level pupil technique lottery draw. Using Sharingan and Kaleidoscope Sharingan as an example, the secondary lottery will only draw the state of 1, 2, and 3 hooks of Sharingan. Don't even think about drawing Kaleidoscope Sharing Eyes. As for the God-level pupil technique lottery, you can directly draw the powerful pupil technique ability, such as Kaleidoscope Sharingan or Eternal Kaleidoscope. Simple and rude. I like it. Lancelot showed an excited smile on his face. A simple lottery system is a good system. System, get a gift package for beginners. After understanding the function of the system, Lancelot said impatiently, "Ding, I am receiving the novice gift package, and I have successfully received it. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the God-level pupil technique, Geas Absolute Command." The sound of the system disappeared, and Lancelot felt that a new ability was being born in the blood-red eyes that were originally empty. Chirp. Vaguely, Lancelot heard a bird song, and then a fiery red bird appeared in the center of Lancelot's blood-red eyes, like a high-ranking ruler who was about to fly. Geas, Absolute Order, from the rebellious Lelouch. Is Lelouch Lampelucky's royal costume matching pupil technique? As long as he looks at each other, he can give anyone an absolute order that cannot be disobeyed. This kind of absolute order can even distort the thoughts, beliefs, will, and even the 3 views, memory, etc. of the person ordered. The power that Lelouch called the king. It turned out to be Geas, Absolute Order. Lancelot was very surprised. This is Lelouch's Geas, which can be called a bug people technique. Its absolute command is so strong that it can even distort a person's character. Although each person can only order once, they can be issued through Geas. You must always obey my orders, which can be called a bug level absolute order. However, the only pity is that the effect of Geas on people with a strong mind will be greatly reduced. Lancelot frowned slightly. Geas is strong, absolutely, but the only limitation is that you can only give one command to the same target. When the command is completed, your own Geas will be invalid, and for people with strong minds such as Professor X, White Queen, etc., ability will be weakened. Hey, red-eyed yellow-skinned monkey, what are you laughing at? Just as Lancelot was immersed in the joy of getting the pupil skill Geas, a sullen voice sounded. Then in front of Lancelot, two tall white men were staring at him with mocking disgust. From the eyes of these two men, Lancelot saw the deep malice towards himself. Mommy fuck, is Johnson talking to you? Are you dumb? Or are you a red-eyed freak who has been so frightened that you can't speak? The other man said cursingly, and while speaking, he directly squeezed, raising his fist. He wanted to teach the freak in front of him a good lesson. How dare you look directly at me? Cup. Lancelot's icy voice came out of Lancelot's mouth, making the two menacing white men stunned for a moment. However, after seeing Lancelot's contemptuous eyes, which seemed to be aloof and looked at the ants under his feet, Johnson's face suddenly became distorted and hideous. Huh? You damn freak, who are you talking about? The man named Johnson drew out his pistol angrily and shouted at Lancelot. Cub, die, stay away. Lancelot's eyes were still cold. Looking into Johnson's eyes, he directly activated Geas. Hum. In the center of Lancelot's blood-red eyes, a group of birds emitting red light fluttered up instantly, escaped from Lancelot's eyes, and flew into Johnson's eyes in an instant. Johnson was originally domineering, but his ferocious and distorted face suddenly froze. His eyes were emitting a red light that only Lancelot could see. Inside the red light was a blood-red flying bird. Of order. Under Lancelot's gaze, Johnson walked directly to the corner of the street. After getting away from Lancelot, he raised the gun in a daze, pointed it at his temple, and pulled the trigger instantly. Boom. A muffled gunshot sounded. Johnson's head burst instantly, and a pool of scarlet blood immediately sprayed all around. You, what did you do? The other strong white man looked at the astonishing scene in front of him at this moment, and was so frightened that he fell to the ground. Trash. Lancelot stood up, walked in front of the burly white man with an indifferent face, then pressed his right hand on the burly white man's head, violently pulled the burly white man's hair, and closed his frightened eyes. Look directly at yourself. Keep me safe until your death, son of a bitch. Lancelot looked at the strong white man and gave an absolute order directly. Obey. The burly white man, who was originally scared, became extremely quiet at this moment. Under Lancelot's gaze, he slowly stood up. His eyes looked at Lancelot with incomparable enthusiasm, as if looking at the king who could control his own destiny. Ha ha. Looking at the unknown strong white man standing behind him as a bodyguard, Lancelot could no longer restrain his excitement, and laughed wildly. Lancelot pressed his right hand on his right eye, just like Uchiha laughing wildly at the fourth sister. He laughed wildly, and the laughter was full of wantonness. After 3 years of suffering, Lancelot finally ushered in a turning point in his own destiny. From now on, I will be in charge of my own destiny. Lancelot slowly walked out of the extremely dirty street. Even though his clothes were extremely shabby, his aura was like that of a crown prince, noble and elegant. Looking at his handsome face, the blood-red eyes like jewels complement his temperament. Mutant's first battle? It's time to take my throne. New York, Manhattan Airport. Lancelot, who had already changed into a black slim-fit suit and a black cloak, walked into the airport. Behind Lancelot, George, the strong white man from before, was wearing a black suit and followed step by step. After seeing the young version of Professor X and Magneto, Lancelot has realized that the current time node is in the period of X-Men. The first battle. The Black Emperor Sebastian Shaw is ambitiously trying to provoke a nuclear war between the two superpowers. The Black Emperor Shaw believes that only under the baptism of nuclear war can human beings usher in evolution, and the whole world will be destroyed by then. Only one species remains, and that is mutant. CIA agent Maura Mark Taggart, who learned of the existence of Mutant, found Charles Xavier, a professor at Oxford University who was very researched on human genes at the time, to assist her in investigating Mutant. However, Agent Maura had never imagined that this gentle and handsome professor turned out to be a mutant. After Professor X showed his mutant ability, the CIA immediately secretly established the X-Men base and invited Professor X and Mystique Raven. Later, when fighting against the Black Emperor Shaw, Professor X deeply felt that his own strength was insufficient. After saving Magneto, prepared to recruit troops. Hank, who has not yet become a beast, once again manufactured a brainwave strengthening device. With the help of the strengthening device, the brainwave of Professor X can expand half of the Earth. But now the plot has just begun, and the young Professor X and Magneto are still successively recruiting Shockwave Alex, Siren Sean Cassidy, Darwin, Dragonfly Girl Salvador. Originally, they also invited Wolverine Logan, who was still a bone wolf at the time, but Logan scolded him directly, which can be called a famous mutant scene. My experience is similar to that of Wolverine Logan, but one is rejecting others, and the other is being rejected by others. Lancelot still remembers the surprise and excitement when the young Professor X and Magneto found him 3 days ago and said he was a mutant. Everyone wanted to be different, especially after being regarded as a pink-eye disease and a red-eye freak for 3 years. The feeling of finding the same kind in the predecessor is even stronger. However, it is a pity that Professor X and Magneto were disappointed when they heard that their ability was only the color of their eyes. Even the young Professor X directly invaded the brain of the predecessor without permission and saw everything about the predecessor, and the useless red-eye variant ability. Professor X and Magneto rejected Lancelot's request to follow them, and simply abandoned the predecessor, leaving the predecessor alone to fend for itself. Although I understand what Professor X and the others are doing, but understanding does not mean agreeing. For Lancelot at that time, Professor X and Magneto seemed to be the light of hope running through Lancelot's life. Hid the light. If you have never seen the light, you will not be afraid of the dark. But now the two of Professor X brutally broke the darkness, let Lancelot see hope, but ruthlessly took it away. This made Lancelot full of resentment towards the two of them. Is it the CIA X-Men base? It's really child's play. Just put the mutant there so ostentatiously. Is it because you are afraid that others will not know? When he came back to his senses, Lancelot slightly tidied up the thing on his body, which took 3 hours. I am quite satisfied with the clothes designed by well-known fashion designers. The dress worn by Lancelot was personally made by a well-known fashion designer in Manhattan, and the style was designed according to Lelouch's student clothing in Lancelot's memory. Noble and elegant, handsome. As for whether the well-known designer agrees, Lancelot, who has the Geas ability, said that no one can disobey their absolute orders. During the 3 hours of waiting for the clothes, Lancelot took a good shower, cleaned himself up, and had a good meal. Now Lancelot has transformed into a nobleman, and now he came to the Manhattan airport, intending to go to the CIA headquarters in Virginia. The first battle was the first battle to announce the existence of Mutant, so how could Lancelot not participate? Because this will also be the moment when Lancelot ascends the throne. Hey, yellow-skinned monkey, please show your ticket. In the check-in hall of Manhattan Airport, the airport staff Anthony stopped Lancelot with his hand and angrily reprimanded him in a bad tone. The white supremacy theory that quietly emerged in the 1960s made this group of white people extremely arrogant and discriminated against all other races of skin. And when Anthony raised his head arrogantly and saw Lancelot's blood-red eyes, he was taken aback immediately and then cursed loudly. Get out, you dirty freak, you are not welcome here. The ugly curses stopped abruptly, and Anthony stood there in a daze, as if he had lost his soul. Death to the bastard. Lancelot looked at Anthony coldly, and then launched Geas absolute order. Boom. With Without any suspense, Anthony recovered immediately after receiving the order, then pulled out the gun from his waist and shot himself in the head. Wow. The sudden gunshots made all the passengers who were registering in the airport and the staff in the airport look over in horror, and the whole hall fell silent instantly. Look straight at me. Cubs. Lancelot straightened the cloak gracefully all of a sudden and said solemnly. In the process of panic, only Lancelot's voice echoed in the airport hall, making everyone look at Lancelot subconsciously. Kneel down. In Lancelot's eyes, a red bird flapped its wings and then flew into everyone's eyes. Crash. Everyone in the hall knelt on the ground in unison, with their heads lowered, as if they were welcoming their king. Lancelot didn't even look at these kneeling people and walked straight to a plane, ignoring the security personnel kneeling on the ground, and boarded a plane calmly. Take me to the CIA headquarters in Virginia. Sitting on the plane, Lancelot ordered. The pilot on the plane only felt in a trance for a while, and then came back to his senses. As ordered. Boom. A plane roared from the airport and disappeared at Manhattan Airport. Virginia, CIA headquarters. The CIA headquarters building is where politicians and senior officials work, and it is also a hub for the entire CIA to communicate. The entire building is heavily guarded, and there are elite CIA agents and CIA armed soldiers everywhere. It can be said that even if a fly flies in, it will be found instantly. Therefore, although the CIA headquarters is placed on the bright side, no one has ever dared to make an idea here. However, today is an exception. Lancelot strolled to the front of the CIA building, looked at the security personnel here with interest, and then strode directly into the building. Crash. And Lancelot, who had just walked into the hall, was instantly surrounded by hundreds of members of the CIA's elite tactical team. They pointed their guns at Lancelot. As long as Lancelot moved slightly, they would shoot him without hesitation. Shoot. Facing dozens of guns pointed at him, Lancelot remained calm, as if the guns in front of him didn't exist at all. Who are you? Why did you enter here? A white man who was obviously the captain asked. Paul, the captain of the CIA's elite tactical team, looked at Lancelot indifferently at this moment, and when he saw Lancelot's eyes, he shuddered. It turned out to be a pair of blood-red pupils, eyes as beautiful as rubies, mysterious and beautiful, but definitely not the eyes that humans should have. This guy, what the hell is it? Captain Paul frowned, and a kind of fear rose in his heart, which was the fear of unknown existence. What is this Asian going to do? Do you think this is Chinatown? You can come and go as you please. This is an idiot. Dare to break into the CIA headquarters without authorization. Idiot, fool. The staff who were originally in the hall also stopped at this moment. Looking at Lancelot who broke in without authorization, everyone's eyes seemed to be looking at an idiot, and everyone stopped to watch. Raise your hands. Captain Paul said indifferently, frowning. Soldier, relax, look into my eyes. Lancelot looked indifferent, and then pointed to his own eyes naturally under Captain Paul's puzzled gaze. Lancelot's actions made the soldiers even more nervous. They were ready for battle, and then they inevitably looked into Lancelot's eyes subconsciously. Follow my orders, soldier. Captain Paul also saw Lancelot's ruby eyes, and then he suddenly became dazed. Vaguely, he saw a flying bird with fluttering wings, flying into his own eyes from the eyes of the Asian young man, and then, where he couldn't see, the flying bird instantly covered his brain. Then Paul came back to his senses in an instant, and when he looked at Lancelot again, there was no other emotion in his eyes, only fanaticism. No, it's not just Paul. The eyes of hundreds of soldiers here have turned into fanaticism at this moment. Please do so, sir. The soldiers who surrounded Lancelot all knelt on one knee and said respectfully, control the entire CIA building. Lancelot looked at the elite CIA team of hundreds of people and gave the Geas command. Yes, sir. After Lancelot's order was issued, this elite team showed terrifying fighting power in an instant. The 120 soldiers, divided into 4 groups, began to quickly start from the lobby on the first floor of the CIA and quickly advance tactically. A minute later, Paul's team sent someone to cut off the power supply of the entire building to prevent the news from being passed on, and then began to advance steadily from the first floor, and sporadic gunshots rang out between the floors. 20 minutes later, only the top floor of the CIA remained unbroken by this team in the entire building. Paul's team, every time they control a floor, will disarm the CIA agents, and then leave a few people to control the other noncombatants. Bang bang bang. The top floor of the CIA headquarters, in Senator Humperson's office. At this moment, Congressman Humperson's face was full of horror, and cold sweat was breaking out on his forehead. 20 minutes ago, he had learned that the CIA's elite tactical team had suddenly rebelled, and quickly closed the entire CIA building, blocking the CIA building from the outside world. Contact. As the chief executive of the CIA, Congressman Humperson was horrified to find that he was trapped and died here. Now there are only a few high-level CIA members who came to the meeting, and more than 20 elite CIA agents left beside Congressman Humperson. Relying on these more than 20 CIA agents, they barely resisted the attack outside the door, but Congressman Humperson knew that with these CIA agents alone, sooner or later they would be broken by the elite squad outside. Bastard Paul, are you crazy? Why did you rebel? Senator Humperson yelled at the soldiers outside the door angrily. Mr. Humperson, we have never rebelled, and we have always followed the orders of the commander. In the corridor on the top floor, Paul Yulton, who was fully armed, said seriously while making tactical arrangements for other soldiers. Mary Falk, which bastard ordered you to capture the CIA headquarters? Counselor Humperson roared angrily. He couldn't understand whose order Captain Paul was following when he said to obey the officer's order. I am Senator Humperson, the supreme officer here. I have the right to order you to immediately stop your attack and surrender. Senator Humperson said to the soldiers outside the door with a stern voice. I'm very sorry, Senator Humperson. You don't have the authority to order us. Only the chief can order us. Paul said earnestly and frantically, and then a soldier kicked open the door in front of him. Bang bang bang. In the room, more than 20 detectives fired rapidly at the moment the door was kicked open, and blood holes appeared on the heavily armed soldiers. Die for the commander. The soldier who had been beaten into a sieve seemed to have a group of fiery red birds burning in his eyes at this moment. He shouted incomparably frantically, and then directly ignored the pain on his body and raised his gun to shoot. Bang bang bang. There was a lot of gunfire, and in a short period of time, this extremely fanatical soldier killed more than a dozen CIA agents, and then gradually lost his life, and his whole body collapsed to the ground. Serve the commander to death. Paul Yulton rushed in with a group of elite squads. After seeing the dead soldiers, he immediately saluted the soldiers, and then roared with the same fervor. Surrender, we surrender. Seeing this group of extremely fanatical soldiers, Senator Humperson immediately raised his hands and knelt down on the ground with his head in his hands. Tap, tap, tap. When Congressman Humperson looked at the ground in horror, he suddenly saw someone walking towards him. Remember Humperson, the chief executive of the CIA? Lancelot stopped in front of Mr. Humperson, looking down at Mr. Humperson with blood-red eyes, as if looking down on the ants under his feet, and murmured mockingly. Cub, raise your head. Looking at the trembling Senator Humperson, Lancelot shouted coldly. Counselor Humperson raised his head in horror, and immediately saw a pair of ruby-like eyes, and a red bird flying out of them. Obey my orders until the end of your life. Lancelot didn't have any nonsense, and directly issued an absolute order to Senator Humperson. Obey. Under the absolute order, the trembling eyes of Congressman Humperson became frenzied, seeing Lancelot's gaze, as if looking at the president. In just 20 minutes, the CIA headquarters has been completely controlled by Lancelot. In a secret research base in Virginia, a supersonic plane landed slowly. Lancelot got off the plane, and then he saw Congressman Humperson with a flattering smile on his face. Sir. Senator Humperson walked up to Lancelot respectfully, bowed, and saluted, his eyes full of respect. How is the construction of the base going? Lancelot glanced at Humperson and asked. Sir, fortunately, the mutant evolution home base you requested has been built. Humperson nodded, and began to lead Lancelot into the base that had been prepared for a month. A month ago, after Lancelot used Geas' power to control Senator Humperson, he used Geas to force the entire CIA building and all CIA agents on missions in 3 days. The entire CIA, together with all the agents on missions, were easily controlled by Lancelot. The CIA intelligence system completely serves Lancelot alone. After taking full control of the CIA, Lancelot issued an order to build a secret base for himself, and the entire CIA immediately began to operate efficiently. In just 1 month, Lancelot's order was perfectly executed. Lancelot walked into this base hidden in the depths of the forest. The entire base has the file size of hundreds of football fields, almost hollowing out the entire underground forest. The entire underground base is divided into living areas, training areas, research areas, etc., and other facilities. Countless people are busy in the entire underground base at the moment. Most of these people are the ace agents of the CIA, as well as the most elite tactical team and logistic support personnel of the CIA. But now, each of them has been turned into a state of death under the control of Senator Humferson, and they were secretly sent here to work for Lancelot. Definitely, there are also the top scientists in the world that Lancelot ordered the CIA agent to secretly convene, and the largest number are scientists in genetics. Okay, everyone put away the research in their hands. After arriving at the base, without Lancelot's instructions, Congressman Humferson had already summoned all the scientists. He summoned these scientists into a specially built hall, then bent down respectfully, and personally led Lancelot to stand on the highest stage of the hall. Standing on the high platform, Lancelot, wearing a luxurious robe, looked down at the scientists below. He could see doubts, confusion, astonishment, and fear in the eyes of these scientists. Most of these scientists were kidnapped by CIA agents by force. Within the base, although the scientific research equipment here is very complete, these scientists are anxious all day long and have no intention of researching at all. At this moment, the group of scientists looked at Lancelot standing on the high platform, and they were surprised. Obviously, they did not expect that the chief executive of the secret base turned out to be an Asian, and his eyes, "Serve me as Lord until death." Lancelot didn't pay attention to the inner thoughts of these scientists. In his blood-red eyes, a huge amount of fiery bird appeared. The bird sang, and then rushed into the eyes of all the scientists, subsequently rewriting their thinking. In front of Geas, no matter what kind of thoughts these people have, it is useless. Lancelot can easily stamp their thoughts on them. "I will die for my husband, and I will die until I die." The scientists in the high platform were left with fanaticism after Geas, and they said in unison, "Very good, let's continue your previous research." Lancelot nodded in satisfaction, then walked off the high platform, and under the leadership of Senator Humferson, he turned around the entire base. After walking out of the base again, Lancelot finally couldn't help laughing wildly again. Geas is indeed invincible. After laughing wildly, Lancelot regained his composure, then glanced at the dozen or so CIA executives following him, and gave the order indifferently. "Forget everything about the House of Mutant." As soon as Lancelot finished speaking, the eyes of more than a dozen CIA executives suddenly showed confusion. The Geas in their minds directly erased all their memories of the secret base. For people who have been hit by Geas, erasing memory is just a matter of Lancelot's order. Absolute order can forcibly modify a person's memory, character, thought, and even will. Erasing memory is the easiest thing to do. "Humferson, how are my fellow mutants doing?" After boarding the supersonic plane, Lancelot sat on the luxurious sofa seat, looked at the clouds outside, and said casually, "Sir, Professor X Charles Xavier and Magneto Eric Lyncher are still constantly looking for Hellfire Club's Black Emperor Shaw." Humferson stood respectfully in front of Lancelot and reported in detail. "Still looking for Zhao's trace? Their movements are slower than I imagined." Lancelot frowned slightly and tapped the table with his right hand. After taking control of the CIA, Lancelot has been paying attention to the situation of the X-Men base secretly formed by the CIA. But it is a pity that the plot of the first battle of Mutant is still in the transition period. The young Professor X and Magneto are still flying around the world to track down the conspiracy to destroy the Hellfire Club. It should be 2 months before Black Emperor Shao invaded the X-Men base and the final battle on the small island. 2 months, that is to say, at the time of the decisive battle, I was just able to conduct a secondary people draw. Lancelot said with a smile on his face, thinking to himself. Although he has obtained the Geas Absolute Order, with the horror of the Absolute Order, he can even easily imprint a thought stamp into anyone's brain. However, Lancelot knows that although Geas is very strong, it still has weaknesses. To activate Geas, the opponent needs to look directly into his eyes. If they cannot look directly into his eyes, then Geas will not be effective. And besides Geas, his body is too weak, just the body of an ordinary person. Even with a pistol, he can easily kill himself. That's why, knowing that this is the first battle of Mutant, Lancelot still didn't rush to the X-Men base. "Have Wolverine Logan and Sabretooth Victor been found?" "I'm very sorry, sir, we didn't find any trace of Wolverine Logan, but Sabretooth Victor, we have already found it." Humferson apologized with guilt on his face. "It's not particularly trash." Lancelot gave Humferson a cold look and said indifferently. He had assigned the task of finding Wolverine Logan and Sabretooth Victor a month ago, but until now, a month later, the CIA agents only found traces of Sabretooth Victor. Charles Xavier's brainwave strengthening device is really too slow. It seems that after taking control of Sabretooth, I still have to go to Base X. Canada, Rocky Mountains. This mountain range is undulating, thousands of kilometers long from north to south. It can be called the backbone of North America. There are few people here, dense vegetation, and many beasts. At this moment, a strong white man with a strong back and a waist of 2 meters is walking in the forest. This strong man is extremely muscular, as if cast from copper and iron, and his majestic body is even bigger than a black bear. Strong. The 5 fingernails on both hands were as sharp as knives, and they looked like the sharp claws of a cat. Between breathing, there was a faint tiger-like grunt. It's the mutant Sabretooth Victor. Since Victor escaped from Howlett Manor with his mutant brother Logan in the 18th century, they have been living together and wandering around Tianya. They participated in dozens of wars, including the Civil War, World War I, and World War II. Relying on the ability of the terrifying self-healing factor and their own mutation ability, the two of them are on the battlefield. It is like cutting melons and vegetables, slaughtering human beings like entering the land of no one. The long battle allowed their mutant ability to be developed to the greatest extent. However, because of the fighting, Sabretooth Victor and his mutant brother Logan drifted away. As time went by, Sabretooth Victor began to enjoy the feeling of fighting. He was gradually affected by the wildness carried by his mutant genes, like a beast Sabretooth, eager for killing and blood. But his mutant brother, Logan, has long been tired of fighting, tired of war, and tired of his own mutant ability. Because of this, Sabretooth Victor and Wolverine Logan parted ways after World War II. Sabretooth Victor ran to the Rocky Mountains because of his desire to fight, and began to live a beast-like life. "Logan, my mutant brother, I will find you and kill you." Sabretooth Victor roared with murderous intent on his face. To this day, he still couldn't forget the feeling of being abandoned by his mutant brother. He, who was already bloodthirsty, felt the killing intent towards Wolverine Logan for the first time. Roar. And just when Sabretooth Victor erupted with killing intent and roared wildly, a dull roar suddenly appeared in the forest, and then a black bear with a size of 3 meters rushed out, and then directly rushed to the strong man. Roar. Facing the pounce of the huge black bear, Sabretooth Victor's eyes turned red, and he let out a tiger's roar. Pum. A dull impact sounded, and Sabretooth Victor's body collided with the black bear, and the ground under the feet of each of them was instantly shattered. The black bear roared, and the bear's claws popped out, piercing Sabretooth Victor's shoulder instantly, and Victor also roared, and the sharp claws of both hands pierced the black bear's chest. "Sir, do you want to do it now?" Congressman Humferson asked excitedly in a command vehicle in front of a lake in the Rocky Mountains. It was the first time he saw such a terrifying and powerful mutant. Through the camera on the soldier in the forest, he saw the madness of Sabretooth Victor. One person and one bear just stood there like this. "You scratch me, I bite you," from beginning to end. Neither Victor nor the black bear dodged. With just a few claw strikes, Sabretooth Victor had more than 20 blood holes on his body, and the black bear was even more miserable. Half of his head was directly scratched by Victor, and his body was riddled with holes. The flesh and blood flew, revealing thick joints. This is not what excites Hamferson the most. What really excites Hamferson is the changes in Sabretooth Victor at the moment. His body is healing rapidly, and even the eyeball that was scratched by the black bear is rapidly regenerating. Although he has seen Charles Xavier's telepathy and Raven's shape-shifting ability, seeing Sabretooth's terrifying resilience like a regenerative healing factor at this moment still shocked Humferson. Do it. Lancelot looked at Victor, his eyes full of admiration for Victor. Ever since he crossed over to become a mutant, Lancelot already knew that he was completely tied to the mutant chariot. Lancelot definitely won't do that kind of stupid behavior that is clearly a mutant, but sits crookedly and still thinks he is a human being. He, Lancelot Lee, is a pure, different from human mutant. As for the attitude towards humans, just like the catchphrase that Lancelot produced after awakening Geas, you can get a glimpse. Cub species. That's why, even though Lancelot had already controlled the entire CIA, he still didn't say his name. Cubs who can easily be controlled by themselves do not deserve to know their names. Yes, sir. Humferson nodded respectfully, and then conveyed Lancelot's order through the communication device. Around Victor Sabretooth, hundreds of heavily armed Special Forces soldiers were advancing steadily at this moment. All the soldiers held a specially modified rifle in their hands, and the bullets in the rifle were large-yield narcotic bombs. After learning the location of Sabretooth Victor, Lancelot ordered the CIA logistics department to make these tranquilizer bombs. 4. Just to capture Sabretooth. Whether it's Wolverine Logan or Sabretooth Victor, although they have a self-healing ability close to the regenerative healing factor, their resistance to anesthetics is not high. My god, this is a monster. As the captain of this operation, Paul Ulton's eyes were full of solemnity. He looked at the humanoid monster that brutally tore the black bear in half, and said in a moment of horror, "The smell of human blood. It's really a long-lost smell." Victor Sabretooth twitched his nose a few times, licked his blood-stained paw bloodthirstily, and said with a sinister smile, "Whoosh." Sabretooth landed on all fours, and quickly ran towards a soldier hidden in the woods. His movements were nimble, like a tiger descending a mountain, and like a speeding car, the distance of tens of meters was fleeting. Pissed. Before a soldier could react, his chest was pierced by Sabretooth Victor, and even his heart was crushed by his sharp claws. "I will serve my husband until the end of my life." The soldier whose heart had been pierced suddenly yelled wildly, and then raised the gun in his hand under Sabretooth Victor's astonished gaze. "Fire." Paul Ulton didn't hesitate anymore, and directly gave the order to fire. Blah blah. In the forest, there was a burst of gunshots and roars like tigers. After a few minutes, the gunfire stopped, and the entire forest became calm again. In Virginia, in the secret base named by Lancelot as the House of Mutant Evolution, dozens of scientists looked at the test data in front of them in amazement, and couldn't help being amazed. "Sir, this is really unbelievable. Mr. Sabretooth Victor's gene has undergone an ancestral evolution, which makes his body as powerful as a beast, and has the physical characteristics of a tiger-like beast." Leonard Ernest exclaimed in shock. As the top doctor of human genetics, Dr. Leonard has never seen such a complex genetic structure. Although he only conducted a preliminary analysis, the results still surprised him. The Sabretooth Victor who provided the blood gene sample can no longer be called a human being. Is this Sabretooth Victor really human? Dr. Leonard couldn't help muttering as he looked at the burly figure bound up with a special alloy in front of him. Lancelot took over the test data from Dr. Leonard. Lancelot didn't care about Dr. Leonard's exclamation and questioning, as well as the fear and research desire in his eyes, and just reached out and patted Leonard gently. Dr. Leonard, he is not a human being, but my fellow mutant. In the face of my fellow mutant, everyone should show due respect and love, because my fellow mutant is helping you human beings have blazed a new path of evolution. My fellow mutants should be respected and respected pioneers of evolution, explorers on the path of evolution, and guides of your human evolution. Lancelot's majestic and solemn voice, like a high-ranking king issuing his own decree, made all the humans in the base kneel on one knee, looking at Lancelot fanatically. "Of order, sir." The fiery red flying birds in the eyes of the people in the entire base were burning, and then all the flying birds engraved what Lancelot just said in the deepest part of their minds. Thought stencil. This is a new attempt by Lancelot for Geas. Lancelot can directly burn his words into the minds of the people in the entire base through Geas, just like stamping their thoughts. All human beings will no longer be afraid of Mutant, but will respect and love Mutant from the bottom of their hearts, and will regard Mutant as the pioneer and leader of the human evolution path, just like those in the period of great voyages. Those explorers are generally bright and eye-catching. After being branded with a thought seal by Lancelot, everyone looked at Sabretooth Victor who was tied to a special alloy, and all turned into envy and longing. Mutation and glory. I don't know who said it. And then everyone in the Evolution House base began to shout from the bottom of their hearts. Roar. Fanatical shouts resounded through the base of the Mutant Evolution House, and Victor, who had been anesthetized by a large dose of anesthetic, was also awakened instantly by the sound. Victor Sabretooth was tied to a metal alloy experimental table at this moment. Looking at the unfamiliar environment in front of him, he let out an angry roar, and his whole body began to struggle crazily. Bang bang bang. Under Sabretooth Victor's struggle, the metal belts made of metal alloys began to twist and shapeshift, and the entire experimental table was shaking crazily. "Let my mutant robe be quiet." Looking at Sabretooth Victor, whose muscles were tense and intertwined like steel bars, Lancelot once again showed appreciation. This is the first powerful mutant that Lancelot found. Especially Sabretooth is much stronger than Wolverine Logan's ability. Lancelot wanted to tame the tiger for his own use. As for how to tame it, is there a more suitable taming method in this world than Geas? Inject some anesthetics into our mutant brother and make him quiet. After Lancelot's order was issued, a group of scientists immediately got busy, and Dr. Leonard said even more excitedly, "Roar, roar." With the injection of the anesthetic, Sabretooth Victor's body began to become weak, but even so, his roar was still breathtaking. "Sabretooth Victor, my fellow mutant." After confirming that Sabretooth Victor could not break free, Lancelot walked up to Victor and looked down at the tyrannical Victor. "Mutant, I'm going to kill you." Sabretooth Victor twitched his nose, and immediately smelled the same kind. He was a little quieter, but his eyes were still violent. Because of the mutant genes in his body and his long killing career, began to gradually succumb to animal nature, succumb to bloodthirsty killing, so that his brain was only filled with killing, and he couldn't think normally at all. It seems that you can't think normally for the time being. Lancelot glanced at Victor's tyrannical eyes, shook his head helplessly, and then directly activated Geas. "Serve me as king, serve me as lord, and obey all my commands forever." Lancelot directly issued his absolute order, and a burning bird flew into Sabretooth Victor's eyes in an instant and disappeared. Sabretooth Victor in rage only felt dazed for a moment. When he looked at Lancelot again, the original tyrannical gaze disappeared, replaced by incomparable respect and fanaticism, as if looking at his own king. "Untie Victor." Lancelot glanced at Dr. Leonard and ordered. Dr. Leonard immediately pressed the button, and all the metal straps on the test bench were opened. Sabretooth Victor immediately roared, jumped off with a tiger pounce, and then ran quickly in the room. "Mr. Protection." The security personnel at the base immediately looked at Sabretooth Victor, who was running in the room, as if he was facing an enemy, and rushed into the laboratory quickly, and then protected Lancelot. "It's okay, step back." Lancelot glanced at the soldiers beside him, waved his hands lightly, and everyone retreated immediately. Sabretooth Victor appeared in front of Lancelot again after galloping around, and then knelt down on one knee with his head bowed under the eyes of everyone who was facing an enemy. "My king." Sabretooth Victor's eyes were still violent, but when he looked at Lancelot, he was extremely respectful, and his voice was full of extreme fanaticism. "Victor Sabretooth, you should be a noble and powerful mutant, not a bloodthirsty beast." Lancelot frowned slightly as he saw the tyranny in Sabretooth Victor's eyes. Controlled by himself, but still a bloodthirsty beast. Lancelot doesn't need a bloodthirsty beast. What he needs is a normal mutant with normal intelligence, not a mutant who only knows how to kill. "Victor, use your sanity to control your bloodlust." Lancelot issued the first Geas categorical order to Sabretooth Victor. "I obey, my king." The bright red flying birds in Victor's eyes were burning, and Victor's originally chaotic brain began to become rational again under the influence of Geas at this moment. The original savage nature was replaced by Geas's absolute command, directly expelled from the body. I'm back. The tyranny in Victor's eyes receded like a tide, and his eyes became clear, as if he had just woken up from a big dream, and he murmured, "Hey, brother Victor, would you like a can?" On a spacious road, several heavily armed soldiers were sitting on a pickup truck, and they looked at Sabretooth Victor sitting in the middle with fiery eyes. A soldier even handed Sabretooth Victor a can of beer. "Aaron's, thank you." Victor Sabretooth, who was sitting in the middle, nodded to the soldiers beside him with a smile on his face, and then used his fangs to bite the beer can open, and drank the beer inside in one go. Cool. Mutation, evolution, glory. Several fighters immediately cheered excitedly, and Sabretooth Victor couldn't help but feel a little lost when he saw the longing eyes of these fighters. This is called being alive. This is the honor that Mutant deserves. Sabretooth Victor couldn't help clenching his fists excitedly, and then looked at Lancelot, who was sitting in front of the co-pilot. His eyes were incomparable respect and fanaticism. Victor knew that his dreamlike life these days was bestowed by King Lancelot. For the first time, Victor found peace in his mind, and his mind was no longer full of killing, animalism, and savagery. It is to be able to think like a normal person, to appreciate the beauty of this world, and to be able to have one's own emotions. Similarly, Victor was respected and loved by humans for the first time, making him realize that he is not a monster, a freak. In the past few days at the Mutant Evolution House, Victor often looks back on the past, full of disappointment with his absurd killings. After waking up, looking back at his memory, he realized that it was not him, but a monster called Sabretooth. After 200 years of ignorance, I only know today that I am a James, my mutant brother. If you see me now, you will be surprised. Sabretooth Victor looked into the distance with vicissitudes of life, with a rare smile on his face. Variation and glory. My lord Lancelot hail. Victor Sabretooth couldn't help raising his arms and shouting, and the soldiers around him followed Sabretooth Victor with fanaticism and shouted, "Sir, the X-Men base is coming soon." In the pickup truck at the moment, a CIA agent was driving while reporting to Lancelot, who was sitting in the co-pilot. "Well, I see." Lancelot nodded and continued to flip through the information files in his hand. One of the documents contained various information about Mutant. On this document, Lancelot saw many acquaintances, including Professor X Charles Xavier, Magneto Eric Lyncher, and Mystique Raven. In addition to these mutants, Hellfire Club's Black Emperor Sebastian Shaw, White Queen Emma Ross, Red Devil Azatso, and Torrent Yano's Quest are also impressively listed. Because of Charles Xavier's self-explosion, those politicians have already started to set up their own mutant research institutes, and even started searching for mutants all over the world. Lancelot gently closed the document. The documents on it were shocking, all about mutant research project. Although these projects have not yet been launched due to the lack of mutants, as time goes by, with the power of the superpower, it is really easy to find mutants. At that time, the only thing waiting for Mutant is to become a guinea pig in various mutant laboratories, to be tortured and studied crazily. It's ridiculous that Professor X has been helping mankind fight against the Black Emperor Shao, but he didn't see that his mutant compatriots were about to be imprisoned. Lancelot said with a sneer in his eyes. Lancelot scoffed at Professor X Charles Xavier's attitude towards humans. Charles Xavier may be a qualified mutant professor, but he is not a qualified leader. He blindly compromises with human beings. Even from the bottom of his heart, he still thinks that he is still a human being. It is also because of this that Charles retreats again and again in response to human beings pressing step by step, allowing human beings to arrest Mutant recklessly. In the end, Charles, even the students of Xavier Talent Academy were not kept. "Sir, the X-Men base has arrived." While Lancelot was recalling the actions of Professor X Charles Xavier, the future leader of Mutant, the pickup truck parked in a crude base. It was originally a secret flight base, a secret research institute for experimental supersonic aircraft, but now it has a new identity, the X-Men base. Out of distrust of Mutant, the CIA executives at the time did not prepare bases for mutants such as Charles, but simply isolated the abandoned flight base and used it as the X-Men base proposed by Charles. Lancelot got off the pickup truck, tidied his clothes a little bit, saw that there were only 3 or 2 administrators with big cats and kittens in the whole base, and a tactical team of 20 people. Lancelot couldn't help but shook his head. The defense of the base in front of him is like a child's play. Not to mention Haiwang Xiao. Even the top human mercenaries can come and go with ease. "Victor." Lancelot turned his head and called, and Sabretooth Victor jumped out of the car in time, and then stood behind Lancelot. "My king, please order." Sabretooth Victor looked at Lancelot frantically, and also adjusted his black suit. His face was full of excitement. He already smelled the same kind of breath. "Let's go. Let's meet our mutant comrades." Lancelot walked directly into the base, and in front of Lancelot, several agents from the X-Men base quickly surrounded Lancelot. Roar. Facing the siege of agents, Sabretooth Victor immediately stood in front of Lancelot, glared at these agents, and let out a roar of tigers. "Relax, Victor." Lancelot patted Sabretooth Victor on the shoulder lightly, and said with a chuckle, "Obey, my king." Following Lancelot's words, Sabretooth Victor immediately relaxed, and then stood respectfully behind Lancelot. "Continue with your previous mission, soldier." Lancelot glanced at the soldiers surrounding him, and said indifferently. Following Lancelot's voice, these soldiers were in a daze for a moment. Then they all put down their guns, passed by Lancelot, returned to their original positions, and continued their guarding tasks. But Lancelot didn't even look at these soldiers, and took Sabretooth Victor to wander around the base at leisure. At this moment, in an ordinary building in the X-Men base, the living room in the lobby on the first floor has been transformed into Mutants' party area at this moment. Inside the room, the lights were bright, several young people were releasing their vitality recklessly, and a noisy party was being held here. When Lancelot came here, he saw Salvador, the dragonfly girl, who was booed by everyone, dancing a sweet dance. Several men's eyes were shining, and their faces were flushed. Mystique Raven looked at the men here with contempt, and couldn't help curling her lips, and said, "Look, this is a man. Whether it's a mutant or a human, it's a virtue. Hey, Raven, it's your turn to be a good-looking one." "Raven, Raven, Raven. Mystique, Mystique." Several young men heard Raven's taunt, and several men immediately started booing again. They knew very well about Raven's mutant ability. "It looks good. Does it look good like this?" Raven drank the red wine in the glass in one gulp, and then his whole body turned into blue skin, and he looked up at his companion. "Raven, don't be such a spoiler." "Yeah, Raven, honestly you scare me." After seeing Raven's blue skin, several young mutants were immediately discouraged. Even Hank, who had a crush on Raven, turned his head away at this moment. "Well, what you need is a normal girl, not a blue monster." Looking at the expressions of everyone, Raven, who was smiling, lowered his head for a moment, looking at his own blue skin, Raven's gaze full of disgust. "This body is simply a masterpiece of heaven. Why do you dislike it?" Just when Mystique Raven was depressed, a strange but full of admiration sounded in the room. The young mutants who were having a carnival all stopped their movements and looked for the sound, only to see a handsome Asian guy in a gorgeous robe standing in the room at the moment, looking at Raven with admiration. Click. After seeing the stranger, Beast Hank jumped directly from the light pipe, then turned off the light and opened the curtains in the room. The originally dark room suddenly became brighter. "Who are you?" Siren Sean Cassidy was already a little drunk. He looked at Lancelot with sleepy eyes, walked up to Lancelot, was stunned for a long time, and finally asked. Lancelot ignored the questioning of the young mutant siren. He only had Mystique Raven in his eyes at the moment. Lancelot directly passed Sean Cassidy and walked towards Raven. "Mayor Falk, I'm talking to you." Sean Cassidy, who was ignored, felt a little embarrassed and immediately yelled at Lancelot. However, just as Sean Cassidy cursed, he saw a strong man appearing in front of him. His 2-meter-tall figure was like an iron tower, blocking him. Before he could react, his neck was strangled. Victor grabbed Sean Cassidy's neck with cold eyes, then lifted it up like a chick, and the sharp claws of his left hand gradually extended. Victor. It wasn't until this moment that Lancelot finally took his eyes off Raven and waved his hand at Victor. Boom. Under Lancelot's signal, Victor loosened Sean Cassidy's neck casually, and Sean Cassidy immediately hit the floor heavily. Are you a mutant? It wasn't until Victor released Sean Cassidy's neck that these young mutants woke up like a dream. Raven looked at Lancelot's eyes in astonishment at this moment. Those blood-red eyes were like rubies, even more dazzling than real gems. Raven lost his mind for a moment. As you can see, I'm also a mutant. You can call me Lancelot, or Mr. Lancelot. Lancelot stood in front of Raven, looking at Raven's body. At this moment, Raven was covered with blue scales, and her blue skin made her look completely different from the people around her. Looking at Raven's blue body, Lancelot's eyes were full of admiration. The blue body was covered with fish scale-like lines. The scale-like lines on his body looked pleasing to the eye, and compared to the body of a human female, Raven's body at this moment is graceful and varied, with a protruding front and a curved back, and his figure and flexibility surpass a human female by a large margin. What a perfect body. Lancelot admired sincerely. Mr. Lancelot, are you talking about me? Raven heard Lancelot's sincere admiration, and looked at Lancelot a little excitedly for a while. It was the first time she heard someone compliment her blue body. Raven could see that the handsome Asian guy in front of him was a sincere compliment, which made Raven, who was extremely inferior to his appearance, full of gratitude to Lancelot. For a long time, Raven has been asked by Charles Xavier to hide her blue body to avoid causing panic among humans. Over time, Raven began to hate her blue skin, and she began to dream of having normal fair skin like a human girl. However, despite loathing her own body, Raven still wants to be recognized by others for her blue body. And now, she heard it. Definitely. Beautiful girl, you shouldn't hate your body. It's so beautiful in my eyes. Lancelot gently stroked Raven's face and said sincerely, for Lancelot, Mystique Raven is a dream companion, not only because of her ability to shapeshift to become any woman, but also because of her size and flexibility beyond human women. In the words of Lancelot, what you want is Avatar. Lancelot, are you the new mutant recruited by the professor? Beast Tank was jealous when he saw the way Raven looked at Lancelot. He walked to Raven's side, looked at Lancelot with hostility, and asked again, unfortunately, your professor abandoned me. Lancelot glanced at Hank, his face slightly indifferent, and his tone was still full of resentment towards Professor X and Magneto for abandoning him. I'm very curious about the X-Men established by Charles, but today, you guys have disappointed me. Lancelot turned his head to look at the young mutants, and said with some disappointment. He looked at Mutant, Mystique Raven, Beast Tank, Siren Sean Cassidy, Shockwave Alex, Dragonfly Salvador, and Darwin in the room one by one. The mutant abilities of these people are undoubtedly very powerful, but their mutant level has only reached the level of mutant. Epsilon, Delta, Gamma, Beta, Alpha, Omega are the most orthodox ability levels for mutant. But Lancelot does not plan to follow this set of ability levels, but divides them into level 1 mutant, level 2 mutant, level 3 mutant, level 4 mutant, level 5 mutant, and the strongest level 6 mutant. Most of the abilities of the mutants in front of them have reached level 3 to 4, but the way they use their abilities is still at level 1. And Wolverine Logan, Sabretooth Victor, has reached the pinnacle of level 4 and is about to enter the ranks of level 5 mutant. Professor X, Magneto, Black Emperor Shao, White Queen Emma, and others have reached the 5th level of mutant, which can be regarded as the first echelon of mutant. And Lancelot's mutant ability, theoretically, can only be regarded as a first level mutant, but who let him have a system plug-in? The ability of Pupil Geas is enough to make Lancelot rank among the first echelon of 5 level mutants. My fellow mutants, I'm very disappointed in you. In the hall where the X-Men were, Lancelot looked at these mutants with a pair of eyes and said disappointedly. Disappointed. Raven frowned when he saw the undisguised disappointment in Lancelot's eyes. The other mutants, Alex, Sean Cassidy, Hank, and Darwin glared at Lancelot even more. As young people, they think that they are very outstanding, even different, and they have even gotten used to the strange eyes of humans looking at monsters in the past month. But at this moment, seeing Lancelot, who is also a mutant, look so contemptuously at him, it makes them feel unacceptable. If it wasn't for Sabretooth Victor, who stood behind Lancelot like an iron tower and exuded a bloody and fierce beast aura, they would have retorted at Lancelot long ago. Aren't you convinced? What do you think is a mutant? A strange species that appeared among humans? A freak? Lancelot glanced at a few people and couldn't help but sneered. Compared with what happened to Lancelot 3 years after becoming a mutant, these mutants were still flowers in the greenhouse, and they didn't even realize how different mutants were from humans. What is mutant? Mystique Raven fell into deep thought. Although she has been with Professor X and graduated from Oxford University, she is considered a top student, but she has never thought about this question. Professor X has been teaching her to hide herself so that she can integrate into human society. Professor X never taught her what a mutant is. The one with the ability that is different from ordinary people is the mutant. Although Alex Shockwave was taciturn, he was good at thinking. He looked at the young Asian American who didn't look particularly tall in front of him, and said his answer. An ability that is different from ordinary people can only be called a super ability, but not a mutant. Lancelot looked at all the mutants here again in disappointment, and directly refuted Alex's statement. Mutant, the reason why it is called mutant, is derived from the mutant gene awakening in human genes. From ancient times to the present, mutant genes have been buried in the depths of human genes. As time goes by, the mutant genes in human body gradually awakening, and mutant was born. Lancelot spoke directly to mutant's answer. Strictly speaking, everyone has a mutant gene in their body, but most people will not be able to awaken this gene in their entire lives, and a few lucky ones, by chance, awakening the mutant gene in their body, so as to master the mutant gene in the body of ordinary people or ability. This is the spontaneous mutation and evolution of human beings, which cannot be stopped. Lancelot's voice was full of emotion, and his passionate voice echoed in the room, making several young mutants feel their blood boil. Mutation and evolution. Raven's eyes showed a hint of understanding. No wonder Professor X often talked about mutation and evolution. It turned out that the mutant's ability was mutated through a recessive mutant gene among humans. That's right, mutation and evolution. Lancelot walked in front of Raven, looking at Raven's graceful blue body, with a smile on his face. There is a difference between mediocrity and genius among human beings. Geniuses are like Einstein and Howard Stark. They are smart and intelligent, and there is no one in a million. The mediocrity is blind and ignorant, muddling along. And we, the evolutionary geniuses among human beings, awaken mutants with mutated genes. We are the pioneers and revolutionaries of human evolution. It is the natural selection of evolution, 1 in a million. The existence of mutant demonstrates one of the genetic evolution paths in the future evolution path of human beings. We are using life and our own existence to explore and open up the evolutionary path for human beings. Lancelot's words became passionate. Although he was not an orator, his understanding of mutant gave him a high-level view, and his speech was even more enlightening. Are we the evolutionary pioneers of mankind? Explorers on the path of evolution. We are born noble. Are we evolutionary geniuses different from humans? Mutation and evolution? In the room, because of Lancelot's passionate speech, Alex, Sean Cassidy, Hank, and Darwin, who were originally hostile to Lancelot, also gave up their inner prejudices at this moment, and began to be mobilized by Lancelot. And Salvador, who has always been engaged in such a humble job as a dancer, is even more excited at this moment, looking at Lancelot with fiery eyes. For the first time, she was regarded as a genius, a great pioneer, an explorer, not a human freak, a lowly dancer. And Raven looked at Lancelot adoringly like a little girl. Whether it is Raven, Alex, Darwin, or others, they all carefully hide their mutant ability, fearing that they will be discovered by their human family and friends, and then be regarded as freaks, monsters, and the like. And now after hearing Lancelot's words, they were all proud of their status as mutants. Mutants are the pioneers and revolutionaries of human evolution. They are using their own lives, existence, and even their abilities to open up a broad road for the evolution of the human race and pioneer human evolution. My mutant compatriots, the identity of mutant represents a kind of glory. We have embarked on the path of evolution. We are the leaders of the path of human evolution, and we are geniuses above billions of mediocre human beings. We are unique. We carry evolution and glory. Remember, my fellow mutants, are we monsters? Or freak? No, no, no. On the contrary, we are geniuses beyond human beings, the future of human evolution. We are supposed to be born noble and admired by all people. Variation and glory. Lancelot delivered a heartfelt, passionate speech. Raven and others were all shocked by Lancelot's variant glory theory, followed by a sense of heartfelt recognition. So, Raven, do you still think your mutant ability is a burden? Lancelot walked up to Raven, gently stroked Raven's face, and asked with a smile on his face. Mutation and glory. Raven looked at Lancelot excitedly, and couldn't help but read out Lancelot's words. You are obviously so outstanding. You are at the forefront of the evolutionary path, and you have become the great pioneers and explorers of the evolutionary path. But he doesn't think about making progress. He is willing to be with the mediocre human beings around him, and even hides his mutant ability, which is really short-sighted and not thinking about making progress. Lancelot looked at the excited crowd. A look of disappointment appeared in his eyes, and he reprimanded him bluntly. Your mutant ability is the key to unlock the evolutionary path. God has personally delivered the key to you. If you can shape-shifting, use it, experience it, and understand it. Lancelot glanced at Raven, and then walked in front of Darwin. Extreme environments are where you should be, not a black cab driver. You deserve a bigger future. You should conquer extreme environments, constantly adapt to extreme environments, and explore how humans can survive and evolve in extreme environments. You should be a guiding light in the field of human evolution, a great explorer, and a practitioner. Lancelot clenched his fist with his right hand and slammed it on Darwin's body. After Darwin was attacked, his body skin automatically evolved into a leather material. Since you can make screaming sound waves, you should study it and develop it in depth. Those human cubs know how to use sonar and sound waves, but you are complacent after receiving a gift from heaven. It is really reckless. Lancelot walking in front of Sean Cassidy, the sea monster, he scolded unceremoniously. If you can release the shockwave, then try to control it and analyze it in depth. If you can fly, then you can understand your own body structure and see which organs are used for flight. If you have a super high IQ, use it. Lancelot glanced at Shockwave Alex, Dragonfly Salvador, and Beast Hank in turn, then shook his head slightly and continued. My fellow mutants, you are supposed to be a group of great pioneers and explorers, but look now. What have you done with your abilities? Broken glass, stepping yourself into a fish tank, hiding yourself, cut off the statue. You are bringing dust to the entire mutant race. Remember, mutations represent evolution, but also a kind of glory. Release them, understand them, and explore them. You will become the guiding lights of mankind, and history will remember your achievements. The theory of mutant glory is the truest thought in Lancelot's heart. Now that he has obtained the mutant ability that human beings dream of, then continue to go on, explore, study in depth, and overcome obstacles on the unprecedented evolutionary path until reaching the end of the evolutionary path. Among these mutants, Lancelot is most optimistic about Raven and Darwin. The mutant ability of these two people is completely underestimated. The first is Mystique Raven. Its variant ability is shapeshifting. This kind of shapeshifting is shapeshifting from the shape, appearance, and genetics. Even Raven's shapeshifting can be reproduced together with clothes. If it is fully developed, even other mutants' ability can be reproduced. The Sentinel in Reversal of the Future has the ability to reproduce other mutants at will because of the addition of Mystique's genes. Even in the future, Raven will be able to shapeshift into other body alienation mutants and can stretch out bone claws when she becomes Wolverine. This shows that her body already has the mutant ability of Wolverine Logan, but Raven has not developed it before. Unable to use out. Although it is impossible to replicate Professor X's telepathy, Magneto's magnetic field control, Black Emperor Zhao's energy absorption, and other variant abilities, as long as it is a mutant with an alienated body, Raven can perfectly shapeshift it. In addition to Raven's variant ability, the most underestimated here is Darwin's adaptive evolution. He can constantly adapt to evolution according to the environment, allowing the body to evolve adaptive organs on its own. In theory, as long as he is given time, he can adapt even to the space environment. However, it is a pity that before he could perfectly control the mutant ability, he was directly strangled in the cradle by the Black Emperor Zhao, and became the target of the blood sacrifice of the first generation of X-Men. For Lancelot, Darwin is not suitable for synthesis as a warrior. He should be in various extreme environments, use his ability to adapt to them, and then evolve specific organs, and then use scientific means to perfect these specific organs. A replica of it is transplanted into other people's bodies. Even not just adapting to the environment, Darwin can also adapt to various human diseases, and then produce various antibodies in the body. At that time, Darwin will be the founder and pioneer of medical miracles. The ability adapted to evolution can be said to be a level 5 mutant ability. As long as he can grow up, Darwin will be a proper level 5 mutant, and it will be difficult to die by then. For Lancelot, the mutant variant ability, as long as it is well developed, can become a powerful mutant. Only garbage mutant, no garbage mutant ability. Even mutant abilities like toad people and quill people can still become strong as long as they are well developed. The reason why toad people and quill people behave rubbish is that they have insufficient development of their own mutant abilities. And even a mutant ability like Magneto, because of the development of Magneto, was dubbed the Iron King, forcibly developing an Omega ability to a level that can only reach the peak level of a level 5 mutant. It's just too much. Obviously possessing the power to easily control the Earth's magnetic field, but it is used to control metals. Isn't it good to control the magnetic force? Isn't the super electromagnetic gun fragrant? Magneto still suffers from being uneducated. Lancelot couldn't help complaining secretly. Can we really be respected by people? In the room, the young first-generation X-Men looked at each other, and after hearing Lancelot's passionate speech, they couldn't help their blood boiling. Especially when Lancelot described the future of mutant for them, they were even more excited. What an honor it is to lead mankind on the path of evolution and become a great explorer and pioneer by using its own mutant ability. The era of evolutionary takeoff is coming. We mutants are the first group of explorers to travel in the sea of evolution. Just like Columbus once discovered the New World, the road of evolution also needs us to discover and explore. Lancelot said with a calm voice and a firm tone. Come, follow me, and you will be honored and respected. Lancelot stretched out his hands, looking at the group of mutants with fiery eyes. This time Lancelot did not use the power of Geas. For this group of younger generation colleagues who are still in a period of confusion and can't find a future direction at all, Lancelot only needs to be their guide, so that they can follow him voluntarily. Speaking of which, Lancelot would also like to thank Professor X. The professor at the moment is not the wise old man in the future. The current Professor X is young and energetic, and he is even more indifferent to what happened to Mutant. The reason for confronting He Huangshao is just to prevent this beautiful world from ending so early. As for setting future goals for the mutants, helping them get through the period of confusion and difficulties, Professor X has never thought about it. It is also because of this that Lancelot just came here to publish a mutant glory theory, which touched the hearts of these young X-Men, and even aroused their approval and favor for Lancelot. As for such remarks, Lancelot could have come up with a lot of them in his previous life. They were nothing more than Zhong-Er, but were there not many people Zhong-Er in the previous life? Lancelot, I'm honored to meet you. After Lancelot sent out the invitation, Raven walked out without hesitation and looked at Lancelot with fanaticism. Then, with graceful steps, he walked to Lancelot's side and gently grabbed Lancelot's right hand. Hey, Raven, you can't do this. Aren't we a team? Beast Hank, who had an ambiguous attitude towards Raven, was the first to dissuade him. Yeah, Raven, aren't we a team? Siren Sean Cassidy also agreed. Although he also agreed with Lancelot's words in his heart, he didn't want to follow Lancelot because he didn't know what kind of variant ability Lancelot has. Compared with Lancelot, who knows nothing, he still has telepathy and Professor X and Magneto, who can control metal, which is stronger and more knowledgeable. Yeah, Raven, you can't just leave like this. Even Shockwave's taciturn Alex admonished him. Everyone, we are indeed a team, but if you look at the eyes of the people around you, what do you see? Disgust, fear, discrimination. Raven frowned slightly and subconsciously clenched Lancelot's right hand. Shunshing said. Raven's words silenced Beast Hank and the others. Although they lived here for a month, they were like monkeys in a zoo, often being teased, ridiculed, and even discriminated against by the people in the base. For a month, what they faced was the disgust, fear, and deep malice of human beings. So they used the party to numb themselves and let themselves forget the strange eyes of the people around them. At this moment, their scars were ruthlessly uncovered by Raven, making them unable to stop Raven's decision anymore. Mr. Lancelot, I think you were right. I am not suitable for fighting. As you said, extreme environments are the most suitable place for me. Darwin, who had not spoken all this time, also stepped out at this moment and stood by Lancelot. To the left, Hank. Raven looked towards Beast Hank expectantly and encouragingly, but Hank just shook his head slightly after hesitating for a moment. The current Hank still thinks that he is a human being, but a human being with bigger feet. Hank rejects the identity of mutant from the bottom of his heart. Raven, this is a variant inhibitor I developed using your cell gene. Although Beast Hank did not agree to Raven's invitation, he still walked up to Raven and handed a needle to Raven. The potion exudes blue light. Thank you, Hank, but I don't think I need it anymore. Raven gave Beast Hank a grateful look, shook his head slightly, and said, Mutation suppression potion? Lancelot looked at the potion in Raven's hand with an interested smile on his face. Hank, if possible, I would like to get all the research data of this potion. Lancelot glanced at Beast Hank and then said, Research data? Beast Hank was stunned for a moment, and then looked at Raven. He felt that this was researched using Raven's cells, and Raven's opinion should be sought. Under Raven's nod, Beast Hank brought Lancelot and others to his laboratory, and then handed over all the information about the variant inhibitor to Lancelot. Mr. Lancelot, is this potion important to you? Raven couldn't help but ask after seeing the smile on Lancelot's face. No, this potion has no effect on me, but it is very useful to those mutants whose bodies are alienated. Lancelot handed the potion and research materials to Victor Sabretooth, meaning said deeply, Let's go. It's time for us to leave here. Lancelot took a deep look at Beast Hank, and then left with Raven and others. Beast Hank just thinks that he has developed a variant inhibitor that can suppress his variant ability. But Lancelot, who is familiar with the plot, knows that the one developed by Beast is not a mutant inhibitor at all. Its correct name should be called mutant growth hormone. It is because of this mutant growth hormone that Beast Hank has been dissimulated from the original 2 feet to the whole body, becoming Beast Hank, and at the same time gained the strength and speed of a beast. As Lancelot said, this potion has no effect on himself, or even on Raven, but it is enough for an alienated mutant like Sabretooth Victor to directly metamorphosis into a 5th level mutant. X-Men base. At the previous CIA high-level meeting, Counselor Francis overcame all opinions and agreed to Agent Moore's request to use mutant to deal with mutant. Therefore, he also became the top person in charge of the mutant base as a matter of course. However, he, the top person in charge, is not worthy of his name at this moment. Because, regarding how to recruit mutant, Professor Charles Xavier didn't allow himself to intervene at all. What's even more hateful is that this Charles has a mutant ability to manipulate the brain, and he can't get rid of his mind control at all. Every time he had a disagreement with him, he would use that terrifying mutant ability to change his mind and make himself follow his. The terrifying ability, the terrifying mutant, are they really the future of mankind? Genetic mutation? What kind of genetic mutation will produce such an ability? Counselor Francis, who was sitting in the office, sighed helplessly, and then said worriedly. This member Francis is the only person in the entire CIA who doesn't have much prejudice against mutant, but after witnessing mutant's terrifying power again and again, he still inevitably falls into fear. Even in the past few days, Counselor Francis has been having nightmares every night. In his dream, he is surrounded by all kinds of grotesque and ugly mutants, and he is a human animal locked in a zoo. Even after I learned about mutant, I am so afraid of it. Those high-level council members who are already afraid of mutant are probably even more uneasy. Counselor Francis smiled wryly. Even he was so afraid of mutant's power, the high-ranking members of the council were probably even more afraid and fearful of mutant's attitude. Boom. Just when Counselor Francis was full of confusion and began to feel fear of mutant, the door of Francis' office was kicked open. Then Francis saw in astonishment that a strong man like an iron tower walked into the office. Who are you? How did you get in? Francis looked at the burly man in front of him in astonishment. After entering the room, the burly man stood aside, and a handsome young Asian man walked in, which made Francis frown. Wrinkle. Although he was not a racist, he was still a little surprised to see that this young Asian man was the head of all the people who came in. Huh? Raven Darwin. Just as Francis was about to continue asking, he saw 2 familiar faces, Raven and Darwin from the X-Men, which made Francis even more puzzled. Those who came in were Lancelot, Victor Sabretooth, Mystique Raven, and Darwin. Cub, look straight at me. At this moment, Lancelot looked at Counselor Francis indifferently, and said with a cold tone and aloofness. Contrary to the amiable expression when talking with mutant before, Lancelot at this moment is like a king, with a pair of eyes exuding full majesty. Lancelot. Raven and Darwin also saw Lancelot in such a posture for the first time, and were a little dazed for a while. Counselor Francis subconsciously turned his head to look at Lancelot again, and then Francis saw a pair of ruby-like eyes. In this pair of exquisite eyes, there is also a fiery red bird flying high. Follow my orders. Lancelot gazed directly at Francis. Of order. The light in Francis' eyes turned into frenzy in an instant, and he saluted Lancelot respectfully. Find out all the information that records mutant. Lancelot looked down at the respectful Francis and ordered. A red light flashed across Francis' eyes, and he quickly took out a document from the safe. My lord, what is this? Sabretooth Victor looked down at the document in Lancelot's hand, and couldn't help asking curiously. Our comrades. Lancelot glanced at the document in his hand, with a smile on his face, and said meaningfully. This time I came to the X-Men base, on the one hand to see these young X-Men, and on the other hand, to get a document in the base. Mutant information file. This document is all the mutant information detected by Professor X using the brainwave strengthening device. Every time a mutant is detected, Professor X will record it, and it is detailed. Even its variant ability is recorded. Among them is Lancelot's name and the variant ability. Lancelot flipped through this document, seeing the introduction of the mutant ability behind his name, and couldn't help but feel deeply moved. Name, Lancelot, Asian, both parents died, wandering in Lower Manhattan, New York for 3 years, mutant ability, red eyes, has a pair of beautiful ruby eyes, no other effects, pass. Looking at the big X behind his name, Lancelot was a little dazed for a moment. If he hadn't traveled through time and awakened the god-level pupil technique lottery system, this record would probably have included everything about him. Turning over the page that recorded himself, Lancelot's eyes suddenly lit up, and at the same time Sabretooth Victor's tiger body shook. Name, James Logan, Canadian, unknown date of birth, irritable personality, wolf-like, mutant ability, lone wolf, able to stretch out bone claws from his body, tried to recruit, failed. Logan. Sabretooth Victor looked at a photo on the file, and his emotions suddenly became agitated. His hands couldn't help stretching out sharp claws, his gaze became extremely complicated, and his voice became murderous. Steaming. Victor. Lancelot turned to glance at Sabretooth Victor, and after hearing Lancelot's words, Victor calmed down for a moment. My lord, I'm really sorry. After seeing my mutant brother, I got a little emotional. Sabretooth Victor smiled wryly and bowed to apologize, and the sharp claws that had been stretched out slowly disappeared. Lancelot just glanced at Victor, and then looked down at the document in his hand again. Name, Matthew Harlan. Mutant ability, Toad. Mutant effect, deformed head, able to release a long tongue, low self-esteem, expelled by his family as a freak after awakening, full of hatred for humans. Looking at the picture of Mutant above, Lancelot can tell at a glance that he is a Toad who appeared in reversal of the future. His deformed and huge head and toad-like eyes make him incompatible with normal people, and he is even attracted by himself. Abandoned by his family, Charles has not yet grown into the future Professor X. Looking at past behind the Toad Man, he shook his head slightly. This Toad Man was abandoned by Professor X because of his deformed appearance. Lancelot flipped through several documents in a row, and they were all deformed mutants. Most of these mutants had a very bad life. However, Lancelot also spotted some familiar faces, members of the mutant squad formed by the future Wilhelm Stryker, Zero Agent David North, Phantom John, Bradley who can control electronic devices with his mind, future Wolverine's lover Silver Fox Carla, Gambit Remy LeBeau. It is a pity that these people are all scattered in various countries, too far away from the X-Men base, so Professor X and Magneto just recorded it and did not go to recruit it. This gave Lancelot a chance. Let's go, we've got what we need. Lancelot glanced down at the documents in his hand, and then led Sabretooth Victor, Raven, and Darwin out of X-Base. Lancelot's mutant evolution home base. The two vehicles drove through the entrance of the base and entered the underground base, which covers an area of huge amounts of ground. Then on a huge amounts of platform, the vehicle stopped, and Lancelot walked down with Raven and Darwin. Is this the house of mutant evolution you were talking about? Lancelot, it's really too big. Raven looked at the huge amounts of base in front of him. The shock on his face was beyond words. The base in front of him is more than 100 times larger than the X base that Raven and the others were in before, and the complete internal facilities and personnel make Raven amazed. The whole base, no matter in terms of facilities, personnel, logistics, etc., is more complete than the previous X base, even luxurious. Raven and Darwin couldn't help being amazed by the security personnel, scientific researchers, logistics support personnel, etc., and looked at each other in blank dismay. Welcome, Miss Raven and Mr. Darwin. The glory of mutant will bloom because of you. While Raven and Darwin were constantly looking at the House of Evolution, a CIA agent came over and looked at them with admiration and respect. He held two special medals in his hands. The future of mankind will be dominated by you. You are great pioneers and explorers. Please allow me to pay you the highest respect, variation, and glory. The agent was so excited that he handed the medal to Raven and Darwin at the same time. Raven lowered his head and glanced at the medal in his hand. It was a beautifully shaped medal. On the front of the medal was a fiery red flying bird. On the back of the medal was a crystal clear blood red eye. Words. What is this? Raven looked at the exquisite medal in his hand in surprise, turned to Lancelot, and asked, This is the Medal of Evolution, which means evolution and glory. Lancelot briefly explained, and then took Raven and Darwin to the core research area of the base. This is the treatment mutant should have. Raven followed behind Lancelot, with excitement and joy still lingering in his eyes. Along the way, everyone's eyes are full of respect. There is no disgust, no fear, no discrimination, and some only respect. For the first time, Raven felt that a world without discrimination and disgust was so close to him. My king. When Raven was a little lost, Lancelot had already arrived at the core area of the base, a cutting-edge genetic laboratory dedicated to research on how to better develop mutant. At this moment, in the laboratory, after seeing Lancelot, all the scientists put down their work and bowed. Dr. Leonard, how is Victor's self-healing factor research going? Lancelot nodded slightly, then looked at Dr. Leonard, the head of the genetic laboratory, and asked, My lord, we have isolated the self-healing factor in Mr. Victor's cells, and through experimental calculations, this self-healing factor is a very miraculous gene repair factor, which can repair any damage to the body. Even according to our calculations, even if only the head of Mr. Victor remains, as long as the self-healing factor is sufficient, Mr. Victor can even grow a body again. Dr. Leonard was extremely excited at the moment, and said eloquently. After Lancelot conquered Sabretooth, he asked Sabretooth to provide a blood sample for Dr. Leonard's laboratory research. Lancelot hoped that this laboratory could assist in the development of Sabretooth's variant ability based on Sabretooth's sample gene. Now, though, Lancelot has a better way. Please take a look at this information. I want you to calculate whether this potion has an effect on mutant mutants. Lancelot directly interrupted Dr. Leonard, who was talking endlessly, and then asked Sabretooth Victor to share the drug. The research data recording the variant mutant growth hormone was handed over to Dr. Leonard. 2 hours later, Dr. Leonard found Lancelot excitedly again, even more excited than before. My lord, the person who created this potion is definitely a genius. Dr. Leonard held a research document in his hand, and said in an excited and appreciative tone. Dr. Leonard had already thoroughly studied all the materials on the mutant growth hormone, and he was immediately astonished. According to his research, the mutant growth hormone was the purest gene catalyst without any side effects. It can catalyze special mutations in the body from the genetic level, allowing them to directly become complete mutants. The evolution of human beings does not happen overnight. The same is true for mutant mutations. It takes a long time to adapt and develop the awakening variant ability step by step. Finally, the variant ability changes from weak to strong, and finally, tends to be stable. But this potion directly omits the process of slowly adapting and slowly developing, and advances the mutant ability to maturity in one step. However, this variant mutant growth hormone has a disadvantage. That is, it can only be applied to the variant gene of the body alienation type. Dr. Leonard concluded in conclusion. My king, I beg you to let me use this potion. Sabretooth Victor, who was following Lancelot, after hearing Dr. Leonard's introduction, knelt down in front of Lancelot with fiery eyes, pleading said. Although Sabretooth Victor has regained his sanity and wisdom, he pursues a strong personality in his bones, so he can't wait to experiment with the ability of the mutant growth hormone. As you wish, Victor. With a smile on Lancelot's face, he agreed directly to Sabretooth Victor's request. This potion was originally prepared by Lancelot for those mutants with alienated bodies. Even if Sabretooth Victor didn't beg, he would let Sabretooth Victor test the effect of this potion. Mr. Victor, please follow me. With Lancelot's nod, Dr. Leonard respectfully brought Sabretooth Victor into a specially made room. Afterwards, Dr. Leonard handed the mutant growth hormone in his hand to Sabretooth Victor, and after sticking the induction patches on Victor's sturdy body one by one, he quickly left the room. Mr. Victor, please always report your feelings after the injection. This will be very helpful to the mutants in the future. Dr. Leonard stood in a testing room, looking at the front of him with a dozen other scientists, various instruments, and then said, in the special alloy room, Victor Sabretooth was sitting on the metal bed at the moment, watching Lancelot in front of the observation window with fanaticism and respect, and then respectfully waiting for Lancelot's order. Let's go, Victor. Looking at the observation window, Lancelot nodded to Sabretooth Victor. Laugh. Sabretooth Victor didn't have any hesitation and directly pierced the needle in his hand into the artery of his right arm. After fully injecting the mutant growth hormone into the body, Sabretooth pulled out the needle directly, and the original needle hole was restored in an instant. Mr. Victor, how do you feel now? In front of the observation window, Dr. Leonard asked while turning on the video recorder. I feel my body is very relaxed, as if a heavy burden has been lifted. Sabretooth Victor felt his body silently, with a rare look of relief on his face, and Sabretooth's sharp claws gradually retracted go back. The originally strong body seemed to have shrunk, becoming like a normal person. Even his size had shrunk from a 2-meter 2-meter giant to 1.8 meters. The thick hair on the face has also disappeared. I don't seem to be able to feel my mutant ability anymore. Victor Sabretooth looked at his body and said with surprise on his face. This was the first time that Victor felt that he had become like an ordinary person, without vigorous vitality, without a strong body, and even the muscles he once had no longer existed. This feeling made Sabretooth Victor very uncomfortable, and at the same time he had a deeper understanding of his mutant ability. Mutate ability, achieve yourself as a Sabretooth. And without the mutant ability, he is just a weak, ordinary person. Lancelot stood in front of the observation window, quietly looking at Sabretooth Victor's appearance at the moment. Victor in this appearance is very similar to Sabretooth Victor in Wolverine 1, and he is completely different from the 2-meter giant before. Roar. 5 minutes later, the originally relaxed Sabretooth Victor suddenly let out a heart-piercing roar. His facial features were distorted and ferocious, and the veins on his forehead were bulging. It was obvious that he was suffering from great pain. Mr. Victor, report your information. Dr. Leonard looked at the various data displayed by the instrument in front of him with the same serious expression at this moment, and asked again. It's painful, as if the whole body is being torn apart inch by inch. Sabretooth Victor let out a painful roar, and then the whole body began to undergo changes visible to the naked eye. Kakaka. There were bursts of bone explosions. Sabretooth Victor's bones began to break inch by inch, and then began to constantly reorganize from a cellular level. Victor's original body size of 1.8 meters gradually expanded like an inflated ball. The muscles that had disappeared before covered his body again at this moment, and became even more muscular and handsome. Roar. Sabretooth Victor roared in pain again. His whole body stumbled in the room because of the pain, and the 2 fangs in his mouth also began to grow rapidly. At the same time, Victor's face began to become ferocious, and the human facial features began to disappear, replaced by a tiger-like beast-shaped face. Muscle tissue and bones are still constantly expanding. Victor's body size began to expand rapidly from 1.8 meters and reached 2.5 meters in an instant, and then continued to grow constantly. 2 meters 5, 3 meters, 4 meters. Victor stopped growing when he reached a full 4 meters. At the same time, his limbs were extremely well proportioned and plump. His hands and feet had been replaced by feline limbs, and flesh pads and sharp edges grew on his limbs. Claw. Roar, roar. Sabretooth Victor suddenly landed on all 4s and roared to the sky. The terrifying roar of the tiger formed sound waves layered on top of each other in the metal room, like a forest of roaring tigers, which was shocking. At the same time, brown hair began to grow rapidly on Victor's body. These hairs covered his whole body, and a tail grew out of his back. The tail was like a whip, swaying slightly, and a sound erupted in the air. The sound exploded. Oh my god, this is simply a miracle. This is the atavistic evolution of human beings. This is another milestone feat in human evolution. At this moment, the scientist in the core laboratory looked at Sabretooth Vic, who had regained his composure. Minnie couldn't help but gasped, and then said in amazement again and again, Victor, how are you feeling? Lancelot also had a smile on his face, looking at Sabretooth Victor through the observation window. In the room at this moment, there is no trace of human beings, but instead, there is a strong and handsome prehistoric giant beast. Sabretooth. The body is 4 meters long, covered with brown hair, with a tiger's head and powerful limbs. The saber teeth on the tiger's mouth are gleaming, and the body is well proportioned. Its huge body was crawling on the ground at this moment, and a pothole was suddenly sunken in the metal ground under its feet. A pair of piercing golden animal pupils were exuding excitement at the moment. My lord, I feel great. Victor Sabretooth crawled on his knees, knelt on both front legs, saluted in Lancelot's direction, and then said excitedly. He now felt enormous strength, as well as super agility and reflexes, and the heaviness in his body had disappeared. Instead, it was natural and a kind of bestial perception. At this moment, he seemed to be a Sabretooth by nature, exuding a fierce and unrestrained beast aura. Base. Victor raised his front paws, and 5 sharp claws popped out from the pads, and then lightly scratched on the alloy wall. Like cutting tofu, the sharp claws pierced directly into the alloy, and then drew 5 deep scratches on the alloy wall. Moreover, not only his mutant ability has evolved to a full body form, Sabretooth Victor found that he can now easily control the changes in his body. Roar. Sabretooth Victor let out another roar, and then his huge body began to shrink again, turning back into the 2-meter strong man again. Sure enough, the mutant growth hormone has an unimaginable effect on the alienated mutant. Looking out the window, Lancelot looked at the changes in Sabretooth Victor with a look of satisfaction on his face. The body alienation type, especially the animal alienation type mutant, in Lancelot's view, is not much different from One Piece's animal type devil fruit. The difference is that the growth process of the mutant gene will be very long, but now with the mutant growth hormone, Lancelot can easily create a mutant army. This state is called mutant awakening. Lancelot glanced at Sabretooth Victor, and then named Sabretooth's form mutant awakening. Go, find them, find my mutant comrades. In the House of Mutant Evolution, Lancelot sat on a high platform with his right hand supporting his chin, looking down at the elite agents below, and then gave an order. I obey, my king. Under the high platform, the elite agent headed by Paul Yulton touched his chest with his right hand, bent down to salute, and shouted, my king. Afterwards, these people left the base like a tide with a document in hand. My king Lancelot. On the high platform, a blonde girl with exquisite facial features walked up to Lancelot with longing eyes, then threw herself into her arms, and said with a light smile, Raven, my sweetheart. Lancelot looked at the blonde girl in front of him with admiration and facial features that fit his aesthetics very well, and couldn't help but kissed and said. 3 days have passed since Lancelot returned to the House of Mutant Evolution. During these 3 days, Lancelot has been testing various data of Sabretooth Victor. And with the test, Lancelot also had an accurate judgment on Sabretooth Victor's mutant power at this moment. Level 5 mutant. Moreover, because of the self-healing factor in Victor's body and the animal perception, Sabretooth Victor is a leader even among the 5-level mutants. Even in the face of Magneto, Black Emperor Shao also has the power to fight. Definitely, Black Emperor Shao is likely to have started to absorb nuclear energy now. His body should store a lot of nuclear energy, and Sabretooth Victor is not enough to deal with him simply. After confirming that Sabretooth has become a 5th-level mutant, Lancelot sent Sabretooth out to find his mutant brother Wolverine Logan. My lord, you like it like this, or like this? When Lancelot was meditating, Raven had already sat on Lancelot's body, and blue scales appeared on his whole body, and then the original blonde hair and blue eyes turned into a beauty with black hair and black eyes. Raven, you should be very clear, as long as it is beautiful. I like it. Shaking his head, Lancelot looked at Mystique Raven in front of him and said with a light smile. Raven looked at Lancelot obsessively. She had fallen in love with Lancelot deeply. When she was the loneliest and most inferior, it was Lancelot who rescued her and gave her self-esteem and human respect that she had never experienced before. Love. Therefore, during these 3 days, Raven almost changed his tricks to please Lancelot, and Lancelot readily agreed. Owning Mystique Raven is equivalent to owning all the beauties in the world. What makes Lancelot especially satisfied is that Mystique Raven's body flexibility and shapeshifting ability to change her body size that will make Lancelot linger on. It wasn't until this time that Lancelot finally understood the meaning of the king not coming early. While Lancelot and Mystique Raven were happily playing poker, all agents in the entire CIA base acted under Lancelot's order. The huge intelligence system allowed the CIA agents to find the mutant on the mutant list without wasting much time. California, West Coast, Oakland. Bar. A black man dressed as a Western cowboy was sitting on the bar counter quietly drinking rum. Looking at the laughing men and women in the bar, the man's eyes were full of envy. John, did you accidentally appear in the woman's bathhouse again today? When the Western cowboy was stunned, a strong white man came over and said with a mocking and contemptuous expression. John just glanced at the strong white man indifferently, and then gently lowered the Western cowboy hat on his head with his right hand, covering his eyes. Wow, look, this pervert who often appears in women's bathhouses. The freak actually ignored you, Mr. Jonathan. The strong white man Jonathan exaggeratedly yelled, attracting everyone in the bar. After paying attention, Jonathan immediately cursed at John with a fierce look in his eyes. Hey freak, my girlfriend gave you a very nice name. Ghost John, how about it? Jonathan looked at the silent John and mocked more wantonly. And the people around all looked at the black John with weird eyes, and some even agreed with Jonathan's ridicule and abuse constantly. Jonathan, you are looking for death. John, who had originally planned to ignore Jonathan, finally raised his head amidst Jonathan's constantly swearing. His eyes were full of cold, killing intent. Boom. In response to John, it was Jonathan's powerful punch, and the heavy fist hit John's head, making John dizzy all of a sudden. Fact. John couldn't hold it any longer, cursed angrily, and then his whole body disappeared from the seat. Boom. Behind Jonathan, John appeared like a ghost, and then he kicked Jonathan's ass, and then John's figure joined together, constantly flickering around Jonathan. Boom. When John punched Jonathan on the head again, Jonathan was finally overwhelmed, fell to the ground, and passed out directly. And before passing out, John heard Jonathan's voice full of horror and resentment. Monster, freak, damn Ghost John. Dude, I prefer to use the word Phantom than Phantom John. From now on, please call me Phantom John. John glanced down at the fainted Jonathan, and then he was shocked by the horror of everyone and looked at a monster. In his eyes, he teleported out of the bar. Phantom John, mutant, born in Auckland, variant ability. Teleportation, 7 years ago because of just awakening. Ability was not stable, so it would often teleport uncontrollably into women's bathhouses or bathrooms because of its variant ability and be feared by the people of this city. Just as Phantom John walked out of the bar, a man in a black suit walked up to Phantom John and said abruptly, "Who are you?" Phantom John looked at the man in the suit in front of him, his face darkened, and he asked vigilantly, "CIA Agent Jerry, it's an honor to meet you, Mr. John." Agent Jerry looked at the Phantom John with a smile on his face at the moment, his eyes full of respect. This was the first time that Phantom John saw such a look, not disgust, not ridicule, not a look of looking at freaks, but a kind of respect from the heart. "Agent Jerry, what do you want?" Phantom John's face softened. He looked at Agent Jerry and asked with some doubts. "Respected human pioneer, great evolutionary explorer, genius ability among humans." Agent Jerry bowed slightly to Phantom John respectfully, but what he said surprised Phantom. "Dear Mr. John, King Lancelot welcomes you." Agent Jerry said respectfully again. "This." Phantom John just stared blankly at Agent Jerry. He looked at the extremely respectful CIA agent in front of him, and his mind went blank for a moment. "Lancelot King?" Phantom John muttered in surprise, and then followed Jerry Agent into a car in a daze. And things like Phantom John are happening all over the world. London, England, Mutant Bradley looked at the respectful female agent in front of him at the moment. He was flattered by the female agent's invitation and readily agreed. In Europe, a mercenary base, a team of CIA agents quickly broke into this base, and then took control of everyone here. Under the astonished eyes of all the mercenaries, this group of CIA agents took away the sharpshooter who had always had a low sense of existence among them, the Korean mercenary, David North, number 0. In a tropical rainforest, a person with a head resembling Toad is using his long tongue to hunt mosquitoes, rats and ants in the tropical rainforest, and several CIA agents went deep into it and took him away. In Las Vegas, in a casino, a man dressed as a gentleman was looking at the CIA agent in front of him vigilantly. His right hand had already quietly grabbed his short stick, but when he saw the CIA agent being so respectful, this man did not act rashly. Over time, more and more mutants were found. Humferson, report the situation of Base X. On the roof of the CIA headquarters building, a helicopter landed slowly, and then Lancelot walked out with Raven. On the roof of the building, Senator Humferson, the supreme commander of the CIA, had long been waiting. When he saw Lancelot, he immediately touched his chest with his right hand in a respectful salute. "My lord, Professor X Charles Xavier and Magneto Eric Lyncher have just returned to Base X." Humferson said as he led Lancelot to his office. "Did you just come back? It's slower than I thought." Lancelot frowned slightly as he watched the surveillance video of Base X that Humferson opened. A week ago, Professor X Charles and Magneto went to Europe to track down and stop the Hellfire Club's conspiracy. With Professor X's ability, as long as he wants, he can even directly obtain the information of the Hellfire Club through the brainwave strengthening device. But the young Professor X is far away, insisting on the so-called humanitarianism, directly abandoning the brainwave strengthening device, and instead chasing the mutant of Hellfire Club all over the world with Magneto. Therefore, it was not until today, a week later, that Lancelot finally got the news that Professor X had returned to the base. Ridiculous humanitarianism. Lancelot couldn't help but sneered, dismissing Professor X's humanitarianism. Human beings have never insisted on any humanitarianism towards mutant. Instead, they have an attitude that they would rather kill the wrong than let it go. After the first battle of Mutant, the mutant exposed to the eyes of high-level human beings has completely become a street mouse, treated as a poor mouse by human beings, and dissected and studied. And the root of all this is because of the naivety of Professor X Charles Xavier, who not only cooperated with the high-level CIA, but at the end of the first battle, he did not directly erase the memories of the soldiers of the two superpowers, resulting in the existence of mutant being banned, feared by countries all over the world. Charles, behind Lancelot, Raven looked at Professor X in the surveillance video with a complicated face, and couldn't help but whisper to himself, "Raven, do you want to meet Charles?" Lancelot casually took Raven into his arms and asked, "Forget it. Charles doesn't understand your greatness." Raven glanced at Lancelot, then shook his head firmly. The complexion on his face returned to calm. Then Lancelot and Raven turned their attention to the surveillance video in front of them at the same time. Raven and Darwin left. Professor X Charles, who had just returned to Base X, was informed by Beast Hank before he had time to report the intelligence he had obtained to Francis. At this moment, Professor X is still a young and handsome youth, not paralyzed or bald, and now Professor X is still a young gentleman. After hearing that Raven left the base with a stranger, Professor X, who was still discussing the next thing with Magneto, suddenly changed his face. He couldn't help but press his right hand directly on his temple. Beast Hank, who was planning to continue reporting to Professor X, suddenly lost his eyesight. This is Professor X using the power of his telepathy to read Beast Hank's memory. Lancelot. Mutant glory. As Professor X reads the memory, all the scenes that happened 3 days ago are presented in front of Professor X, as if Professor X was in the room at that time. He looked at Lancelot's high-spirited and impassioned speech, and was slightly absent-minded for a while. Variation and glory. Professor X couldn't help sighing, and couldn't help muttering. When Professor X saw Lancelot from his memory, he already knew that this Lancelot was the Asian mutant that he and Magneto were planning to recruit. Because Lancelot's variant ability is too common, Professor X at that time directly gave up the idea of wanting Lancelot to join X-Men. "Magneto, I think we are in big trouble." Professor X put down his right hand, looked at Magneto Eric with complicated eyes, and at the same time transmitted all the pictures he saw to Magneto's brain. "Lancelot, who is this?" Magneto froze for a moment, then looked at Professor X with a look of surprise on his face. Magneto always felt that he had seen Lancelot somewhere, but couldn't remember for a while. At this moment, Magneto has not yet established the belief in the supremacy of mutants. For him, any mutants or nuclear war crises are not as important as his own revenge. Sure enough, you have already forgotten him. Professor X shook his head with a wry smile, and then directly used his telepathy ability to find out the memory of Magneto recruiting Lancelot before. So it was him, that Asian? With the help of Professor X, Magneto finally remembered the existence of Lancelot. "Eric, I have a bad premonition. Maybe that Lancelot will become a more terrifying existence than the Black Emperor Shao." Professor X said earnestly at this moment. After seeing Lancelot, telepathy constantly asked he had a very bad premonition. That is, in time, maybe this Asian youth will become a more terrifying enemy than He Huang Shao. Professor. The conversation between Professor X and Magneto was in his mind, and Beast Hank just saw that the two were slightly absent-minded, which made Beast Hank couldn't help interrupting their state. "Phew, Hank, let's put the matter of Raven aside for now. Professor X let out a breath, put aside his bad premonition, and then said to Hank with a serious face, "Charles, did you just give up on Raven? Isn't she your family?" Hank looked at Professor X in astonishment. After learning that Professor X and others had returned, he immediately found Professor X and informed him Raven and Darwin followed the news of Lancelot's departure. Hank's original intention was to let Professor X search through the brainwave strengthening machine and persuade Raven to return to the X-base. But what Beast Hank didn't expect was that Professor X was only surprised at the beginning, and there was no other action. Beast Hank knew that Professor X had always regarded Raven as his younger sister, and now that his younger sister left with a stranger, Professor X was indifferent. I checked Lancelot's brain once, and he has an innate sense of identification with Mutant, so there is no danger for Raven to follow him. Professor X saw what Beast Hank was thinking and said comfortingly, "Moreover, compared to Raven, the upcoming nuclear war crisis is more important. Hank, humanity is at stake now, and nuclear war is imminent. The world needs us." Professor X's eyes became extremely serious, and he said in a solemn tone, "Charles, you really let me down again." Mystique Raven, who had been watching Base X through the surveillance video, was disappointed once again in his eyes. Raven was disappointed. Once again, I was disappointed with the Professor X Charles Xavier who I grew up with. Lancelot just glanced at Raven and did not comfort Raven. He knew very well, let alone Raven, even the future Xavier Talent Academy. Professor X Charles gave up for the so-called future of mankind. Professor X was never a qualified mutant leader. Lancelot stood on the top floor of the CIA building, looking at the world in front of him through the floor-to-ceiling windows. In 1962, many facilities had not yet appeared. There is no surveillance that can be seen everywhere in the streets, no internet, no mobile phones and computers. The technology of this era is still very backward, and it is this backward era that has become a safe haven for mutants. Those mutants with deformed and alienated bodies can hide around like mice, without worrying about being photographed by cameras and surveillance that can be seen everywhere. Even the Hellfire Club, which is ambitious, wants to destroy the world, and prepares to start a nuclear war, has never been discovered that they are mutants. The only senior government officials who have discovered their identities are completely controlled by Hellfire Club's Black Emperor Shao. Mutant, this word, in this era, is really too strange to the whole world. However, because of the cooperation between Professor X and the CIA, the high-level government of this country saw the existence of Mutant for the first time and realized the power and threat of Mutant for the first time. "My lord, there is a special call from the military." While Lancelot was staring at the world beneath his feet, Humperson hurried over after answering a call and said respectfully, "The military is mobilizing military forces at this moment, preparing for war mobilization." Humperson frowned and reported, "War mobilization? Humans really don't have a long memory. Not long after World War II ended, they were ready to start a war again." Lancelot turned around with a smirk on his face, his eyes were deep, and his tone was indifferent. "My King Lancelot, do we want to act?" Hearing Humperson's words, Raven looked at the surveillance video with some concern and asked, "It's not time for us to act yet." Lancelot shook his head casually and said, "Now is not the best time for Lancelot to appear. His stage has not been set up yet. Moreover, only after the first battle of mutants will the group of mutants realize what they are in the eyes of human beings. Therefore, Lancelot still needs to wait for a while. Mutant needs a war. It's not so much Mutant's first battle, but rather a war where Mutant fully recognizes itself and human beings." Lancelot said a little playfully, familiar with the plot. He is definitely clear that although the X-Men stopped the Black Emperor Shao in the first battle, it started the war between humans and mutants. If Lancelot wants to ascend to the throne by relying on the first battle of a new emperor, he needs to follow the development of the plot and wait for the moment of the final battle on the island. Lancelot and Raven stayed temporarily in the CIA headquarters building. In the next few days, the US military continuously sent orders, and documents about the Soviet Union's war readiness appeared in front of Lancelot like snowflakes. Lancelot flipped through the confidential information on the table casually, knowing the movements of the two superpowers like the palm of his hand. At this moment, Lancelot held several special documents in his hand, and his eyes were full of amusement. These few documents are not special to this world. They are about the weapons and armaments orders signed by the military. And the signature of the order party is the Stark Industrial Building. The Stark Group? A document signed by Howard Stark himself. Lancelot looked meaningfully at the several documents in front of him, and tapped the table with his right hand. According to the information collected by Lancelot these days, although this is not a pure MCU universe, it is almost the same. Except for the addition of mutants like himself, everything else has not changed much. At the current time point, SHIELD in Marvel does not exist yet, and still maintains a stinky and long name. In SHIELD, the Hydra headed by Dr. Zola are still carrying out the infiltration plan. It will take a long time to become a Snake Escape game. Even in this era, even Captain Marvel Carol Danvers has not yet been born, and even the Star-Lord who made his teeth itch with hatred in his previous life and was crazily complained by countless people has not yet appeared. This era belongs to the era of Mutant. Lancelot sighed again. Lancelot casually threw the files back on the table and began to concentrate on his own affairs. The whole world seems to have fallen into a strange calm. But in the calm, there is a torrent brewing constantly, which is about to tear the whole world apart. On the high seas, inside a nuclear submarine, Hei Huang Shao of the Hellfire Club is holding a glass of red wine in his right hand at the moment, savoring the aroma of the red wine leisurely. And beside Hai Wang Xiao, White Queen Emma, Red Devil Asizuo, the torrent was waiting, and they all looked at Hai Wang Xiao with excited eyes. "My mutant brother, our plan is about to succeed. Now that the two superpowers are hoarding nuclear weapons in Cuba, what we need to do now is to act as the fuse." Hei Huang Shao stood gracefully on a map on, with a smile all over his face. He said excitedly. Hei Huang Shao was extremely excited at the moment. Ever since awakening the mutant ability, he has been looking for his own kind, and even participated in World War II for this. But there were too few mutants at that time. He hid in Auschwitz for several years, and only found one mutant. That is Magneto Eric Lyncher. After the end of World War II, Black Emperor Shao has been running around in various countries, looking for mutants alone. In more than 20 years, he only found White Queen Emma, Red Devil Asizuo, and Riptide. It is simply too little. Moreover, Hei Huang Shao is tired of searching constantly. The world is too big, and although he has the energy absorbing and mutant ability to release energy, this is of no help in finding mutant. He also tried to let White Queen Emma use the power of telepathy to find mutant, but unfortunately, White Queen Emma's telepathy is very powerful, but it is impossible to use telepathy to find mutant directly like Professor X. It is also for this reason that Hei Huang Shao formulated the crazy idea of using the radiation produced by nuclear explosions to forcibly transform the surviving humans in the world into mutants. For Hei Huang Shao, human beings are nothing more than bugs, and mutant is the future of this world, the ruler of this world. "Emma, go to Moscow to control General Velashenko." After being excited, Black Emperor Shao looked at White Queen Emma and ordered, "Shao, if I leave, you can't stop Charles Xavier's telepathy." White Queen Emma frowned slightly. She didn't like this crazy plan of Hei Huang Shao, but the long-term loneliness made her put Hei Huang Shao the others identified as their companions. She didn't want her companions to be hurt. "Emma, my old Soviet friend built this for me." Hei Huang Shao still kept a gentlemanly smile on his face, then opened a box and took out a metal helmet made of a special alloy. "Emma, try to see if you can still sense my thoughts now." After putting on the helmet, Hei Huang Shao couldn't wait to say to Emma, "Can it really block telepathy?" Emma looked at the metal helmet on Hai Wang Xiao's head in astonishment, and said in amazement, "It was synthesized using an alien metal discovered in a small African country, and after a long period of experiments." Hei Huang Shao moved his arm slightly, explained briefly, and then looked at the Red Devil Asizuo. Let's go to Base X to teach our mutant brothers a lesson. It's a crucial moment." Did White Queen Emma go to Moscow alone? Inside the CIA headquarters, Lancelot put down the intelligence document in his hand, and then looked at the monitoring screen beside him. It seems that the plot has begun. A smile appeared on Lancelot's face, and then he looked at Raven, who was beside him with blonde hair and blue eyes. Raven, send this document to Base X. Lancelot casually handed the document to Raven. Okay, my lord Lancelot. Raven nodded slightly, and left the office with the documents. And Raven, who just walked out of the office, became a CIA agent under the fluctuation of a blue scale. 2 hours later, Raven, who turned into a CIA agent, appeared at Base X, stood in front of Professor X and Magneto, and solemnly handed over the documents in his hand to Professor X. After Professor X and Magneto read White Queen Emma's information, they immediately decided to go to Moscow with Magneto and others to arrest White Queen Emma. Poor Charles. Looking at Professor X, Magneto, and Agent Mora who were leaving directly on the plane, Raven, who turned into a CIA agent, regained his true colors, and shook his head with some pity. Professor X and Magneto never imagined from the beginning to the end that everything about them was seen by Lancelot, and even the news the two of them got was what Lancelot wanted them to know. When Raven returned to the CIA headquarters, Lancelot had already been waiting for a long time. My lord, Professor X has left. Raven walked behind Lancelot, turned into a beautiful woman with black hair and black eyes, gently squeezed Lancelot's shoulders, and said at the same time, "Yeah, I see." Lancelot nodded, his ruby eyes sparkling. Now that the plot is on track, Lancelot just needs to be patient. According to the plot of the first battle, Professor X and Magneto will capture White Queen Emma and get the position of the Black Emperor Shao from Emma's head, and the Black Emperor Shao will also raid the X-base and take away the Dragonfly girl El Salvador. However, whether it is Professor X capturing White Queen Emma or Black Emperor Shao raiding X-base, it will take a long time. It was a rare period of silence, and Lancelot decided to take Raven outside to relax. Let's go, Raven, let's go out for a stroll. Lancelot stood up from his seat, threw a bunch of car keys to Raven, and said with a chuckle, "The latest limited edition Future Series sports car produced by Stark Industry?" He brought Raven to the underground garage of the CIA headquarters. Looking at the luxuriously equipped car in front of him, which looked like a modern sports car, Raven couldn't help but growl his mouth and exclaimed, "She has been with Professor X Charles since she was a child." Although Charles inherited a manor, he didn't have much money. Therefore, since childhood, although Raven is a mutant, just like ordinary people, he has never been exposed to the extravagant life of the upper class. At this moment, seeing this luxury limited edition sports car produced by Stark Industries with a full concept of the future, his eyes immediately lit up. "My King Hail." Raven couldn't help but hug Lancelot and screamed like a little girl with longing eyes. Lancelot sits in the so-called future fantasy sports car. The ergonomic seat carefully designed by Stark Industry makes Lancelot feel more comfortable. The space inside the sports car is like a commercial vehicle, spacious and bright, with built-in various technological devices ahead of this era. Even the configuration of the top luxury sports car in the 21st century in the previous life. This sports car also has it, and it is even more advanced than the previous life. In particular, the intelligent driving system in the car highlights the technological sense of Stark Industry, which is something that can only be found in a place rich in black technology like Marvel. Boom. Raven excitedly started the sports car. The powerful engine system roared and vibrated, and then the 2 jet ports at the rear of the sports car sprayed out a dazzling and colorful airflow. "Cool." Raven yelled excitedly again, and then kicked the accelerator directly, and the sports car galloped out like a cheetah. Its built-in suspension system and shock absorption system even made Raven in the car feel no vibration at all, as expected of a genius Stark. Even Lancelot couldn't help praising him. In terms of technology, apart from the hidden Wakanda, Stark Industry is well-deserved #1. After the excitement, Raven set the autopilot in the car, and then came to Lancelot's side, nestled in Lancelot's arms, and stared at Lancelot with a pair of pale golden pupils. "My lord, I didn't realize that I was truly alive until I met you." Raven looked at Lancelot excitedly, and couldn't help but kiss Lancelot. As Raven said, until this time, she felt that she was truly alive. She didn't need to pretend, she didn't need to suppress herself, and she was even able to live a life that she never imagined as a mutant. Human respect, luxury living, instead of hiding like a mouse crossing the street. The emotional Raven feels that only by dedicating his most perfect side to Lancelot can he express his inner emotions. The two play poker in the car. As far as Professor X and others in Moscow, they began to search for White Queen Emma. Because he was afraid of making a fool of himself, Professor X did not use his telepathy ability, but only gradually collected White Queen Emma's figure through Agent Mora's intelligence gathering ability. "I've had enough, Charles." Inside a CIA agent's safe house, Magneto Eric roared at Professor X like a raging lion. He has been hiding in this safe house for 3 days. He doesn't want to wait anymore. He just wants to kill that general's manor now, and then use his mutant ability to find out the whereabouts of White Queen Emma. "Magneto, you shouldn't be so rude to Charles." Before Professor X could speak, Agent Mora spoke first. "Shut your mouth, woman." Magneto opened his right hand, and the metal necklace around Mora's neck suddenly floated in the air, and then directly wrapped around Mora's neck, tightening constantly. Eric. Looking at Mo struggling in pain, Professor X yelled angrily, while pressing his right hand directly on his temple. "Calm down, Eric." The voice of Professor X appeared in Magneto's mind, which made Magneto's face even colder, but he had to let go of Mora. "Charles, if you still consider me a friend, make up your mind as soon as possible." Magneto snorted coldly, and then walked out of the room directly. Only Professor X was left in deep thought. He glanced at Mo apologetically, and then shook his head helplessly. "Mora, Magneto was right. We don't have much time to waste. I have a bad feeling." 7 days passed by again. During these 7 days, Lancelot has been taking Raven with him to live a leisurely life. When he has nothing to do, he and Raven go to various high-end places to spend, and at night they just find a presidential suite to rest. With the backing of the entire CIA, Lancelot thoroughly enjoyed the capital life. And Raven also enjoyed a luxurious life of the upper class, and often followed Lancelot to high-end private receptions and private parties. And Raven seemed to fall in love with playing games, which made Lancelot feel the joy of owning Raven. "Don't move, hand over your money." On this day, Lancelot, who was wandering with Raven, met a group of gangsters who didn't have eyes. At this moment, a black man with dreadlocks was holding a gun in his right hand, yelling at Lancelot arrogantly. The others, however, looked at Raven with blue skin and Lancelot's expensive, luxurious, and elegant robes. These gangsters only regarded Raven as a rich man's game, and no one would think of Mutant. In this era, until the existence of Mutant, there are really too few. Even some top rich people, if they haven't seen it with their own eyes, they don't know the existence of Mutant. "Cub, put down the gun." Lancelot looked at the gangster in front of him indifferently, and said in a cold tone. From Lancelot's eyes, a fiery red bird fluttered out. The dozen or so gangsters in front of him only felt in a trance, and then they were controlled by Lancelot's geas. Crash. Everyone threw their guns on the ground, and then returned to normal. "Huh? What's going on? Why did I throw the gun away?" Joseph, the black man, muttered suspiciously at the moment, looking down at the pistol on the ground. The thought of picking up. The same is true for other gang members. Although they were puzzled by the fact that they threw away the guns in their hands, none of them had the idea of picking up the gun. "Raven, I'll leave it to you." Lancelot glanced at the gangsters indifferently, and then ordered Raven. "Yes, my king." Raven nodded, then moved his body slightly, shifted his center of gravity down, and assumed a fighting posture. For the past few days, Lancelot has been bringing Raven with him, and in his spare time, he will focus on training Raven's fighting ability. Raven's body flexibility has surpassed the limit of human beings, and his reaction speed is quick. With a little training, he is a full-fledged fighting master. Although Lancelot doesn't understand fighting, this does not prevent him from teaching Raven how to use his mutant ability to fight. Like a glance now, Raven's right hand clenched a fist, and as the blue scales on his right arm fluctuated like ocean waves, Raven's right arm turned into a thick, muscular arm. This is the arm of a heavyweight boxer in Virginia. Under the limit of one arm, it can exert a force of 800 kilograms, and even the usual fist weight is 500 kilograms. Whoosh. At this moment, Raven's entire body appeared in front of Joseph, a black burly man with incomparable flexibility, and his muscular right hand directly hit Joseph's body. Boom. A dull blow sounded, and Joseph's 1.9-meter body was immediately sent flying several meters away. At the same time, Raven's right hand returned to normal, and his feet transformed into the legs of a 100-meter sprint champion. Rushed into the gang group. Then Raven's body was as dexterous as a beautiful snake. Her weak and boneless body and super fast reaction force allowed her to easily avoid the attacks of gangsters around her, and then her hands constantly changed into the musculoskeletal structure of a heavyweight boxer. Almost punched to the flesh, these gangsters were like sandbags, and they were directly knocked out by Raven. Not bad. 13 seconds 86. 3 seconds faster than last time. Lancelot stopped the timer in his hand and praised. My lord, thank you for your compliment. Everything is under your guidance. Raven said with joy and gratitude on his face. After obtaining the variant ability of shapeshifting, Raven never really thought about how to develop his variant ability, but simply changed his appearance. Not just Raven. Even Professor X Charles never thought deeply about Raven's shapeshifting, how exactly should ability be developed. After following Lancelot, Raven finally realized that his mutant ability still has unlimited potential. The first thing Lancelot taught Raven was the ability of mimic shapeshifting. The so-called mimic shapeshifting is to shapeshift a part of Raven's body to become the best limbs among human beings, or hands, or feet. Through mimic ability, let yourself obtain the strength, speed, reaction nerves, etc. of these people. What Raven used before was the ability of mimic shapeshifting. The second thing Lancelot taught Raven was awakening shapeshifting, also known as alienation shapeshifting. Use your own shapeshifting ability to transform part or all of your body into a special body alienation mutant, and thus obtain the ability of the alienation mutant. However, this form requires Raven to be in constant contact for a long time, and now she can only reach the level of mimic shapeshifting. At the same time, Lancelot also proposed some ideas that are very suitable for Raven's variant ability, such as adjusting the musculoskeletal muscles of the body to make oneself lighter, or increasing muscle density so that one's body can obtain unparalleled defense. Raven's mutant ability has unlimited possibilities. Even the pure human underworld Emperor Gene Bin can exercise his muscles enough to compete against Spider-Man and many other superheroes. As a mutant, he can naturally change his body structure at will. Mystique Raven should be able to do the same. Even, in Lancelot's conception, he also wants Raven to directly try the body structure of superhumans, such as Captain America Steve Rogers. Think about it. The curvaceous Raven has the explosive power and recovery power of Captain America in his body. Raven will leap into a truly powerful level 5 mutant. However, it will take a long time to develop to that level. Holding Raven in his arms with his right hand, Lancelot trampled over them without looking at the gangsters under his feet. Humans are just cubs. It was my kindness that I didn't directly order them to commit suicide, so how could I care about the howls and screams of this group of human cubs? My lord, the mutant has been summoned. When Lancelot left the alleyway, a respectful voice sounded. A few CIA agents in black suits and sunglasses stood respectfully in front of Lancelot's sports car and spoke. Finally done? Come on, Raven, it's time for us to go back and meet our fellow mutants. The House of Mutant Evolution. At this moment, in a wide hall, dozens of mutants are looking around in doubt, surprise, or vigilance. Hey, what did you bring me here for? A Caucasian woman with spotted patterns all over her body and wrapped herself in a coat looked at the soldiers patrolling around the hall with some fear and couldn't help it. Said loudly, hey, am I talking to you? Gray's emotions became a little agitated in an unfamiliar environment. The pattern on her body suddenly began to change color, and then the half of her face that was exposed outside became like a facial makeup. Gray Silk is a mutant who has just been awakened for a short time. After awakening, her body is like a skin disease, and there are spots of color. These colors will be like a palette when she is emotional. Mix it, and then a duplication of her body will become like a face. I'm so hungry, there aren't even bugs here. A Caucasian man with a big weird head and protruding eyes like Toad couldn't help sticking out his long tongue at this moment. His name is Matthew Harlan. He used to have a happy family. However, after awakening became a mutant a few years ago, he was regarded as a monster because of his deformed body, and his family even drove him out. Because of his low self-esteem, he fled to the tropical rainforest and began to live alone. Mr. Matthew, here is the food for you. However, after the Toadman Matthew finished complaining, a CIA agent came over with a piece of food, put it in front of the Toadman, and pointed at the Toadman. He nodded with a smile and said, This for me. The Toadman was stunned at the moment. After becoming a mutant, he had already seen the maliciousness of humans. Otherwise, he would not have gone to the tropical rainforest to catch flies, rats, and ants for a living. Living in the rainforest for a long time made Matthew himself regard himself as a monster. Toad people, seeing the agent in front of him without any discrimination and respectful eyes at this moment, suddenly felt flattered. The people here don't seem to be hostile. Among the mutants, Gambit Remy Lebo, wearing a gentleman's suit, waved the playing cards in his hands with 10 index fingers, looked at the soldiers around him, and couldn't help but I kept whispering to myself. As a gambler, he is always good at grasping the psychology of the people around him, and he can even perceive the hostility of the people around him keenly. This is not a mutant ability, but a skill he has honed over the years. At this moment, under the observation of Remy Lebo, although the surrounding soldiers blocked the hall, they did not show any hostility towards the mutant here. Even Remy Lebo saw a kind of emotional fluctuation called envy and longing from the eyes of these soldiers. This is the reason why Remy Lebo intends to wait and see what happens, instead of fleeing here with his mutant ability. Remy Lebo is ready to take a gamble and see if he will be pleasantly surprised. Are these people all of my own kind? A graceful girl in a 3-point suit, but her eyes are like a cat's, constantly adjusted, is looking at all kinds of mutants in the hall in surprise. The originally lonely heart felt comfort for the first time. Her name is Clementine, because she grew a pair of black cat-like eyes since she was a child, and she was abandoned by her family. With her own efforts, she became a dancer, but she was also discriminated against and ridiculed by guests because of her eyes. Carla, what should we do? In the mutant group, 2 beautiful white girls were talking quietly at the moment. Anna, don't be afraid. We have to face it bravely. Everyone here is our companion. Another white girl gently grabbed the arm of the terrified blonde girl and whispered. The girl named Carla also had eyes full of uneasiness. After seeing so many mutants around, Carla's first reaction was to find the same kind. Carla, I'm afraid. The girl named Anna had sweat dripping from her forehead, and this layer of sweat was gradually getting bigger. Anna, my sister, calm down. Carla looked at her sister Anna with a worried face. Since she was very young, she and her younger sister Anna were kicked out of the house by their parents because of their mutant ability. As a result, the two began to depend on each other. But compared to Carla's own ability to change other people's minds through contact, the situation of her sister Anna is a bit special. The variant ability of Anna awakening seems to be related to water. However, this variant ability is very unstable. From childhood to adulthood, as long as Anna is emotional, she will collapse into a ball of water, and every time Carla will be in a hurry to find some wooden basin, something like that, collect this stream of water, and then look forward to my sister returning to normal. Take a deep breath, Anna. Take a deep breath. Carla grabbed Anna's right hand and used her ability to constantly calm Anna's emotions. And with Carla's ability, Anna's mood gradually stabilized. Crack. But just as Anna's mood gradually stabilized, beside Anna, a somewhat obese man suddenly swelled up like a balloon fish. The sudden change startled Anna. Crash. Anna let out a scream, and the original human body instantly collapsed into a ball of water. Anna. Seeing the water flow under her feet, Carla was shocked. The water above the ground is constantly surging, like a fountain, and the fountain converges into a human shape and constantly gathers and collapses. Obviously, Anna is trying hard to gather her body. Carla, help me. The water flow constantly wanted to converge into a human form. Anna's facial features appeared in the water flow. She stretched out her hand to Carlo in pain. Her voice became like a clear spring because of the water flow, light and beautiful. Help! Who will save Anna? Seeing Anna, who was gathering and struggling in pain, Carla was heartbroken and cried out for help. However, the surrounding mutants all looked at each other in blank dismay, unable to do anything about it. It's a mutant gene disorder. Dr. Leonard, bring the mutant gene stabilizer here. Remember to ask for the gaseous stabilizer. Just when Carla was desperate and helpless, a deep and steady voice sounded in the hall. Carla turned her head to look and immediately saw a handsome Asian looking at herself and her sister with ruby eyes. And when she saw the ruby eyes, Carla didn't know why, but she relaxed. A woman's sixth sense told her that the mysterious Asian in front of her would definitely be able to save her sister. In the hall, Lancelot led Raven towards Carla, and following Lancelot's footsteps, all the mutants subconsciously moved out of the way. When I just arrived at the base and was about to receive the batch of mutant comrades, I saw that the girl named Anna was emotionally unstable and directly turned into a ball of water. Lancelot is not very familiar with Anna's girl, but he knows Anna's sister Carla very well. Silver Fox Carla, the lover of Wolverine Logan in the future, who single-handedly made Wolverine's woman, her variant ability, can control other people's minds as long as she touches them. Although compared to Professor X and White Queen Emma's telepathy, it is a million points worse, but it can be regarded as a spiritual ability. Anna, the younger sister of Silver Fox Carla, possesses the ability to control the flow of water, but because of the unstable variant of the ability, it often turns into a mass of water. Lancelot glanced at the water flow that was constantly trying to gather but collapsed, thinking Anna's mutant information emerged. Dr. Leonard, bring the mutant gene stabilizer here. Remember to use the gaseous inhalation type. Lancelot took out the communicator and notified Dr. Leonard. A minute later, Dr. Leonard rushed over with a group of medical staff, holding a special alloy box in his hand. My lord, the mutant gene stabilizer is here. Dr. Leonard quickly opened the box and took out a tube of light blue medicine from the box. Variant gene stabilizer. It is one of the research results of the Evolution House laboratory. Dr. Leonard and others have developed a drug that can stabilize the mutant gene through reverse research on the mutant growth hormone. Like the mutant growth hormone, the mutant gene stabilizer has no side effects, and its function is only to help the out-of-control mutant stabilize its own mutant gene. Laugh. Lancelot took the stabilizing potion casually, and then pressed on the metal container. A cloud of mist was released from the container immediately, covering Anna. Cough cough. After inhaling the gene stabilizer for a minute, Anna's body quickly gathered from the water flow into a human shape, recovered her body, and then began to cough crazily like a drowning person. Take her down for treatment. Lancelot glanced down at the wet Anna, and then ordered the medical staff behind him. Yes, my king. The medical staff bowed respectfully to Lancelot, and then took Anna away from here. Thank you, thank you. Seeing Anna being carried away by the medical staff, Silver Fox Carla nodded gratefully to Lancelot. My name is Lancelot, King of Mutants. Lancelot glanced at Carla casually, then turned his head to look at the surrounding mutants. His voice became high, full of domineering and elegant. Wow. The surrounding mutants immediately boiled over because of Lancelot's domineering declaration. Everyone looked at Lancelot in astonishment, either with disdain, doubt, or questioning in their hearts. However, Lancelot ignored the sight of these mutants. He walked towards the high platform in front of the hall, and then sat on the seat above the high platform. Serve me as king, serve me as master. Lancelot sat on the seat, looked down at the mutants below, and ordered with an unquestionable voice. Chirp. And almost after Lancelot finished speaking, a huge fiery red flying bird flew out from his eyes, flying across the sky. The huge flying bird seemed to wrap Lancelot completely. My king, under the high platform. After all the mutants saw the fiery red bird on Lancelot's body, the red mark of the bird was instantly engraved in their eyes, and then integrated into their brains. All the mutants' complicated gazes were replaced by fanaticism and respect. Under Lancelot's gaze, these mutants knelt on one knee and offered their loyalty to Lancelot. Chirp. Like a burning phoenix, the fiery red bird on Lancelot's body turned into stars and disappeared. I, Lancelot, will give you the dignity and glory of being a mutant. Lancelot's solemn words, accompanied by the power of Geas, instantly engraved Lancelot's theory of mutant glory in the minds of all mutants. Variation and glory. My king hail, Lancelot hail. All the mutants frantically looked up at Lancelot, who was sitting on the high platform, with a frantic and excited tone. Lancelot looked down at the mutants under the high platform, who had completely surrendered in front of him, and the smile on his face gradually became presumptuous. From the mutant below, Lancelot saw many familiar faces. Electronically controlled Bradley, Number 0 Agent David, Phantom John, Tank Fred, Silver Fox Carla, Gambit Remy, Toadman Matthew, Mutant Ink that appeared in the era of reversing the future, an angel who only emerged in the Apocalypse era Warren Kenneth. Unfortunately, CIA agents did not find Psylocke and Storm Aurora Monroe. Definitely, in addition to these familiar mutants, more are some first-class mutants born in this era. Most of them are just like Anna, unable to control their mutant abilities. 90% of these mutants are physically alienated, and some of them even have no power at all, just deformed bodies. This is my first batch of mutants. As long as I completely control the mutants of Hellfire Club, I will become the real king of mutants. King Lancelot. Lancelot's eyes are deep and excited. These dozens of mutants will be Lancelot's most loyal team members, and they will also be the first batch of subjects in the mutant kingdom built by Lancelot. Let's go, my comrades. You are still too weak and need a little help. Lancelot stood up from the high platform, and then walked towards the core laboratory of the base with Mutant. Yes, my king. All the mutants stood up and followed Lancelot silently. Although Lancelot used Geas to engrave thought stamps in the minds of these mutants, their thoughts will not be controlled by Lancelot. They are still themselves, their original characters. For this group of mutants, nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is that Lancelot has become their king. Hey, John, where do you think the king is taking us? Inside the House of Mutant Evolution, Gambit Remy LeBeau glanced at Lancelot, who was walking in the front, then turned to look at John, the phantom western cowboy beside him, and whispered and said, It's also the first time I've come to my king's Mutant Evolution house. How could I know? Phantom John glanced at Gambit Remy and said indifferently, Phantom John and Gambit Remy are not familiar with each other, but they just met each other today. Hearing Remy's question at this moment, Phantom John doesn't want to talk to him more. For Phantom John, talking rashly and casually is disrespectful to King Lancelot ahead. Hey, don't be so serious. You didn't hear what my King Lancelot said. We are all comrades, except when necessary. My king will give us orders, and will not restrict our freedom. Gambit Remy held a short stick in his hand, fiddled with it a few times, and then said easily, Although my King Lancelot did say that, I don't like talking to strangers, even strangers. The Phantom John glanced at Gambit Remy, then teleported and disappeared into the mutant group, appeared behind Lancelot, and silently followed Lancelot. My lord, we, as fellow robes, must unite as one. A mutant whose face was covered with yellow scales touched his chest with his right hand, and said reverently as he walked, We have to show our value to gain the appreciation of my king, my comrades. My name is Jack Yorkton. As you can see, the yellow scales on my face have a strong defense force. Mutant Jack York's eyes glowed with excitement and fiery light, and his mind was always recalling the theory of mutant glory engraved in his mind by Lancelot. This is the first time Jack has been recognized. Usually, he is called a fish-scale monster because of the yellow scales on his face. He never thought that he could become an evolutionary genius beyond human beings. After foreseeing Lancelot, Jack realized that he is not a freak monster, but a genius who has mastered the key of evolution and embarked on a new evolutionary path, while human beings are just mediocre fools. Jack agrees with the mutant glory theory almost like a fanatic. He believes that all human beings in this world are idiots, and only himself and Mutant are geniuses in this world, and they should be respected and worshipped by these idiots. My King Lancelot, thank you for saving Anna. I will serve you by your side until the end of my life. Silver Fox Carla followed closely behind Lancelot, his eyes full of fanaticism and admiration. Ever since Lancelot rescued her sister, she found herself falling in love with the handsome young king. She, Carla, wanted to be queen. That woman is so beautiful. Silver Fox Carla turned his head and looked at Raven, who had been following Lancelot's left. Looking at Raven, who had blonde hair and blue eyes and facial features more delicate than his own, he felt a little hostile for a moment. My King Lancelot, that girl named Carla looks at you in a wrong way. Raven also felt the slightly hostile gaze of Silver Fox Carla, and then said teasingly. When Lancelot released Geas and formed a fiery red flying bird to wrap his body, not only the group of mutants saw it, but also Raven, who had been standing beside Lancelot, also saw it. But she was willing to be branded by Lancelot, because the few who followed Lancelot God, she, Mystique Raven has completely fallen. My lord, I'm Carla. While speaking, Raven's body surged, and he instantly turned into a Silver Fox Carla, posing in an extremely attractive pose. Raven, you look really charming. Lancelot gave Raven a funny look, then pulled Raven, who turned into Carla, into his arms. The base of the mutant evolution house in front of him is too big, and Lancelot took the group of mutants for 5 minutes to walk across the living area, information area, and training area, and came to the center of the entire mutant evolution house. In the entire core area, countless top biologists in the world are busy shuttling back and forth at the moment, and the eyes of all scientists are full of shock and excitement. It's great, it's really great. Dr. Darwin is really a master of evolution. Dr. Darwin hail, biological evolution hail. As my king said, every mutant is a genius who has mastered the key to evolution, and Dr. Darwin is a pioneer and a great explorer of biological adaptive evolution. This is simply a miracle. In just 1 week, we have at least shortened the natural process of human evolution by decades. This can no longer be called evolution. This is a leap of life. At this moment, the scientists in the core area are amazed, and in front of them is a fish tank with huge amounts of blue sea water inside the fish tank. And in the sea water, a black man with a shirtless upper body is doing whatever he wants. Swim. Dr. Graham, have you recorded the cell transformation process this time? The black man swam around, and then emerged from under the water surface. On the man's face, there was an obvious fish gill that was constantly opening and closing. Dr. Darwin, your cell evolution process has been completely collected, and now you need to collect some cells from your evolutionary organs for planting and cloning, and you need to scan your whole body. Biology called Graham the doctor, still immersed in excitement at this moment, looked at the black man in the water with fanatical and reverent eyes, and replied excitedly, Is this a Murloc? The mutants who followed Lancelot here also looked at the black man in the fish tank in astonishment at the moment, and made a sound of astonishment for a while. The black man in the fish tank is really beyond their cognition. Even if he has gills on his face, his body is covered with fish scales. The original hands evolved into fins like a saber-toothed shark, the original feet evolved into fish tails, with sharp fish bone growing on the back, and the original head became like a tiger shark. It looks very similar to the Murlocs in myths and legends. This is also our mutant robe. Lancelot looked at the black man in the fish tank with admiration on his face, and then gently waved to him. Darwin, come and meet our fellow mutants. My king, you are here. The core experimental area of the mutant evolution house is filled with various top medical instruments, and the most conspicuous one is the huge amounts of fish tank in the center of the experimental area. At this moment, in the fish tank, mutant Darwin, who was experimenting, crawled out of the fish tank after seeing Lancelot. And as Darwin walked out of the fish tank, his original Murloc-like body began to degenerate constantly, and finally turned into the original human appearance. Darwin once again became an ordinary black taxi driver. Dr. Darwin, here are your clothes. After Darwin climbed out of the fish tank, a beautiful scientific assistant had already given Darwin clothes. Darwin quickly got dressed, then took a scientific white coat from the female assistant and put it on. At this moment, Darwin does not have the humbleness and cautiousness of a black taxi driver, but only a high-spirited and a trace of a scientist's calm demeanor. Darwin, how do you feel here? Lancelot looked at Darwin, who was facing his chest caressing Crystal, reached out and patted Darwin's shoulder, and asked with a smile. My king hail, I feel great. This is where I should be, not a mediocre taxi driver. Darwin raised his head and said excitedly, Mutations and glory. It wasn't until at the moment that I truly understood your teachings. Only then did I truly understand what a powerful ability I possess. Darwin said with eyes full of excitement. Since coming to the House of Mutant Evolution, Darwin has joined the evolutionary science team under Lancelot's orders, and has transformed from a black taxi driver to an outstanding scientist. Its ability to adapt to evolution allows him to easily obtain any biological evolution experiment data he wants. Within a few days, Darwin has led his own scientific team to speed up the road of biological evolution and overcome many biological evolution problems. And with the support of Darwin's mutant ability, the biological science of the Mutant Evolution House is developing at a rapid pace. In just 2 weeks, the scientific team led by Darwin has already researched a lot of biotechnology. Its biological evolution is already ahead of the times, and it is even madly moving towards Marvel's most orthodox black technology. It can be said that Darwin was the happiest and proudest in the days of Mutant Evolution House. Here, he is not a black taxi driver who is randomly bullied, nor is he a frightening monster, but a master of biological evolution, an unprecedented explorer and practitioner of human evolution. Darwin recovered from his excitement. He carefully arranged the scientific white coat on his body, like a fanatical scientist. Darwin, let our fellow mutants see the results of your research these days. Lancelot ordered, and at the same time brought Darwin back to his senses. Yes, my king. Darwin nodded to Lancelot, and then looked at the mutants behind Lancelot. Almost all the mutants looked at Darwin curiously, and Darwin nodded politely to his comrades, and then led Lancelot and a group of mutants to a huge amounts of laboratory. My lord, my fellow mutants, this is the disease testing area for our adaptive evolution team. The entire laboratory is very simple and clean, and there are tubes of biological reagents stored on the walls of the laboratory. What is this? It turned out to be purple. Remy Lebo curiously took a tube of purple potion from the wall, and then looked at Darwin. This is the immune-boosting serum. Darwin glanced at the purple reagent in Remy Lebo's hand, and introduced it in detail. This is Darwin a week ago, by constantly injecting various disease viruses that exist in the world, allowing his body to constantly evolve and adapt to these diseases, and then extracting Darwin's blood to produce immune-boosting serum that can resist hundreds of diseases. According to Darwin's experiments, anyone who is injected with this serum will make himself immune to all diseases. What about this? Silver Fox Carla pointed to a pale yellow test tube with a look of surprise, and asked, Leukemia repairing serum. Leukemia can be cured just by injecting the serum into the body. Darwin's female assistant, Rue Na, said excitedly. Her sister suffered from leukemia, so she participated in the serum research on leukemia. Middle. And the research method is also very simple. Inject blood cells with leukemia into Darwin's body, and then just wait quietly. Yes, they didn't have to do anything at all. Just wait for Darwin to adapt the leukemia cells in the body. It took only 5 hours for Darwin to adapt to the existence of leukemia, and the immune system in the body began to produce a large number of immune cells to clear the diseased cells in the body. In just 5 hours, Darwin conquered one of the most hopeless terminal illnesses in the world. However, relying on the existing means of human beings, it would take at least 100 years and may not be able to solve it. It's not just that. The female assistant Rena looked at Darwin with admiration, as if watching a miracle in the history of biological evolution. She walked up to a special container, then took out the light red potion from it, and carefully placed it on the exhibition stand. Under the leadership of Dr. Darwin, we have conquered almost all human diseases except cancer. At the same time, we have also developed biological achievements that are hundreds of years ahead of this era. Quick Healing Serum. This is a miraculous substance produced by Dr. Darwin after repeated injuries and repeated healing. It has the ability to stimulate cell regeneration dozens of times. Any injury, as long as it does not hurt vital organs, can be treated instant healing after injection of the fast healing serum. The words of the female assistant Rena caused the mutants behind Lancelot to gasp in shock, and then they seemed to feel that they were shocked too early. My king, my comrades, this is our latest biotechnology, directed evolution transplantation device. At this moment, Darwin stood in front of a special machine and solemnly introduced it. As expected of Darwin, the ability to adapt to evolution is not just as simple as adapting to extreme environments. The same diseases, viruses, etc. can be adapted. In the core experimental area, Lancelot looked at the dazzling array of biological medicines in front of him, with a look of relief on his face. Since Darwin came to the house of mutant evolution, he has been at the forefront of biological evolution. Relying on Darwin's ability to adapt and evolve, their scientific team has developed many black-tech biological serums that span the ages. Just the effect of the immune-enhancing serum is enough to drive people all over the world crazy. And the terminally ill-clearing serum is enough to free those terminally ill patients from despair. In addition to these serums, Darwin and the others also developed fast-healing serums, cardiotonic agents, transplantation integrate agents, and more. Definitely, these things are dispensable to Lancelot. Mastering Darwin is tantamount to mastering a whole set of biotechnology that adapts to evolution. For Lancelot, those serum potions are just a means for him to steal the wealth of the world in the future. And, although Darwin created these potions, Lancelot would only give them to his fellow mutants. He is well aware of the greed of human beings. If human beings know that there are people who can cure terminal diseases, or even make people invulnerable to all diseases, they will probably wipe out such people in the first place. This is the inferiority of human beings, and it is also because of the inferiority of human beings that they cannot tolerate the existence of mutant. A technology that is several years ahead will be respected by humans. However, technologies that are dozens or hundreds of years ahead will scare humans, and even unite to destroy them. Therefore, even if he owns so many medicinal serums, Lancelot is not going to sell them. Lancelot just casually glanced at the dazzling array of biological serums around him, and then turned his gaze to Darwin's back. Behind Darwin, there is a very sci-fi biological training cabin made of special materials. This is an instrument jointly built by hundreds of top scientists in the entire mutant evolution house and Darwin. Directional evolution instrument. Lancelot showed a smile on his face. Even if Darwin didn't introduce it, he knew the function of this instrument, but he didn't interrupt Darwin's words. After all, the mutants behind him still insisted on this. I don't know. Comrades, this is the directed evolution instrument developed by our mutant evolution house. With this instrument, we can achieve directed evolution and even non-invasive organ transplantation. Darwin said eloquently. At the same time, he clapped his hands, and his female assistant Rena immediately took out a small white mouse from a cage beside him. Darwin took out a tube of pale gold serum with ease, injected it into the mouse, put the mouse into the directed evolution apparatus, and turned on the switch. Dr. Graham, bring the water-breathing parotid gland here, Darwin ordered, and then Dr. Graham quickly walked into a special huge metal container, clicked a few times on the control screen, and the metal container responded open. Hiss. After seeing the inside of the metal container, all the mutants couldn't help but gasp. Organ. Inside the container are densely packed various strange flesh and blood organs. Some are like the parotid glands of fish, others are tubes that look like vacuums, and some are special muscle tissues. These flesh and blood organs looked very similar to those of the human body, but they were completely different. Under the watchful eyes of Mutant, Dr. Graham took out the gill-like organ and put it into the directed evolution instrument. As Darwin and Dr. Graham pressed the switch at the same time, there was a flash of lightning on the instrument. The blue lightning lasted for 10 minutes, and most of the mutants couldn't help but block their eyes with their hands. Laugh. 10 minutes later, the hatch of the directed evolution instrument opened, and the original mouse was also taken out by Ruena's assistant. My comrades, next, prepare for a new era of biological evolution, Darwin said with open arms. Following Darwin's voice, Rena's assistant put the mouse into the water tank that had been prepared earlier. Gleelu. The muscles on the face of the little white mouse that had just entered the water suddenly surged, and then two small fish gills appeared on the little white mouse's face. Seeing the little white mouse swimming in the water without hindrance at all the mutants were shocked and speechless. And when Ruena's assistant fished the mouse out of the water, the parotid glands on the mouse's face disappeared immediately, and the mouse began to breathe through its nose. It's a miracle. Unbelievable. It's incredible. The mutants behind Lancelot could only marvel. Even if they don't understand science, they still know that the instrument in front of them is enough to be called epic-making biotechnology. This directed evolution instrument is to inject my adaptive cells into the human body, and then use biogenetic technology to directional cultivate special adaptive organs. Darwin looked proud, and he should indeed be proud, because whether it is a directed evolution instrument or various adaptive organs, he needs to adapt his adaptive evolution ability first, and then use scientific methods to adapt the new organ cells formed by adapting to the environment. Item data is recorded. However, the flaws are also obvious. At present, no matter whether it is materials or genetic technology, it is temporarily impossible to test the directed evolution of the human body. After the excitement, Darwin smiled bitterly again, as if discouraged. Although they have successfully conducted directed evolution in mice, they are still unable to apply this technology to the human body so that humans can spontaneously produce adaptive organs when encountering special environments. Darwin and their team still have a long way to go. Darwin, this is already great. Scientific research does not happen overnight. Lancelot was not affected by Darwin's frustration, and he did not hesitate to praise Darwin and his research team. Although it is temporarily impossible to complete this bio-black technology due to technical reasons, Lancelot is not in a hurry. Darwin had plenty of time for trial and error. Lancelot is very much looking forward to when Darwin's black technology is completed, he will get an adaptation force that can perfectly adapt to any environment on the Earth. At that time, all sea, land and air units, even space units, will be vulnerable to Lancelot's mutant troops. My lord, the mutants have settled down. In the mutant evolution house, Dr. Leonard walked over and said respectfully to Lancelot, "Good job, Dr. Leonard." Lancelot raised his head, glanced at Dr. Leonard, and said with a chuckle, "Die for my king." Dr. Leonard looked at Lancelot frantically, his old face full of excitement. Dr. Leonard can also be regarded as a top scientist in biological evolution. His lifelong dream is to shorten the evolutionary path of human beings, can overcome disease, overcome aging, and even defeat death. Yes, Dr. Leonard is also ambitious. He is over 70 years old, and he doesn't want to die yet. He also wants to be like Mr. Sabretooth. His idea was whimsical before, but now, after entering the house of mutant evolution, especially after seeing so many mutants, he feels that he may really have hope to continue living. And all of this is thanks to Lancelot. So Dr. Leonard has an extremely fanatical belief in Lancelot. Okay, Dr. Leonard, go and inject the mutant gene mutant growth hormone into my mutant comrades. Lancelot waved his hand and gave Dr. Leonard another order. After visiting Darwin's laboratory, Lancelot gave all the mutants to Dr. Leonard. Most of these mutants are just awakening mutant abilities, and they are only in the state of first-level mutants, and some mutants can't control their own mutant abilities at all. These weak mutants need to grow, and injecting mutant growth hormone is the most suitable method. It will take a while for this group of mutants to form combat effectiveness. Boom boom boom. Not long after Dr. Leonard left, there was another knock on the door of Lancelot's room, and then, under Lancelot's signal, Raven led several mutants over. My king, Raven, and others nodded to Lancelot, and then stood aside respectfully. Lancelot looked down at the mutants under the high platform. This was his first team, and everyone's strength had reached the level of 3rd level or even 4th level mutants. My mutant comrades, Lancelot said in a low voice. His gaze swept to the mutants beside Raven. Phantom John, variant ability, teleportation. Gambit Remy Lebo, variant ability, convert the potential energy of an object into kinetic energy and produce an explosion. Silver Fox Carla, variant ability, mind manipulation through touch. Cyborg Bradley, variant ability, can control any electronic device with thoughts and can use thoughts to power electronic devices. Tank Fred, variant ability, absorbs and stores energy through body fat and then bursts out all at once. Most of these 5 mutants used to belong to the Wolverine mutant team in the future, but now they have become Lancelot's subordinates. Among them, Bradley the Cyborg and Fred the Tank are all 3-level mutants, while the others are 4-level mutants. Class mutant, counting the 5th-level mutant Sabretooth Victor who was sent by Lancelot to perform the task of recruiting Wolverine Logan. In this era, he has transformed into the 3rd mutant faction, X-Men, Hellfire Club, and now Lancelot's mutant evolution home. It's time to go to the stage that belongs to us mutant. Lancelot tapped the table lightly with his right hand, and the gorgeous robe on his body set off the nobility and elegance of Lancelot. Please tell me, my king. After Lancelot finished speaking, Gambit Remy and others looked excited and excited. They finally had the opportunity to show their mutant power for their king. Raven. Lancelot glanced at Mystique Raven. Raven immediately moved lightly, jumped onto the high platform like a cheetah, and came in front of Lancelot. Then, under the watchful eyes of everyone, he turned into Silver Fox Carla and hugged Lancelot's neck. My king, please order. Raven, who turned into Silver Fox Carla, glanced provocatively at Silver Fox Carla in the audience, and then looked curiously at a document under Lancelot's right finger. Raven, who had been following Lancelot for a while, immediately discovered that this was an intelligence document just sent by the CIA headquarters. Lancelot casually handed the document to Raven, who came over. Raven glanced at it, and immediately changed back to his original appearance, looking at the information in his hand with some surprise. White Queen Emma was captured by Charles. Raven said with a slight frown. From the information, she knew what happened in the past few days. It took Professor X and Magneto more than a week to finally find White Queen Emma in a secret base in Moscow, and Professor X and Magneto shot at the same time, and Professor X used the power of telepathy to control everyone in the secret base. And Magneto used the ability to manipulate metal to capture the White Queen Emma, who turned into a diamond, and used violence to ask for the location of the Black Queen Shao. However, when Professor X and Magneto returned with the information, they were shocked to learn that Black Emperor Shao had already invaded his X-base 2 days ago. The humans in the entire base, except Agent Francis, were all thrown down from the sky by the Red Devil Azuo, beside Black Emperor Shao. And the only tactical team in Base X was directly blown to the sky by Black Emperor Zhao's energy absorption and released ability. The entire X-base has become dilapidated and in disarray. After Black Emperor Shao killed everyone in X-base, he found the X-Men's room, and after delivering a speech, Dragonfly Girl Salvador left with Black Emperor Shao. However, because Lancelot had already taken Raven and Darwin away in advance, Darwin and Shockwave Alex wanted to save people, and Darwin was fed small energy pills. However, in general, although Lancelot changed the fate of Darwin's death, other plots remained unchanged. When Professor X and Magneto came back, they were stunned for a while when they saw the X-base in ruins, the few X-Men, and the only member Francis who did not die. Damn Black Emperor Shao. Inside the ruins of X-base, Professor X Charles has seen everything that happened before through telepathy. When he saw that He Huang Shao easily slaughtered the tactical team of X-base just by stomping his feet, Professor X's face turned extremely livid. Assemble. You need special training. Professor X walked in front of the helpless Shockwave Alex and the others. His eyes became extremely serious, and he said in an unquestionable voice, Charles, calm down. Why are you so angry? Only humans are dead. Magneto frowned slightly and said, Falk, Black Emperor Shao destroyed our base and killed everyone in the base. You let me calm down now. Professor X was emotional at the moment, completely lost the elegance and gentlemanly demeanor he used to be. He couldn't help it cursing loudly. From the memory of Alex and others, he saw how desperate the people in the base were. The X-base was destroyed, and Professor X Charles Xavier was furious, and even lost control of his emotions, and had a big fight with Magneto. Under Professor X's terrifying and majestic telepathy, Magneto was instantly controlled by him. Although Professor X then let go of his control on Magneto, what he did still caused a crack in Magneto's heart. Magneto, impotent and furious, could only vent with the ruined X-base. The violent metal magnetic force flattened all the metal in the entire X-base, and the already ruined X-base completely disappeared. Under Agent Moore's reassurance, Professor X and Magneto finally calmed down. The mutants of Hellfire Club are very powerful, and you should also have some special training. Professor X, who calmed down, looked at the dumbfounded X-Men. His tone softened a bit, but still had no doubt. First, Lancelot took away Raven and Darwin, and now Black Emperor Shao came to take away the Dragonfly Girl Salvador. The successive blows made Professor X feel that he had to do something. At the same time, he also made up his mind that he would train a group of powerful mutants to fight against those powerful mutants who do evil. The X-Men plan is urgent. Mola, take them to my Xavier private estate. Professor X glanced at the 3 X-Men, who were still in shock. Shockwave Alex Summers, Beast Hank McCoy, Siren Sean Cassidy. Of the original 6 X-Men, only 3 remain. 2 of them were taken away by Lancelot, and 1 was taken away by Black Emperor Shao. After Mora left the ruins with the 3 X-Men, Professor X's eyes gradually became serious. Only 3 X-Men can't stop the people of Hellfire Club. We still need some helpers. Professor X turned his head to look at Magneto. Although he was full of apologies for his previous behavior, he did not apologize to Magneto. Because Professor X knows that even an apology won't help. He is very aware of Magneto Eric's character, but his own ideas are different. Even without this encounter, Magneto would have parted ways with him after killing He Huang Xiao. Charles, what are we going to do? Magneto just glanced at Professor X indifferently, and then forgot the previous unpleasantness. Eric, do you still remember James Logan? Professor X had a smile on his face. He straightened his clothes gentlemanly, and said with a chuckle, James Logan. Magneto frowned. How could he forget this name? After all, when he went to invite him with Professor X, he was scolded directly. Charles, are you still going to mess with that guy? He rejected us before. No, Eric, this time, he will never reject us, or rather, he will never reject me. Professor X had a confident smile on his face, and while talking to Magneto, he tapped his temple lightly. What it intends to do is self-evident. The young Professor X and Magneto can be said to be vigorous and resolute, and there is no indecision in the future at all. Now that the decision is made, let's do it. Whoosh. Magneto opened his right hand. Pieces of metal quickly emerged from the ruins in front of him, and then these metals gathered constantly to form 2 metal discs with a file size of 2 meters, which stopped in front of Magneto and Professor X. Magneto stood on the metal disc with ease, with his hands crossed over his chest, and the aura of the scene has begun to show. Charles, come up. Standing on the metal disc, Magneto glanced at Professor X and said with unclear meaning in his eyes, cool. Professor X stood on the metal disc, and the metal disc under his feet suddenly spread out strips of metal sheets. These metal sheets quickly formed a seat similar to a wheelchair. Professor X praised and sat down. On the metal seat, Charles, sometimes I wonder, if you lost your legs, would you understand my pain and feelings and recognize your identity as a mutant? Magneto glanced at Professor X and gently raised his right hand suddenly. The two metal discs levitated, and at the same time Magneto taunted Professor X quite viciously. Eric, this is not acceptable. My girls will be heartbroken if they get into a wheelchair. Professor X smiled freely, shaking his head and laughing. Whizzing, two huge amounts of metal discs quickly disappeared above the ruins. And not long after Professor X and Magneto left, a fat man covered in blood struggled to crawl out of the ruins. Falk, he didn't die in the hands of Hei Shao. He almost died in the hands of Magneto. The fat man cursed angrily, then reached into his arms with pain on his face, and took out a special alloy needle from his arms. Inside the needle tube is a crystal clear red liquid. Praise my king. Praise the evolutionary family of mutant. The fat man, who was drenched in blood, was dying at the moment, but his face was full of fanaticism. Laugh. The fat man gritted his teeth and inserted the needle into his artery, and the red liquid automatically poured into the fat man's body. Kakaka. With the influx of red liquid, Fatty's body suddenly began to make strange noises. The broken bones began to heal rapidly, the muscles began to reorganize, and the organs in the body also healed rapidly. In just 1 minute, the fat man, who was dying, became alive and well again. The quick healing serum is really miraculous. The fat man stood up from the ground, and then took off his bloodstained clothes, revealing the dirty shirt inside. On the shirt, the words Counselor Francis were impressively written. Yes, this fat man is Senator Francis. Long before Hai Xiao, Senator Francis was ordered by Lancelot to hide in the hidden safe house of Base X, and successfully escaped from Hai Xiao's hands. However, what Francis did not expect was that although he escaped the Black Emperor Shao, he did not escape Rage's Magneto. His terrifying metal manipulation power directly disintegrated the safe house, and even several metal fragments pierced his body. If it weren't for the fast healing serum developed by the mutant house of evolution, Senator Francis would have gone to see God at this moment. My King hail. Francis, who had experienced life and death once, became even more fanatical about Lancelot. If it wasn't because Francis became a member of the evolutionary family of mutant, how could he have obtained the fast healing serum? And how could he have escaped from the Black Emperor Shao? Claws. My lord, Professor X and Magneto have left. He patted the dust and blood on his body, then took out a special communicator from inside his clothes, and reported the situation here to Lancelot. Professor X is planning to use his own telepathy to control Wolverine Logan. In the House of Mutant Evolution, Lancelot put down the communicator with great interest. He has learned everything that happened after Base X became ruins through the report of Counselor Francis, and he also knows the purpose of Professor X. John, bring Francis back. Lancelot looked at the Phantom John under the high platform, and ordered calmly. I obey, my king. Phantom John, who was wearing a Western cowboy outfit, stroked his chest with his right hand, and then his whole body disappeared into the hall. So, almost in the next second, Phantom John appeared in front of the ruins of Base X. Under Francis' astonished gaze, he grabbed Francis' arm and teleported again to appear in front of Lancelot. My king. Francis, who was astonished, only felt a blur in front of his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Lancelot sitting on a high platform, looking down at him. This made Francis calm down and saluted respectfully. Road. Francis, go down and rest first. Lancelot nodded and waved Francis away. After Francis left, Lancelot tapped the table again with his right hand, thinking about the next plan, and at the same time had a clearer understanding of Professor X in this period. As the future Professor X said, when he was young, Professor X was a complete bastard, which can be seen from the fact that after Professor X felt the crisis, he planned to use telepathy's ability to control Wolverine Logan. Let's go, my fellow mutants. White Queen Emma needs us now. Lancelot raised his head, and then extended his hand to Raven beside him. The other mutants understood and jumped onto the high platform directly, and then everyone formed a circle. Lancelot held Raven and Silver Fox Carla with both hands, and looked at Phantom John. CIA headquarters. Lancelot said the destination this time, and Phantom John closed his eyes immediately. Boom. Lancelot and others disappeared in the mutant evolution house. When he opened his eyes again, Lancelot realized that he had traveled hundreds of kilometers and appeared in the CIA headquarters, the office of Senator Humferson. My king. Humferson, who was on the phone with the president, was not surprised when he saw Lancelot and others suddenly appearing in the room. He just hung up the president's phone and came to Lancelot's side. Humferson, take us to see Emma. Lancelot gave Humferson a look and ordered. Yes, my king. Humferson responded, leading Lancelot and others to a luxurious room. Lancelot pushed the door open and immediately saw the blonde beauty sitting on the luxurious sofa, sipping red wine leisurely. White Queen Emma Frost, a beauty with super punctual appearance and figure. She can always feel sexy and beautiful in her body, as if she is a stunner carefully crafted by heaven, which makes Lancelot pleasing to the eye. Especially at this moment, White Queen Emma's dress is exactly the same as when she went to Moscow. She is wearing a white cape, fashion avant-garde, and even a miniskirt that leads the trend of the times. Her fair skin makes her look more elegant, like a princess in a fairy tale. Even Lancelot, who already owns Mystique Raven, can't help but be attracted by it. Mutant. At this moment, White Queen Emma was sitting on the sofa so elegantly, without the consciousness of being a prisoner at all, and said with a light smile. Her telepathy perception realized that the people in front of her were all her own kind, which made White Queen Emma, who had been imprisoned here for several days, couldn't help being a little surprised. Since being found and captured by Professor X and Magneto, Emma has been brought by CIA agents to this luxurious room in the CIA building. Originally, White Queen Emma was still a little worried that humans would experiment on her after capturing her. So, for the first 2 days, White Queen Emma has been trying to use her own telepathy, trying to control these agents and escape from here. But what happened next made White Queen Emma feel like being struck by lightning. She could easily use her telepathy to read the memories, thoughts, and even change their minds of these agents. But when it comes to the most fundamental escape from here, no matter how White Queen Emma releases the ability, it's like a mud cow sinking into the sea, without any response. Even White Queen Emma tried to use her telepathy to forcefully change the minds of these agents and make them loyal to herself. But when Emma said the words, loyalty to me, Emma was shocked to see that a fiery red flying bird with a proud posture and aloof appeared in the eyes of all the agents. When Asuka appeared, Emma's head felt like a heavy hammer, and she clearly realized that she was backlashed by some unknown force. In addition to being unable to control the thinking of these agents and let them obey their own orders, White Queen Emma also discovered that once some special instructions are involved, these agents will be immune to their own telepathy. Mental commands like let me get out of here, don't stop me from getting out of here, are completely ineffective. At the same time, Emma is also trying to get these agents to tell her deepest secrets, and questions such as who to obey will also be ignored by these agents. Over time, Emma knew that this group of agents had a mental imprint beyond their own telepathy in their brains. This unknown spiritual imprint, like a thick firewall, could easily invalidate their own telepathy. Emma has been trying to probe the memories of these agents for the past few days, but when it comes to the most fundamental memory, no matter how Emma probes, she finds nothing. Emma Frost, White Queen of Hellfire Club, my dear fellow mutant. Lancelot looked at Emma, who was sitting gracefully on the sofa, with a smile on the corner of his mouth. Before Emma could react, Lancelot's eyes a gorgeous bird flew out of it. Geas. Facing telepathy Emma, Lancelot didn't have any arrogant thoughts. He launched Geas directly. Be loyal to me. Lancelot tried to impose absolute orders on Emma, but his own Geas didn't respond much. Emma on the opposite side was just a little dazed, but her eyes were still clear and bright, obviously not affected by Geas. This is the flaw of Geas, who cannot directly command telepathy ability, and the existence of extremely firm will, such as Professor X and White Queen and Mutant, and Marvel's 50-50 Captain America Steve Rogers with amazing willpower. Lancelot's Geas will be affected, unable to use Geas absolute command to bend the will of these people. Inside a luxurious room in the CIA headquarters building, Lancelot and White Queen Emma stood facing each other. At this moment, White Queen Emma was full of confusion, and there was a hint of struggle in her eyes. Just now, White Queen Emma saw Lancelot's eyes, and then she felt a special spirit begin to invade her brain. This horrified White Queen Emma, who immediately began mobilizing her telepathy powers to ward off this unknown psychic force. Chirp. A crisp bird chirping sounded, and in the eyes of White Queen Emma, Lancelot at this moment seemed to be wrapped in a fiery red bird, and a huge and irresistible spiritual force crazily impacted his brain. In front of this huge fiery red bird, White Queen Emma felt like a small boat in the waves of the sea at this moment. She could only do her best to use her spiritual power to build defenses, so that she could barely avoid being caught by the vast birds in front of her. Submerged, Shindu used all of White Queen Emma's heart to defend against the vast birds in front of her, so that in reality, she seemed to be stuck in a sluggish freeze frame. Click. The original red wine glass in Emma's hand fell to the ground, and then shattered at Emma's feet, and the red wine spilled out, staining Emma's feet red. Behind Lancelot, Raven and others looked at Lancelot standing tall and straight, and White Queen Emma standing sluggishly, and were a little stunned for a while. They didn't know what was going on, so they just looked at White Queen Emma warily. And only Raven knew that Lancelot's variant ability was an absolute command, and it was the first time she saw someone who could resist Lancelot's absolute command, which made Raven look at White Queen Emma with some admiration. The first time Raven saw White Queen Emma, a familiar face appeared in Raven, Charles Xavier, the same telepathy as White Queen Emma, and his telepathy power is stronger than White Queen Emma. I don't know if Charles can resist my king's absolute order. Raven was looking forward to the moment when Charles met Lancelot, because only then could he see Charles deflated, even surrendered. Boom. White Queen Emma obviously didn't have time to pay attention to the expressions of Raven and others. Her current spiritual power protected herself layer by layer, as crystal clear as a diamond. Who are you? Why did you attack me? In the spiritual world, White Queen Emma looked at Lancelot surrounded by a vast bird in horror, and asked loudly with all her strength. Lancelot, King of Mutants. Lancelot looked at the White Queen Emma who was as crystal clear as a diamond in front of him with great interest. This was the first time he used Geas to impose absolute orders on telepathists, so he didn't expect such a change. Using the power of Geas, he actually entered Emma's spiritual world. At this moment, Lancelot looked at Emma's spiritual world with a little surprise. It's really beautiful, just like your appearance, beautiful and pure, pleasing to the eye. Looking at the spiritual world in front of him, Lancelot couldn't help but praise him. The spiritual world of White Queen Emma is really beautiful. The sky of the spiritual world is vast and broad, and there are stars shining like diamonds on the sky. The blue sky is like washing, dazzling. And at Emma's feet, there is also an endless white land, on which there are many dazzling buildings, as if entering a fairy tale kingdom. And Emma herself, under the protection of spiritual power, shines like a diamond, and behind her stretches out a pair of extremely white spiritual wings. Relying on the power of the wings of the soul, Emma resisted Lancelot's first absolute order. Allegiance to me. I, Emma Frost, will absolutely never be loyal to anyone. Emma is under Lancelot's Geas at the moment, like a small boat that capsizes at any time, but she expresses her heart very firmly words. Chirp. Geas suffered strong resistance from Emma, but it didn't work. The fiery red bird on Lancelot flapped its wings and croaked, announcing the failure of directly controlling Emma. Since you can't give an absolute order directly, let's be gentle. Lancelot glanced at the White Queen Emma who was struggling to resist, and changed his strategy. Emma, be my family. You will never be alone again. This time, Lancelot did not use any coercive orders. He just stretched out his hand to Emma, and said the words that White Queen Emma longed for most. Hearing Lancelot's words, the White Queen Emma's originally resisted movements froze for a moment. She looked at the extremely handsome Lancelot in front of her in a daze, and cracks appeared in the spiritual protection of her body. Yes, Emma really longs for her family. Ever since she became a mutant and awakened telepathy, human malice has been unreservedly displayed in front of her. Since she was a child, she has noticed the malice of her parents, so she escaped from her home and started wandering. And as time goes by, Emma's spiritual power is getting stronger and stronger, but her perception of human malice is also becoming stronger. Her ears are filled with the despicable and disgusting voices of people around her all the time, and the evil thoughts of human beings make her even stronger. Look lonely. It is also because of this that after Black Emperor Shao found her, she willingly became the White Queen of the Hellfire Club, and has always regarded the mutant of the Hellfire Club as her companion. She is no longer alone for a short time, she has a companion. However, with the passage of time, the Hellfire Club founded by He Huang Shao gradually lost its original meaning. He Huang Shao gradually began to dictate to the surrounding mutants. She didn't like this feeling. Her original companions were forming a class at the moment, which made Emma want to leave He Huang Xiao's side. Therefore, when Professor X and Magneto found her, she didn't have much resistance at all. It's easy to catch. But at this moment, upon hearing Lancelot's words, a crack appeared in Emma's spiritual wings. Just as Lancelot said, she, White Queen Emma, longed for family, affection, and love. Family. Once the rift started, it would expand instantly. Emma's spiritual wings disappeared, and Lancelot's Geas turned into a vast bird, drowning Emma instantly. Geas, be my Lancelot's family, and get the love of my family, no longer alone. It successfully broke through Emma's spiritual barrier and imprinted it in Emma's brain. Lancelot. The collision of the spiritual world seemed very long, but only a few seconds passed in the real world. Raven and others just felt that Lancelot and Emma were stunned for a few seconds, and then the vigilance on Emma's face was swept away. White Queen Emma came back to her senses, walked towards Lancelot step by step with light steps. Her eyes exuded all sorts of amorous feelings. Under the gaze of Raven and others, White Queen Emma walked up to Lancelot, and then gave a deep kiss. Compared with family affection, I actually want love more. I like the feeling of being loved. Emma still remembers everything that happened in the spiritual space. Geas did not distort Emma's memory. Emma is still Emma. Released by Lancelot. Geas is not so much a categorical command as a hint beyond the psychic level. This hint makes White Queen Emma always have a kind and warm feeling when she sees Lancelot. Emma knows that it is an emotion that she has never obtained. Affection. That's what family feels like. For this feeling, White Queen Emma does not feel abrupt, and even feels happy from the bottom of her heart, because she finally has a family, and she is no longer alone. Mystique Raven, Phantom John, Gambit Remy LeBeau, Silver Fox Carla, Tank Fred, Cyborg Bradley. After a kiss, Emma showed a smile on her face, and called out the mutant behind Lancelot one by one. Name. Nice to meet you, my fellow mutants. From now on, I, Emma Frost, am the woman of your king Lancelot, your queen. Emma smiled gracefully, but what she said made Raven frown wrinkle. I am my king's lover. Mystique Raven glared at Emma, and at the same time her whole body changed into Emma's appearance, and her body proportions were more outstanding than Emma's. Cool. Raven, your mutant ability is really good. Emma looked at the Raven who turned into herself in surprise, and then tapped her temple lightly with her right hand. Change back, Raven. I don't like to see another me. Emma's voice was elegant and soft, but her telepathy was incomparably domineering. In just an instant, Raven's eyes glazed over, and she became the real person directly. Beachy, what did you do to me? The young Mystique Raven looked at White Queen Emma, furious. I just want you to understand that I, Emma Frost, am Lancelot's lover. White Queen Emma finally bared her fangs at this moment, confronting Mystique Raven tit for tat. Okay, two girls, we still have business to do. Seeing that Mystique Raven and White Queen Emma were fighting each other, Lancelot spoke softly to dissuade them. As you command, my king. Yes, Lancelot, my love. Mystique Raven and White Queen Emma responded at the same time, and then stood behind Lancelot on the left and right. Lancelot held Emma and Raven with his left and right hands respectively, and then all the mutants stood in a circle. Phantom John released his teleportation, and Lancelot and others all disappeared in the office. The Soviet Union, a secret military base. General Maxim Ivanov was sitting in his office at the moment, looking solemnly at the military layout in front of him. As the most radical general of the Soviet Union, Maxim has always advocated the use of force to subjugate the superpower across the ocean. However, after receiving the information from the KGB, Maxim fell into silence and astonishment. In the CIA intelligence agency of the United States, there is actually a super soldier team with magical power. Oh, they're called Mutant, X-Men. Maxim took off the reading glasses on his face, feeling that his three views were collapsing. He looked down at the information in front of him, which was collected by his country's elite agent, Black Widow Nuva of the Red House. Among the information, there are Professor X, Magneto, Siren, Shockwave, Beast, Mystique Raven, Darwin, Hellfire Club, Torrent, Red Devil, White Queen Emma, and other powerful mutants listed in detail. When seeing these mutants, the first thing General Maxim thought of was that the notorious Hydra had revived again. However, after checking the information of these mutants in detail, General Maxim was horrified to learn that these are a group of human beings more terrifying than HYDRA. No, mutants can no longer be called human beings. General Maxim called Mutant a freak, a monster. As soon as he learned of the existence of Mutant, General Maxim changed his strategic layout, preparing to use the power of the KGB and the Red House to search for Mutant in the Soviet Union with all his might. As for the next Cuban nuclear bomb deployment, in General Maxim's view, human wars are far less important than killing these mutants. After analyzing the mutant-related information, General Maxim immediately made up his mind. He will immediately convey his decision to the World Security Council and notify the Science and Strategy Corps under the Security Council, preparing to gather the power of all mankind to destroy the mutant. Kill the mutant. Come here. Maxim pressed the button on the table and ordered to the button, and then Maxim's face suddenly changed color. In Maxim's room, there was a slight sonic boom, and then several figures appeared in his office. Who are you? Maxim suddenly stood up, looking at the young Asian in front of him in astonishment, feeling at a loss for a moment. Emma. Looking at Maxim, who was panicking and speaking in Russian, Lancelot turned his head and said to White Queen Emma, snapped. White Queen Emma, who was ordered by Lancelot, snapped her fingers gracefully, and then used the power of telepathy to translate Maxim's words into Lancelot's brain in real time. Are you mutant freaks? Maxim looked at Lancelot in amazement and couldn't help but exclaimed, freak? It's really the thinking of human cubs. Lancelot's originally gentle smile was instantly as cold as ice. Without Lancelot's order at all, Gambit Remy behind him raised his right hand and threw out a card. Boom. Gambit Remy didn't detonate the kinetic energy in the card. Even so, he still knocked General Maxim out. Monster, you are all monsters. Maxim looked at Lancelot and the others in embarrassment and quietly pressed his right hand on his ring. Inside this ring, there is a special distress signal. As long as the ring is pressed, within 10 seconds, the most elite KGB agents in the entire base will surround the place. However, 10 seconds later, Maxim looked at the door of his office in despair and pressed the ring again without giving up. Don't waste your efforts. I have already controlled all the communications in this room. Behind Lancelot, Bradley pressed his right hand on his temple and said indifferently, look at me, bastard. Lancelot gave Bradley a satisfied look and then said to Maxim indifferently. And hearing Lancelot's words, Maxim subconsciously looked up at Lancelot. Destroy all the information on Mutant and build the mutant home base for me until the construction is completed. Lancelot directly used Geas to order. That's right, that's why Lancelot came here. Although the CIA was controlled by Lancelot, the news about Mutant still leaked out and was controlled by the KGB of the Soviet Union. That's why Lancelot came here to destroy all the mutant information the Soviet Union had. And, not only that, Lancelot is also planning to use Maxim to secretly control the entire Soviet Union and use the resources of the entire Soviet Union to support Mutant in the House of Mutant Evolution. Of order. In Maxim's eyes, the fiery red bird flickered, and he responded dully. For 3 days, Lancelot stayed in Maxim's secret KGB base for 3 full days. During these 3 days, under the influence of Geas, Maxim began to destroy all intelligence information about Mutant by all means, and sent all known the intelligence personnel of the Mutant information were all secretly executed. And 3 days later, it was still General Maxim's secret office. After General Maxim executed all relevant personnel who knew the Mutant information, the red birds in his eyes disappeared immediately. Oh my god, what have I done? General Maxim's eyes froze for a moment, and then he yelled in horror. He remembered the memories of the past 3 days clearly, including the secret execution of his most handy Red House Black Widow Nuva. He seemed to be possessed by some kind of terrifying devil, and everything was out of his control. And, not only that, in 3 days, General Maxim was horrified to find that his executive ability, memory, etc. had all improved to an unbelievable level. He knew what a huge and arduous task it was to eliminate insiders from the entire KGB system. Even for him, it will take a month, and there are likely to be some mistakes. However, in that state of astonishment, I managed to do it in only 3 days. What a terrifying power this is. What a terrifying enemy this is. The devil. You are the devil. General Maxim looked at Lancelot with horror and resentment, as if he was looking at a heinous devil. So, is this what it looks like after Geas is lifted? Lancelot looked at General Maxim's performance at the moment with cold eyes, as if he had lost his soul. Only hysteria and fear remained. Monster, monster. General Maxim was terrified in his heart. The Asian man in front of him could make himself look like a demon possessed with just one sentence, which made him extremely terrified. Lancelot just quietly looked at the hysterical Maxim, who was cursing madly, and everything about Maxim after he got Geas. Lancelot saw everything in his eyes. Under the influence of Geas, Maxim was operating efficiently like a robot. His various abilities were significantly improved, and he completely abandoned the negative emotions of human beings, leaving only reason and constant operation thinking. For 3 days, General Maxim carried out Lancelot's orders almost without sleep, without any feeling of fatigue. General Maxim's Geas status gave Lancelot a clearer understanding of his pupil technique. Emma, has this guy's memory reading been completed? Lancelot just gave Maxim a condescending look and asked White Queen Emma, honey, it's all been read and instilled into Raven's memory. White Queen Emma hugged Lancelot's right arm and said with a slight nod, very well, my fellow mutant, let General Maxim escape the pain. Lancelot turned his head and said to the mutant team behind him, yes, my king. Tank Fred responded with fiery eyes, and then walked in front of Maxim under the watchful eyes of General Maxim. Go to hell, monster. Maxim's forehead was covered with cold sweat. He looked at Fred, who was close at hand, took out his pistol, and pulled the trigger. Boom. A muffled gunshot sounded. Maxim raised the gun with his right hand, but stared at Tank Fred dumbfounded. The bullet was blocked by the fat on Fred's body, as if he had lost its kinetic energy. The ability, a variant of the Tank Fred, absorbs the shock through the fat and bounces the shock back through the fat. I'll give it back to you. Fred clenched his fists indifferently, and then punched out. Boom. General Maxim's body was immediately pierced by Fred's fist, and he only twitched a few times before he died beyond measure. Raven. Ignoring the bloody scene in front of him, Lancelot waved at Mystique Raven. My lord, I'm ready. Mystique Raven chuckled, and then his body quickly transformed into Maxim Ivanov. According to the plan, Raven will secretly build a mutant base in the Soviet Union with Maxim's identity and rights, and absorb mutants and scientists in the Soviet Union. So far, the Soviet Union has become Lancelot's rear. As Maxim, he can freely mobilize the KGB agents in the Soviet Union and the Black Widows trained by the Red House. Lancelot sat in the office belonging to Maxim, watching the turbulent situation of the two superpowers at the moment, with a smile on his face. When Professor X and Black Emperor Shao were still fighting, Lancelot had already begun to control the Soviet Union and build his own kingdom of mutant. Bradley, help me contact Sabretooth Victor. Lancelot turned his head and ordered to mutant Bradley behind him. Long before, Lancelot had told his mutant team about Sabretooth Victor's existence. So after hearing Lancelot's order, Bradley didn't have any hesitation and directly pressed his right hand on his temple. Bradley's variant ability is to control any electronic device through the mind. In theory, as long as it is any electronic device that appears on the Earth, he can control it. It is simply a humanoid Ultron. Definitely, this is only in theory. At this moment, Bradley's mutant ability has only barely reached level 4, and it is still too far away from level 5, let alone turning into a humanoid Ultron. Scoff. But at this moment, Bradley still has two simple means of controlling electronic equipment. He can only control the satellite phone in this room through his thoughts and dial Sabretooth Victor's communication equipment. My lord, the communication has been connected. Bradley wiped the sweat off his face. He is not a psychic ability user, and the intensity of his thoughts is only the same as that of ordinary people. He uses the phone here to force the connection. Sabretooth Victor's communication equipment over there made him exhausted. Very good, Bradley. Lancelot glanced at Bradley, nodded calmly, and picked up the phone directly. Victor, unleash your power as much as you want. Lancelot issued his own order directly. Canada, Rocky Mountains. In a vast logging factory, Sabretooth Victor, who was not tall, was leaning against a pile of logs at the moment, looking ahead with complicated eyes. This is Victor's second appearance in the Rocky Mountains, the first being as Beast Sabretooth, where he went on a killing spree in the Rocky Mountains. But this time, Victor was ordered to recruit his mutant brother Logan. Victor looked forward with complicated eyes. In front of Victor was a group of rough-looking lumberjacks who were talking while working. Logan, you really don't know how tired you are. If you don't rest, we will go on strike. A bearded man cut down the last tree with an axe, and then looked towards the front. The companion, who kept swinging the axe to cut down the tree, complained loudly. Old Sam, it's very useless for you not to admit that you are old. How long have we started? You can't hold on anymore. Your durability is really poor. Hey Sam, we ain't going on strike. We gotta overtake that Logan kid. The workers around laughed at the man named Sam one by one. At the same time, their eyes subconsciously looked at Wolverine Logan, who had been silent for a while, wearing a pair of worn jeans and shirtless. At this moment, Logan was smoking a cigar, his whole body was tense, and each muscle made Logan's body full of violent power. Before I knew it, I was affected by the killing desire in my body again. Wolverine Logan chopped off a big tree with an axe, then wiped off the sweat that didn't exist, and said with a wry smile. After separating from Sabretooth Victor, Logan has come here to become a lumberjack. When he is free, he will go to a nearby bar for a few drinks. The self-healing factor in the body keeps Logan full of vitality and never gets drunk. This made Logan very painful, because he found that as time went by, he felt more and more like a trapped animal, and the cells in his body were becoming violent and killing. Especially when I met two of my younger counterparts, Professor X and Magneto, some time ago. The rage and killing desire in Logan's body became more and more intense, to the point that every night Logan would dream that he was in the battlefield, killing recklessly. Wolverine Logan knew that she was about to lose control, just like her mutant brother Victor, who was about to turn into a beast who only knew bloodthirsty. Therefore, when faced with the invitations of Professor X and Magneto, Logan directly and rudely refused. He was afraid that once he agreed, the tyrannical factor in his body would take over, thus turning himself into his mutant brother Victor. Dreaming has become more frequent recently, and my claws often pop out uncontrollably. Logan threw away the cigar in his mouth and hid his right hand behind his back. Base. Logan's claws popped out instantly, and the sharp bone claws looked like rusty bones at the moment, completely losing their former color and sharpness. He, James Logan, was struggling at the moment, and could only paralyze himself by constantly chopping down trees to vent his never-ending vitality. But Logan knew he wanted to fight. Guys, I think we should take a break. Wolverine Logan controlled her bone claws to shrink back, hugged the tree under her feet by the waist, and carried the tree to the front of the lumberjack. Boom. Logan casually threw the wood among the piles, and was about to sit down and rest for a few minutes with his fellow workers. Whoosh whoosh. However, before Logan could sit down, his nose twitched a few times, and his expression changed instantly. He smelled a familiar smell, a smell of the same kind. Who is it? Logan's pupils constricted violently, and the perception of ambition in his body made him tense up instantly. Under the puzzled eyes of his coworkers, Logan walked towards Kiba. Logan, my mutant brother, your reactions have become dull. When Logan walked to a pile of logs, a familiar voice sounded, causing Logan's pupils to constrict violently. Victor. Logan raised his head and looked at Sabretooth Victor sitting on the wood pile in astonishment, with a trace of disgust and doubt in his eyes. Logan could be said to be very familiar with the breath of his mutant brother. It was the breath of bloody killings and beast. However, he didn't smell bloody and ferocious aura before, which made him a little puzzled, and even a little doubted whether it was his mutant brother Victor who appeared in front of him. Logan looked at Victor's body vigilantly, as tall as a human being, even shorter than himself. This is what Victor looked like before World War II, but after World War II, after a long period of fighting, Victor's height has exceeded 2 meters. Not only that, Victor in front of him is actually wearing an expensive and neat suit. The suit looks very fit, obviously it has been tailor-made, and Victor has an expensive watch in his hand. Logan knows that this is Patek Philippe that has been popular for more than 100 years. Moreover, apart from the watch, the most conspicuous thing is a beautiful medal on the left chest of Victor's suit. The medal is a blood ruby-like eye, which looks sparkling and dazzling. Variation and glory is engraved on it. Hey Logan, my mutant brother, what kind of eyes do you have? Seeing his mutant brother, Sabretooth Victor was extremely excited, and even gradually became emotional. But after seeing the suspicion in Logan's eyes, Victor suddenly became a little unhappy. Roar. Victor roared. A ferocious and murderous aura emerged from his body. His eyes turned red with anger, and a terrifying wild aura emanated from Victor. Is this the only way I can recognize me, Logan? Sabretooth Victor's voice became rampant and murderous, like a beast out of the cage, exuding a ferocious aura. It's really you, Victor. Wolverine Logan breathed a sigh of relief after seeing Victor's familiar killing posture. His beast perception made him finally recognize Sabretooth Victor. What are you doing here? After confirming that the man in front of him was the familiar Sabretooth Victor, Wolverine Logan immediately glared at Victor and asked in a cold voice. You seem to be living very comfortably, Logan. So comfortable that you even forgot your status as a mutant. As my king said, some mutants are born to like to neglect their abilities, and are willing to be with the human cubs, and they even call it blending into human society. James Logan Howlett, you really disappoint me. Sabretooth Victor looked at Wolverine Logan angrily. His claws popped out instantly, and he roared at Logan. Victor, you really look the same. Logan looked at Victor with cold eyes, and said with a sneer. It's the same? Isn't it like this? Victor gave Logan a meaningful look, and then fell to the ground with his whole body, and flew towards the lumberjack behind Logan. Bastard Victor, don't even think about killing people in front of me. Inside the logging factory, Wolverine Logan looked angrily at Sabretooth Victor, who was running on all fours like a tiger between the piles of wood, and then quickly chased after Victor. Logan knew very well that his mutant brother Victor became bloodthirsty and became like the real beast. Only when he was by his side would Victor recover some normal human thinking. Other times, Victor is a beast who chooses and eats. Thinking of his coworker dying in front of him, Logan was furious, his muscles tensed, and he ran towards Victor at high speed. However, at this moment, Logan is no longer a qualified fighter. He has not fought for many years. Whether it is strength, speed, or nerve responsibility, he has degraded a lot. In just a few breaths, Victor had disappeared in front of Logan, leaving only Logan's impotent rage. And when Logan returned to the rest area where the original workers were, he only saw workers in disorder and Victor standing there. At this moment, Victor has taken off his suit, revealing only his white shirt. One of his hands is holding the suit, and the other is holding a lumberjack around the neck. Logan, you are really too slow. Throwing the lumberjack in his hand to the ground, Saber-Tooth Victor didn't even look at the worker lying on the ground under his feet, and looked at Wolverine Logan slightly disappointed. Your current anger is not enough. Simply killing these few people is not enough. Saber-Tooth Victor was murderous, striding towards Logan. A scent of bloody killing that Logan was familiar with made Logan frown. Logan shrugged his nose. He didn't smell blood. That is to say, his coworkers were not killed by Victor, which made Logan puzzled. Logan, you seem to be married. Saber-Tooth looked at Wolverine Logan playfully, and said something that made Logan blush. Looking at Wolverine of rage, Victor couldn't help sighing inwardly. Once upon a time, he was even more irritable than Wolverine Logan. Looking at Logan now, Victor seemed to be examining himself. He's desperate to get his brother out of this irascible beast, and that's why he doesn't invite Logan right away and wants to tell him that he's different. However, it was clear that Logan didn't want to give himself this chance at all, and the bloodthirsty self had been deeply ingrained in Logan's heart. This made Victor want to teach his mutant brother a good lesson. Let him understand what is a mutant and what is glory. You should go home and have a look. Where do you think I got your position from? Saber-Tooth grinned, but what he said made Wolverine Logan instantly rage. Fuck, what did you do to Betty? Wolverine Logan was like a beast of rage at this moment. The bone claws of both hands popped out instantly, and Logan pressed the bone claws of his right hand against Victor's neck, growling angrily. Grumpy, irritable, like a beast, Logan, my mutant brother. You are becoming more and more like me. Saber-Tooth Victor took a deep look at Wolverine Logan, and then took out a card from inside his suit with an address on it. If you want to find your wife, go to this bar and find me. I will wait for you there for 3 days. After 3 days, your Betty may be brutally killed by me. Victor, he brushed away Logan's paw casually, and then lightly straightened Logan's collar before striding away with a wild laugh. Victor, I'm going to kill you. Behind Victor, Logan's violent and murderous roar sounded. Phew, it's really hard to say what you used to be. After walking out of the lumberjack, Victor couldn't help shaking his head and laughing. Now that he has overcome his killing and wild desires, he has regained his original self. The previous irascibility, like an irrational beast, was just a means to play Logan. He needs Logan to use his anger to stimulate the decayed will to fight in his body, so as to get back to his former self. At this moment, Victor put on the suit in his hand and transformed himself into an old gentleman. The hair on his originally rough face gradually disappeared at this moment, revealing a white face. The former Saber-Tooth Victor disappeared. In its place was Victor, a gentleman with mutant glory. Taking out a cigar from his pocket and lighting it, Victor stood on the edge of the Rocky Mountains like a primeval forest, and then lightly exhaled a smoke ring. Relaxed, free and easy, a gentleman. Victor enjoys his current life very much now. For the evolutionary family of mutant, human beings can take whatever they want. He was born noble, an evolutionary genius among human beings, born to need human pups to look up to. Moreover, after seeing Wolverine Logan's life and predicament, Victor admired Lancelot from the bottom of his heart. Logan at this moment is a trapped beast tamed by humans, living a life of poverty, having the ability to mutate, but unable to use it, and even afraid of being discovered by humans, so they can only live a life of escape. Poor Logan, he has no idea what the variants represent. We mutants should naturally be above humans. Human wealth, status, and rights should all serve our mutants, because we are exploring a brilliant evolutionary path for this group of human scumbags. Saber-Tooth Victor glanced back at the Rocky Mountains, then went straight to a limited edition car, opened the door, and got in. Mr. Victor. In the driver's cab of the car, a logistics staff member of the Mutant Evolution House looked at Victor with reverence at this moment, and nodded respectfully to Victor. Would you like one? Huggins. Victor, who was sitting in the car, never faced Logan's tyranny and brutality. With a smile on his face, he handed a cigar to Huggins in a gentlemanly manner. Mr. Victor, you know, I'm not sensitive to cigars. If it's whiskey, then I'll be disrespectful. Huggins, who was driving, shook his head, and then asked curiously while driving. Mr. Victor, why did we send Mr. Logan's wife to the House of Mutant Evolution? Huggins glanced at Victor through the rearview mirror, and then asked, as the person my king likes, there is always some preferential treatment. Victor smiled, and then looked out of the window. Well, I should also find some women. Forget it. I will serve my king forever and become his sharpest minions. Women will only affect my steps. Bar. Saber-Tooth Victor, who was wearing a suit, was a gentleman inviting a dancer to dance on the dance floor. The whole bar was almost completely occupied by Saber-Tooth Victor. Old gentleman, high temperament, humorous conversation, a wide variety of well-informed anecdotes, and squandering money. All of these make Saber-Tooth Victor the envy of all the men in the bar and the gentlemen that all the women compete for. 100 years ago, this place was still a dense forest. At that time, a group of loggers occupied this place, made a huge fortune, and built a small town here. Inside the bar, Victor Saber-Tooth talked eloquently. He has lived for too long. Even though he was immersed in killing, he still remembers a lot of things. Mr. Victor, Mr. Logan is here. Behind Victor, Huggins quickly walked up to Victor and reminded him. Is it finally here? My mutant brother Logan. Victor had a smile on his face. He had been waiting in the agreed bar for 2 days. Unexpectedly, it wasn't until this time that Wolverine Logan found her. Boom. The wooden door of the bar was kicked away, and then smashed to the ground beside it, making a roar. Victor. In front of the gate of the bar, the bare-chested Wolverine Logan's muscles were tense, and his rock-like muscles were even more bulging. All of this shows that Wolverine Logan has fallen into a state of rage at the moment. Betty, return my Betty. Wolverine Logan looked through the crowd in the bar, looked angrily at Victor who was sitting by the side, and said angrily. Just when Wolverine Logan met Saber-Tooth Victor, he rushed home to find that his wife, Betty Horseman, had actually disappeared. Reminiscent of Victor's words, the fool also knows that Victor did it. So, Logan, overwhelmed by anger, came to this unknown bar and found Saber-Tooth Victor. Wow, the way you look now is really similar to what I used to be, Logan. Sitting on the bar, Victor held a bottle of whiskey in his right hand, and then brought 2 glasses, laughing at Logan, while pouring wine. Victor at this moment, where there is no tyranny and barbarism when he met Wolverine Logan before, he is like an ancient gentleman, exuding a superior temperament. Victor died to me. After being taunted by Victor, Wolverine Logan couldn't contain his anger anymore. He roared, and then rushed towards Victor with a stride. Base. Wolverine Logan's sharp claws popped out, straight up and down Victor's throat and heart. The sharp bone claws gleamed with a sharp light, in stark contrast to the rusty appearance before. After his wife Betty was taken away by Victor, Logan, who was so angry, broke his bone claw abruptly, grew a new bone claw, and sharpened it with a whetstone for 2 days. Now Logan is confident that his claws are sharper than metal. Rough gestures, Logan. Every time I see you, it reminds me of my former self, which is why I am willing to play with you even though I have the strength to crush you. Facing Logan's sharp claws, Victor's pupils contracted slightly, his eyeballs rolled slightly twice, and then his right hand grabbed Logan's hands like lightning. Victor died. Seeing that his hands were grabbed by Victor with one hand, Logan was stunned for a moment, but the anger had gone to his head. Logan roared, his muscles tensed, and he used your best to break free from Victor's right hand. However, no matter how hard Logan tried, Victor's right hand remained motionless like a mountain, and Victor even had time to pick up the 2 glasses of wine in front of him with his left hand. Logan, haven't you noticed? I'm no longer the old Victor. He casually stuffed the wine glass into Logan's right hand, and Victor's right hand slightly exerted force, and Logan's burly body hit him directly on the wine table ahead. There was a muffled sound. The solid wood wine table didn't shatter. Wolverine Logan didn't have the weight of the future yet. Jimmy, I'm no longer beast, Victor said with emotion as he drank the whiskey in his glass. Look around. Look at the fear and disgust of these human beings. If it were me, I would have killed them long ago. Victor tapped the table lightly, and then pointed his right index finger because Wolverine Logan reveals the bone claws, and the people hiding in the corner. But now, they are living well. Victor's words made Logan of rage calm down a little. He also noticed the terrified and disgusted eyes of the people around him. They were looking at monsters. He had long been used to such eyes. And because of this, he finally discovered the abnormality of his mutant brother Sabretooth Victor. If it was Sabretooth before, the people here would have been slaughtered. But now, he is sitting here calmly, disdainful of the gazes of the surrounding humans. No, more than that. Logan found that Victor in front of him spoke in a clear and orderly manner, without any haste or impatience. And there was no sign of being irritable at all, as if he had changed into a different person. Yes, Logan found that his mutant brother seemed to have really changed, became rational, and became a gentleman. Jimmy, leave here with me. Follow me to the House of Evolution, where you will be appreciated by my king, and the glory and respect you won as a mutant. We are born to be different, beyond the ability of ordinary people. We are born to be above human beings. Jimmy, don't waste your ability. As brothers, we all hold the key to ancestral alienation. We should move forward on the unknown evolutionary path together and create a brilliant life under the guidance of my King Lancelot. Come on, my brother, join the House of Mutant Evolution and surrender at the feet of my King Lancelot. He will give us a new and bright future, the future of mutant. Victor stood up and extended an invitation to his mutant brother excitedly and vigorously. His eyes revealed fanaticism, especially when he mentioned Lancelot. The piety and longing even made Victor's original the eyes turned into light golden animal pupils. Oh, my mutant brother Victor, you are no longer a beast, but a loyal dog. Wolverine Logan's pupils contracted slightly. He admitted that he was attracted by Victor's impassioned words before, but then he thought of his wife Betty's life and death. This made Logan unable to agree with Victor's words at all, and made a mockery. Forget it. It seems that beast doesn't make sense in language. Huggins, remember to record the battle between me and Logan. It's an excellent material. Victor finally stood up from his seat and looked at the crowd. Logan, with a sarcastic face, was not annoyed either. Logan didn't know the greatness of my king, nor did he understand what kind of great evolutionary journey the Mutant Evolution House was going on. Victor doesn't blame him. No one will explain their ideals to Beast all the time. The only way to make Beast understand is to use force to crush him and let him understand who is the real master. Jimmy, let's have a fateful battle. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Mr. Victor, please slow down your movements. Otherwise, the camera will not be able to capture your movements, and the combat material this time will be greatly reduced. In the bar, Huggins, who was Victor's assistant and driver, took out a small video camera from under his clothes, and then started filming, talking with Victor while filming. Okay, then I'll just use the power of transformation for a while. Victor stood up from his seat, then drank the whiskey in the glass again, and said in a slightly regretful tone. In fact, Victor has never fought at full strength since using the mutant growth hormone. Roar. Opposite Victor, Wolverine Logan couldn't hold back for a long time, let out a roar like a beast, and then strode towards Victor. It's too slow. Seeing Wolverine Logan striding forward, Victor shook his head in disappointment again, and then raised his right index finger. Victor's right index finger and claw quickly stretched out. The sharp claw was shining coldly. Victor flexed his fingers and gently popped out. Whoosh. The sharp nails on Victor's index finger suddenly detached from his fingers, shooting out like bullets. Boom. The sharp claw pierced into the middle of Wolverine Logan's forehead in an instant, and the powerful momentum caused Wolverine Logan to be thrown backwards and hit the wall of the bar. Fact. The heart-piercing pain made Wolverine Logan's whole body tense. He cursed angrily, raised his right hand abruptly, and pulled out the sharp claw on his forehead. After pulling out the sharp claws, Wolverine Logan quickly self-healed her forehead, and the injuries on her body disappeared within a breath. Wolverine's self-healing factor, but Marvel can be ranked #1 mutant ability against the sky. Roar. Wolverine Logan let out a roar. The fangs in his mouth were exposed, and his whole body rushed towards him like a beast out of control. Woohoo. Facing Wolverine Logan, Victor Sabretooth advanced instead of retreating, and let out a thunderous howl, and then his body swelled at a speed visible to the naked eye. Like Sabretooth, it is covered with striped tiger claws, and its limbs are as muscular as a rock, but it also has a unique beauty of cats. Sabretooth Victor's body has exceeded 2.5 meters. Standing in front of Wolverine Logan, it was like the difference between an adult and a child. With yellow hair all over his body, Sabretooth looks like half man, half tiger at the moment. Boom. Sabretooth stepped on the ground with both feet, and the ground under his feet suddenly appeared as if it had been shelled, and deep cracks appeared. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Sabretooth Victor rushed towards Wolverine Logan quickly. His speed was more than 5 times faster than Wolverine. After approaching Wolverine Logan, Sabretooth Victor's tiger claws flashed coldly and instantly pierced into Wolverine Logan's chest. The tiger's claws are shiny silver, even sharper than metal claws. Jimmy, have you seen my strength? And this is just my semi-awakening state. Using force with both hands, Sabretooth Victor directly lifted Wolverine Logan into the air with violent force, and then slammed it heavily on the ground. Base. Wolverine Logan screamed in pain, and then the bone claws of both hands pierced Sabretooth Victor's chest. Pissed. There was a sound like piercing a steel bar, and Wolverine Logan's bone claws only pierced halfway, before being stopped by Victor's terrifying muscles. Strength, speed, nerve response speed, resilience. Sabretooth Victor looked down at his mutant brother Wolverine Logan, his voice becoming passionate and excited. It was only after I followed my King Lancelot that I realized that my development of mutant ability was as ridiculous as a 3-year-old child in front of my king. As my king said, the evolutionary endpoint of animal mutants is humanoid beasts. Victor raised his right hand, and the 5 sharp and gleaming tiger claws cut off Wolverine Logan's bone claws at the root, like cutting tofu. Then Sabretooth Victor kicked Wolverine Logan away. Victor, when did you become so strong? Wolverine Logan said with a shocked face, her whole body embedded in the wall at this moment. As Victor's mutant brother, Wolverine Logan has lived with Victor for hundreds of years, and Logan knows Victor's strength very well. He and Victor used to be pretty much the same. However, now Logan is being crushed ruthlessly by Victor, which makes Logan feel astonished and dreamy. Strong? You call my semi-awakening state strong? Victor moved his neck slightly, and then grinned grinningly. How have you ever seen me in my prime? Victor was showing his madness at this moment, laughing wildly and spreading his hands. The canine teeth in his mouth began to grow continuously. He was so excited that he could easily crush his mutant brother, making Victor's blood boil, and at the same time, the Sabretooth gene in his body began to move around. Come on, Jimmy. Let you see the true power my king has bestowed upon me. My prime state. Victor's hair began to grow rapidly, like a lion's messy hair scattered behind him. He wants to let his brother see the full power of being an animal mutant, the real mutant power. However, just when Victor was about to release his 5th level mutant power, an invisible mental wave swept out instantly. In front of this wave of mental fluctuations, everyone in the entire bar stagnated their consciousness in an instant, as if time stood still. Even Sabretooth Victor stood still in place, as if at this moment. What's going on? Wolverine Logan was the only one left in the bar who was able to think normally. He looked at Victor, who had fallen into a static state in astonishment, and the muscles and bones on his body began to regenerate rapidly during this time. Wolverine Logan, I'm Charles Xavier. When Wolverine Logan was in doubt, a strange voice appeared in his mind. Rumble. With the sound, the metal of the entire bar began to shapeshift rapidly, and then rose from the ground. The metal structure of the entire bar was lifted into the air by some kind of force. Outside the bar, Professor X and Magneto, one pressed his right hand on his temple, and the other opened his right hand, and moved the entire bar to the open space beside him. These two people are Professor X and the Seaman Magneto. Eric, it's really lively here. Our mutant friends seem to have a friendly exchange. In the midair of the bar, Professor X sat on Magneto's special metal wheelchair, with his right hand resting on his temple. Come down, said meaningfully. Victor Sabretooth, we seem to have discovered a new mutant, Charles. Magneto looked at Victor Sabretooth controlled by Professor X with great interest, his eyes full of admiration and admiration. They watched the whole battle between Sabretooth Victor and Wolverine Logan before, especially when Sabretooth Victor unilaterally killed Wolverine Logan, which made Magneto feel the power of Sabretooth Victor. For the powerful mutant, Magneto appreciates it very much. Compared to that Logan, Sabretooth Victor is more suitable for synthesis as X-Men. Magneto pressed his right hand slightly and landed in the bar with Professor X. Magneto walked up to Sabretooth Victor, stretched out his hand, and patted Victor's rock-solid muscles. Who are you? Wolverine Logan hadn't figured out the situation yet. He looked at Magneto and Professor X vigilantly, and the bone claw on his right hand popped out again. Calm down, friend. Looking at Wolverine Logan's hostile gaze, Professor X smiled, and his vast spiritual power flooded into Wolverine Logan's mind in an instant. Wolverine Logan only felt that there were scenes in front of her eyes, the X-Men, the conspiracy of the Hellfire Club, and the world that was about to be destroyed. Scenes of scenes, as if experienced personally, made Wolverine Logan's face dignified. Hellfire Club? The destruction of the world? It's none of my business. But Logan was only serious for a second before becoming cynical again. Fucking him. Wolverine Logan raised a middle finger bone claw at Professor X. He hated Professor X's ability very much, and easily invaded other people's brains, which made Wolverine Logan's first impression of Professor X not good. Fact, it's the second time. Professor X looked embarrassed, looking at the reckless Wolverine Logan. He couldn't help but curse. Charles, give up your preaching. Just use your ability to control him. Magneto glanced back at Wolverine Logan, urging, you should come with us and join the X-Men. Professor X shrugged helplessly, then put his right hand directly on his temple, and launched his own ability on Wolverine Logan. You're right, I should join X-Men and make a contribution to this world. Wolverine Logan followed Professor X, with eyes blurred. Just now, Professor X changed Wolverine Logan's mind, and made him infinitely agree with X-Men. Unless someone with a spiritual ability that exceeds Professor X can help him untie it, Wolverine Logan's joining X-Men has become a given. Fact, instead of tying it to the X-Men's tank, though, Professor X set a deadline for Wolverine Logan to return to normal once the Hellfire Club's Black Emperor Shaw was dealt with. After solving Wolverine Logan, Professor X set his sights on Sabretooth Victor, and spiritual power poured into Sabretooth Victor's brain like a tide. Compared with being gentle towards Wolverine Logan, he was much rougher towards Sabretooth Victor. Professor X's pupils were slightly absent-minded, and then Sabretooth Victor's eyes rolled. Obviously, Professor X is manipulating Sabretooth Victor with his own spiritual power. Professor X manipulates Sabretooth Victor to move his body. Through telepathy, he can feel the explosive power contained in Sabretooth Victor. It's really a beast in human form. Professor X couldn't help sighing, and looked at Sabretooth Victor with admiration. Professor X plans to do the same, taking Sabretooth Victor into the X-Men. Boom. Huge spiritual power poured into Sabretooth Victor's brain again, ready to forcibly change Sabretooth Victor's mind. Join the X-Battle, huh? Professor X, who was about to revise Sabretooth Victor's thoughts, suddenly changed his face. Professor X was shocked to find that he was directly pulled into Sabretooth Victor's memory by an unknown force. It was a room that looked like a laboratory. Sabretooth Victor was bound to the experimental bed like a beast, and in front of the experimental bed, a familiar person was standing proudly. What's going on? Why did I appear here? At this moment, Professor X was full of surprise and doubt. He looked at the familiar Asian boy in front of him in astonishment. It was Lancelot, who he thought didn't have any mutant ability. Professor X tried to control Sabretooth Victor's body and struggled, but because his body was bound, Professor X did not break free. Then, Professor X saw Lancelot's eyes. Serve me as king. Serve me as master. Boom. Professor X saw with his own eyes, from Lancelot's eyes, a huge fiery red bird fluttering its wings and singing, and then poured into his spiritual world. Chirp. After staring at the flying birds, even with Professor X's spiritual power, at this moment, he is like a flat boat in the sea, and his mind is constantly swaying. No. In reality, the birds that only Professor X could see fluttered their wings and sang, and then poured into Professor X's eyes. In the spiritual world, Professor X is still tied to the experimental bed, and at this moment the entire laboratory has been occupied by fiery red birds. In front of this flying bird, Professor X just feels extremely small. Ugh. Professor X roared in pain and madness. Under the flying bird, Professor X's spiritual power was crumbling, as if vulnerable to a single blow. Bang bang bang. Under the painful resistance of Professor X, his spiritual power built a spiritual wall for him, and the original laboratory became the Xavier Manor. Charles. In reality, Magneto only saw Professor X put his right hand on his temple, and then his face became painful and hideous. For his old friend, Magneto knew very well. He glanced at Victor Sabretooth, then raised his right hand. Metal strips turned into a huge amounts of cage and enveloped Victor Sabretooth. After closing Sabretooth Victor's eyes, Professor X's spiritual power finally returned to his body. Fuck. The pain of tearing his brain made Professor X's face distorted, and he couldn't help cursing. Although he got rid of the terrifying flying bird, his mental strength was also traumatized, and now his brain is having a splitting headache, and he has almost lost the ability to think. Quick, get out of here. Professor X put his head in his hands and reminded weakly. Charles, what are you talking about? Professor X's voice was so faint that Magneto couldn't hear it clearly. Get out of here. Charles suddenly looked at Sabretooth Victor, who was locked in a cage in horror, and yelled loudly. What happened? What's wrong with me? Maja Fark, who tore down the bar. In the dilapidated bar, because Professor X's psychic power was injured, the human beings whose minds had been manipulated gradually recovered. Then they saw the bar that seemed to be hit by a storm, and everyone couldn't help but gasp. They looked at everything in front of them in amazement, only feeling that the whole world had become strange. Quick, get out of here, Eric. At this moment, Professor X had a splitting headache, and he had no time to control these ordinary people. In Sabretooth Victor's memory, he saw the existence of terror, that kind of power, the existence of transcending spiritual power, and in front of that power, his own spiritual power was simply vulnerable. And more than that, before being forced out of Sabretooth Victor's spiritual world, Professor X also saw a scene that he will never forget. Vast birds fluttered their wings and croaked constantly, and the violent force drowned everything in Sabretooth Victor. Mind, consciousness, character, emotions, etc. That is enough power to crush everything. Even Professor X trembles a little in front of this power, like falling into an ice cave. Charles, what are you talking about? Magneto looked at Professor X suspiciously, and said in confusion, roar. However, before Professor X could explain, there was a thunderous roar in the metal cage made by Magneto. Boom. Then the entire cage shattered, and Sabretooth Victor, who was inside, also escaped. My king hail. At this moment, Sabretooth Victor, with a body of 2.5 meters like a giant iron tower, exudes a fierce aura. His muscles are knotted, and the muscles on his body are like the roots of an old tree. It's enough to make one's heart skip a beat. And the scariest thing was Sabretooth Victor's eyes. The original animal pupils were replaced by a pair of ruby-like eyes at this moment. Inside each of the eyes was a flying bird with fluttering wings and singing. Geas Runaway is a state that only people who have been hit by Lancelot Geas will appear. In the runaway state, the eyes will appear like red birds. At that time, the runaway person will be deprived of all human emotions by Geas, leaving only absolute reason and unscrupulous means, completing the previous Geas order endlessly. Moreover, in the runaway state, the runaway can exert 200% of his own strength, potential, and so on. Roar. My king hail. My king is eternal. Any bug that wants to replace my king will die to me. At this moment, Sabretooth Victor had no fluctuations in his voice. No anger. Roar. Sabretooth Victor stared at Professor X indifferently. His whole body crawled down, and then quickly rushed towards Professor X in the way of a tiger hunting, looking for death. Seeing Victor Sabretooth rushing towards him, Magneto's face became indifferent, and he opened his right hand, and metal fragments rushed towards Victor Sabretooth quickly. Chi chi chi. Facing the metal shards, Sabretooth Victor did not dodge or dodge, allowing the metal shards to penetrate his body. In this state, Sabretooth Victor did not have any painful emotions. Sabretooth Victor has just absolute sanity. Sabretooth Victor still maintained his pouncing action. Looking at Sabretooth, who was close at hand, Magneto also showed a serious expression on his face. He manipulated metal one by one, condensing into a huge and thick metal shield in front of him. Scoff. However, Sabretooth Victor just flipped his claws and tore the metal shield in front of him abruptly. His pair of emotionless ruby eyes made Magneto feel a burst of fear for no reason. Death. Sabretooth Victor raised his tiger claws high, and the sharp tiger claws looked like the claws of death at the moment. Even Magneto, who had experienced many battles, couldn't help being terrified. Wolverine Logan, who had been standing behind Magneto, appeared in front of Sabretooth Victor at this moment, struggling to knock Sabretooth Victor to the side. Roar. Being hit by Wolverine Logan, Sabretooth Victor just looked down at Wolverine Logan, and the tiger claw with his right hand directly grabbed Wolverine Logan's head, lifting Logan abruptly. Pong, pong, pong. Sabretooth Victor held Wolverine Logan's head with his right hand, and beat his body back and forth on the ground like a sandbag. In just a few seconds, the thin Wolverine Logan passed out. Victor threw Wolverine Logan on the ground casually, and strode towards Professor X again, and every step he took seemed to be stepping on the hearts of Professor X and Magneto. Charles, what's going on? At this moment, Magneto was no longer as relaxed as before, and he finally opened his hands and began to manipulate the surrounding metal with all his strength. Kakaka. Countless metal objects floated up from the ground, and then attacked Sabretooth Victor overwhelmingly. Roar. Facing the overwhelming metal storm, Sabretooth Victor's body galloped across the ground at an extremely fast speed. Even metal objects couldn't keep up with the super fast speed. In just a few seconds, Sabretooth Victor had already broken through the metal storm, then flew in front of Magneto, and sent Magneto flying with his paw. Mary Falk. Magneto, who was shot flying, only felt pain in his internal organs, which made Magneto furious. He cursed angrily, then waved his hands again and again. Steel bars pierced Sabretooth Victor's spine and limbs quickly from behind, and then Magneto staggered to his feet, spreading his right hand, and Sabretooth Victor's body was directly brought into the air. Brainless beast. Magneto looked angrily at Sabretooth Victor, who was controlled by him in midair, and couldn't help but mocked. However, what happened next made Magneto's eyes widen. Sabretooth Victor, who was controlled in midair, began to swell at an inflated speed, and light yellow hair began to grow all over his body. Roar. The original human head has also turned into a gigantic tiger head, with a body size of 5 meters, a tiger head, a tiger body, tiger claws, and a tiger tail. In just 1 minute, Sabretooth Victor really turned into a giant Sabretooth with a body length of 5 meters. And the original steel bars on Sabretooth Victor's body were also forcibly repelled by his steel-like muscles. Boom. Sabretooth Victor's huge body fell to the ground, and the heavy body made the ground start to shake, like an earthquake, and a huge deep pit appeared on the ground under his feet. Fact, is this a monster? Magneto looked at the real Sabretooth in front of him in astonishment, and was extremely surprised for a moment. Run. Professor X looked at Sabretooth in astonishment, and then reminded him painfully. Hum. After hearing Professor X's words, Magneto did not hesitate at all. He is now very glad that he and Professor X are still standing on the metal plate before, and he can move quickly by relying on the metal plate under his feet. Remember to bring Logan. Geass ran away. This is another new discovery of Geass. In the secret KGB base in the Soviet Union, Lancelot was sitting leisurely on the sofa at the moment. A pair of birds with red eyes were fluttering and singing. As early as when Sabretooth Victor Geass ran away, Lancelot's double-eyed Geass manifested, and at the same time Lancelot discovered that with the help of the double-eyed Geass, he could see everything Sabretooth Victor saw. Because of this, Lancelot clearly witnessed the battle between Sabretooth and Magneto after Sabretooth Victor broke through the metal cage. He also saw Sabretooth brutally beat Wolverine Logan on the ground like a sandbag, and broke all the bones that Wolverine Logan threw. Also saw the scene where Sabretooth slapped Magneto flying with one paw. This is also the first Geass rampage that has appeared since he first used Geass for so long. Through Sabretooth Victor and his own Geass sensor, Lancelot can not only see what Sabretooth Victor sees, but also knows the state of Sabretooth Victor's rampage. Absolutely rational, potential explosion. The explosion of its potential made Sabretooth Victor's awakening state even bigger, from the original 4 meters to 5 meters. There are 2 floors in height. Moreover, its speed, strength, and resilience have been improved to varying degrees. Magneto is still too weak. Looking at Magneto in front of him, Lancelot shook his head in disappointment. Controlling magnetic field. Let him use it abruptly to manipulate metal. His strength also increases and decreases with the surrounding metal. In the steel jungle, Magneto can turn into a scene person in a second, and it is no problem to set off a bridge. It is a proper level 5 mutant. However, when there is no metal, or there is not much metal, the strength will plummet, and when it is the weakest, it can't even reach the first level of mutant. Speaking of which, Victor's Geass rampage is thanks to Professor X. With the Geass connection of Victor's eyes, Lancelot clearly saw the sluggish Professor X. Lancelot, it's Lancelot. While Lancelot was observing Professor X's telepathy also felt Lancelot's gaze. In Professor X's eyes, Sabretooth Victor's eyes at this moment were reflecting Lancelot's blurred figure. And when Professor X looked into Sabretooth Victor's eyes, he seemed to hear the birds chirping again, followed by a splitting headache in his brain. This made Professor X close his eyes in pain, and his tall and straight body became limp on the metal wheelchair. Eric, get out of here. Professor X didn't dare to stay here any longer at all. He turned his head and ordered to Magneto beside him, with an indescribably anxious tone. Shut up, Charles. At this moment, Magneto only felt pain in his internal organs. He turned his head angrily and yelled at Charles. Then he opened his hands, and the 2 huge metal plates under his feet instantly floated. And then the magnetic force under the effect of this, he retreated rapidly. In a pinch, Magneto exploded to his full potential, truly reaching the level of a top 5 mutant. Suff. In just a second, Magneto took Professor X and Wolverine Logan back hundreds of meters. Victor, catch up and try your speed. Lancelot looked at Magneto and others who gradually turned into 2 black dots, and gave a soft command. Following Lancelot's words, in the eyes of Sabretooth Victor, who was thousands of miles away, a bird fluttered like a burning bird, and at the same time, Lancelot's voice sounded in Sabretooth Victor's brain. Of order, my king. Sabretooth Victor's gigantic head bowed slightly, and he opened his tiger's mouth, making a rumbling sound. The voice was deep and powerful, and even the vibrating air trembled. Roar. Victor Sabretooth glanced at Magneto and the others who had turned into black spots, and then made a pounce with his whole body. Boom. Sabretooth Victor ran up, obviously weighing several tons and the height of a 2-story building. But once he moved, he was in a vigorous posture, like a tiger descending a mountain, and swooped forward at high speed. Bang bang bang. Victor's body was flying at an incredible speed. The 5-meter-high Sabretooth was huge. His running posture revealed the elegance and calmness of a feline, as well as the chilling aura unique to Sabretooth. Fact. Seeing the giant Sabretooth rushing towards him like a galloping train, Magneto cursed in horror, then waved his right hand, and countless metals turned into giant metal walls to block Sabretooth Victor's running route. Superior. Roar. Sabretooth Victor let out a loud and deep roar, and the running body didn't seem to slow down in the slightest. Boom. Sabretooth Victor slammed his head against the metal wall in front of him. At this moment, the metal wall, like paper paste, was easily smashed by Victor. Boom, boom, boom. And the next few walls were all smashed into pieces. At this moment, Sabretooth Victor was really a tiger out of the cage, and the tiger leaped over the mountains and forests, unstoppable. Charles, think of a way. Seeing Victor Sabretooth approaching rapidly, even a well-informed man like Magneto, who has experienced countless life and death tortures, couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Heaven, heaven. At this moment, Professor X was also terrified. He resisted the pain in his brain and reminded Magneto. Following Professor X's reminder, Magneto's hands were pressed down, and the metal plate under his feet lifted the three of Magneto into the air quickly. Boom, boom, boom. And just as Magneto was lifted into the air, the ground under his feet roared and shook as if an earthquake had erupted, and then a giant Sabretooth galloped towards him. Boom. Watching Magneto and the others take off into the air, Sabretooth Victor didn't have any hesitation. His body crawled slightly, and then he stretched his limbs and flew directly into the air. The height of more than 10 meters was easily crossed by Victor Sabretooth. Looking at the huge tiger head and ferocious saber-toothed fangs close at hand, Magneto's pupils shrank rapidly. Get back to me, you monster. Magneto roared again and again. The power to control the metal was overloaded. The metal disc under his feet separated a group of metal rings, and the metal ring quickly covered Sabretooth Victor's body on the tiger's claws. Then Magneto activated the magnetic force frantically, pulling Sabretooth Victor down a distance of 1 meter, while his left hand was also manipulating the disc under his feet, and continued to lift into the air. Roar. Sabretooth Victor's tiger claws clenched tightly, his muscles tensed like steel and iron bones, and the metal ring shattered immediately, but also because of the influence of Magneto's magnetic force, his body began to inevitably fall towards the ground. Boom. The 5-meter-high Sabretooth fell to the ground, setting off a huge cloud of smoke and a huge amount of potholes. At this moment, Sabretooth Victor looked up, his eyes staring at Magneto above his head without any emotion. Okay, Victor, there's no need to hunt them down. Lancelot's voice reappeared in Victor's mind, and after hearing Lancelot's words, Victor's body crawled slightly again. As you command, my king. Magneto and Professor X fled in a panic. This was the moment when the two were closest to death, and it also made them no longer blindly arrogant. Through Sabretooth Victor's eyes, Lancelot quietly watched Magneto manipulating the metal disc, scurrying around in embarrassment. Go back, Victor. When Magneto and others completely disappeared into the sky, Lancelot gave an order to Sabretooth Victor. Obey, my king. Victor, who was still in the state of Geas rampage, did not hesitate to order and prohibit. His huge body ran again, galloping over the ground, like a king of beasts running wildly in the mountains and forests. In just a moment, Sabretooth Victor had already returned to the dilapidated bar. Looking at the terrified humans, Sabretooth Victor walked towards Hudgens with light limbs. Geas. And just as Sabretooth Victor walked towards Hudgens, Lancelot, who was connected to each other through Geas, tried to release Geas at the surrounding bar patrons at a super long distance. This was just Lancelot's whim. However, the result surprised Lancelot. As Lancelot issued the Geas at the secret base of the Soviet Union, the bird in Sabretooth Victor's eyes fluttered and croaked, and flew into the sky from Victor's eyes, and then rushed into everyone except Hudgens and human eyes. Forget everything that happened here. A smile appeared on Lancelot's face, and he discovered a Geas application that could give Geas orders to other people through Geas runaways. Following Lancelot's order, the eyes of the bar customers who had been extremely terrified at the moment became confused, and their memories of what happened before began to melt and disappear like ice and snow. After Lancelot released Geas, Sabretooth Victor's Geas rampage gradually subsided, and his body changed from a giant Sabretooth back to a human form. Soviet Union, KGB secret base. Lancelot sat on the sofa, the bird in his eyes gradually receded, and when the bird disappeared completely, Lancelot also lost contact with Sabretooth Victor. Lancelot didn't have any dissatisfaction with Victor Sabretooth not bringing back Wolverine Logan. For Lancelot, Wolverine Logan at this moment was far worse than Victor Sabretooth. Logan without adamantium is at best a level 4 mutant. Compared with Wolverine Logan, Sabretooth Victor's Geas runaway state gave Lancelot a lot of surprises. John. Lancelot tapped the table lightly. The air fluctuated slightly beside him, and then the Phantom John appeared in front of Lancelot. My lord, please order. Phantom John bowed and saluted, waiting respectfully for Lancelot's order. Bring Sabretooth Victor back. Lancelot handed Phantom John a map, and the coordinates of the map were the area where Sabretooth Victor was. Yes, my king. After taking the map marked by Lancelot, the Phantom John nodded respectfully to Lancelot, and then turned into a phantom and disappeared. And just as Phantom John used his teleportation ability to leave Lancelot's room, White Queen Emma in a sexy white skirt walked in. Lancelot, our mutant evolution home has been remodeled. White Queen Emma first gave Lancelot a deep kiss, and then said with a graceful smile, Emma, thank you for your hard work. Lancelot pulled Emma into his arms casually. This was the second news he received after Sabretooth Victor's Geas went berserk. As early as after Lancelot killed General Maxim Ivanov, he ordered Raven to transform into Maxim, and together with White Queen Emma, he controlled almost half of the KGB agents in the Soviet Union. In just a few days, Lancelot became the half-master of the KGB secret intelligence agency of the Soviet Union. Moreover, in the past few days, Lancelot has stamped his own Geas thought stamp on these KGB agents. These KGB agents have truly become Lancelot's strength. Thanks to the intensified Cold War confrontation between the Soviet Union and the United States, neither the high-level Soviet Union nor the other high-level KGB officials found that their agents had changed hands. Let's go see our second home. Lancelot stood up and walked out of the office with White Queen Emma. Standing on the high platform in front of the office, Lancelot overlooked the KGB agents below. The agents who were busy at first stopped their work at this moment. Line up. A KGB agent with a rough appearance and a height of 1.9 meters shouted frantically in Soviet language. Tread, tread. All the KGB agents lined up neatly, put their feet together vigorously, quickly adjusted their military uniforms with both hands, and then raised their left hands above their heads, performing the most solemn salute ceremony in the Soviet Union. My king hail. The several thousand kilograms of GB agents made the most fanatical voices, and they looked at Lancelot with fiery eyes, waiting for Lancelot's order. Prepare a plane for me. Lancelot looked at the neat formation below, his eyes were full of approval, and then he opened his mouth to give an order. Lancelot does not understand the Soviet language, but this does not prevent him from giving orders. You must know that Geas orders ignore language. Even if a deaf mute, as long as Lancelot gives an order, he will clearly hear and understand it. Hurrah! The group of KGB agents yelled wildly, and then began to quickly prepare the plane for Lancelot. Only 5 minutes later, a fighter jet appeared in front of Lancelot. At this moment, Lancelot was standing on the tarmac, waiting for Phantom John, while looking at this somewhat old fighter with great interest. Mr. Lancelot, this is the fighter we captured during World War II. It was originally a fighter model newly developed by a secret department of NC. We haven't successfully deciphered its fighter engine yet. Behind Lancelot, a graceful figure, the blonde woman with a voluptuous figure came over, seemed to see Lancelot's interest, and spoke. Secret department? Lancelot's eyes fell on the wing of the fighter jet. In the center of the wing, there was a very conspicuous skull logo. Maybe the group of KGB agents didn't know what the skull meant, but Lancelot knew it very well. Hydra. The tentacle-like sign under the skull means that if one head is cut off, 2 more will grow. Claire Valeon. Or should I call you Black Widow? Lancelot turned his head, fixed his eyes on the blonde woman behind him, and said with interest, It is an honor to be at your service, sir. Soviet Union, KGB secret base. Lancelot stood in front of the tarmac, looking casually at the blonde beauty in front of him. It must be said that the person in front of him was a breathtaking stunner. Mr. Lancelot, it is my honor to serve you, Claire Valiant said with a sweet and captivating smile on her face, in a respectful and seductive tone. Woman, put away your tricks. Just as Claire released her charm, a voice as cold as a knife appeared in Claire's brain. Behind Claire, White Queen Emma walked gracefully. As her footsteps approached slowly, her brows were slightly frowned, and her spiritual power was constantly oppressing Claire. In front of the spiritual power of White Queen Emma, Claire was completely powerless to support, and fell to her knees directly, with a painful expression on her face. Stop it, Emma. Lancelot interrupted White Queen Emma's psychic power until Claire was almost unable to hold on and passed out. Thank you, Mr. Lancelot. The weak Claire raised his sweat-soaked head and looked at Lancelot and the White Queen Emma beside Lancelot in horror. Lancelot turned his head to look at Claire in front of him. For such a stunner, Lancelot didn't have the slightest idea. Although he is a man, he is not a stallion. It's not that when you see a woman's beauty, you want to communicate with her at a negative distance. What's more, Lancelot already has Mystique Raven and White Queen Emma, and with Mystique Raven, he has all the beauties in the world. Therefore, even though Claire in front of him was a natural beauty, Lancelot was still unmoved. Claire Wayan, from the Soviet secret agent organization Red House. Anyone who graduates from the Red House will be named Black Widow, and will suffer unimaginable torture and lose the chance to become a mother at the beginning of graduation. And Claire Valiant is the Black Widow of this era. As for Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, according to Lancelot's investigation, the current Natasha Romanoff has not yet been born. Obviously, the Natasha Romanoff of this universe followed the MCU setting and was born in 1984, not the centenarian said in the comics. I don't know how all the senior time travelers managed to keep their mouths open. Looking at the sexy stunner in front of him, Lancelot shook his head slightly regretfully and began to complain inwardly. Boom. When Lancelot was a little distracted by the first-generation Black Widow Claire, a phantom appeared in front of him, and then the Phantom John appeared with Sabretooth Victor and his assistant and driver Huggins. My lord, I failed. As soon as he appeared in the base, Sabretooth Victor's 2.5-meter-high body knelt down, his tiger eyes full of guilt. Okay, Victor, it was just a failure. Lancelot patted Sabretooth Victor on the shoulder casually and said comfortingly, as my fellow mutants, I allow you to keep making mistakes. Lancelot's tolerant words made all the mutants respect Lancelot even more, and White Queen Emma even looked at Lancelot with beautiful eyes. Emma, inject a vitality potion into our Miss Black Widow. After reassuring Sabretooth Victor, Lancelot once again looked at Black Widow Claire who was in panic, and ordered to White Queen Emma said, Obey my king's love. White Queen Emma readily agreed, and then took out a light yellow syringe from her bosom, and injected the syringe into Black Widow Claire's body. This is. After White Queen Emma finished injecting the potion, Claire the Black Widow, who had been limp on the ground, suddenly widened her eyes. She felt that all the cells in her body were boiling and cheering, and in just a few seconds, she felt that the previous weakness and exhaustion were swept away. Black Widow Claire jumped up from the ground. She felt great at the moment, full of vitality. She felt that she could maintain her peak state for a whole day. As a Black Widow from the Red House, Claire accidentally encountered a group of special and fanatical KGB agents during a mission a few days ago. Under Claire's secret investigation, she was shocked to find that behind this KGB agent, standing an extremely mysterious existence. In order to break into the inside of this mysterious organization, Black Widow Claire pretended to be captured, and then came to this base and met Lancelot. Black Widow's usual beauty tricks have no effect on this mysterious Mr. Lancelot. Claire can only pretend to swear allegiance to Lancelot. Originally, she thought that she would be tested for loyalty by this mysterious Mr. Lancelot, but what Claire never expected was that this Mr. Lancelot accepted her allegiance easily. There was no test, no brainwashing ceremony, and even random it seems to be disposing of a toy casually. Originally, Black Widow Claire was still mocking Lancelot's arrogance in his heart, but after seeing the mysterious existences today, Black Widow Claire was completely terrified. Let's go. It's time for us to see our second homeland. Lancelot ignored Black Widow Claire. He turned his head and gave instructions to his mutant comrades, and then boarded the fighter plane first, and the others followed closely follow. An hour later, the fighter plane landed on the icy Siberian ice sheet. Seen from a high altitude, the entire ice sheet is empty, only covered with ice and snow. But if you use professional equipment to detect it, you will find that under the ice sheet is a very large military base. When Lancelot entered the base through a special passage, even he was slightly shocked. The entire base is about the size of a small city file size, and the facilities inside are very complete, and the huge base can't be seen at a glance. The layout of the base is completely reduced in proportion to the city of Novosibirsk, and is divided into the inner city and the outer city. The outer city has all the living facilities and entertainment facilities on the ground, while the inner city is full of various laboratories, weapons research bases, etc. Wait. As expected of the Soviet Union, a secret military base has such specifications. Looking at the huge base in front of him, Lancelot couldn't help but praise him. This base was originally a secret military base of the Soviet Union, but because of the Cold War, all resources were given priority to the nuclear bomb base and space strategy. This military base, which used to have tens of thousands of people, was abandoned by the Soviet high level. However, the base is now cheaper than Lancelot. This will be the second home of our fellow mutants. Lancelot couldn't help but open his hands proudly, announcing, My king hail. Mutant hail. Inside the base, Mystique Raven came over with a group of scientists from the House of Mutant Evolution, shouting frantically, and saluted Lancelot respectfully. Siberia Ice Field, Mutant Evolution Home Base. Lancelot stood in this empty and huge base that looked like a small city, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Here will be the beginning of his mutant kingdom. The Soviet Union was sparsely populated, enough for Lancelot to toss around at will. My lord, I have brought over some of my comrades from the #1 base of the Mutant Evolution House. When Lancelot was looking at the base, in front of Lancelot, Mystique Raven walked over with a group of scientists. Very good, Raven. Lancelot looked at Mystique Raven walking over, nodded in satisfaction, and then let Raven stand by his side, looking towards the opposite side. My king. Under Lancelot's gaze, everyone knelt on one knee and shouted frantically to Lancelot. Many of these people are old-fashioned, but they are full of vitality, and each of them is more energetic than young people. Especially Dr. Leonard and Dr. Graham standing in front of the scientists. Dr. Graham was almost 70 years old, but his eyes were radiant, and half of his original white hair had turned black at this moment. As for Dr. Leonard, the changes are even more astonishing. He was old and dying, but now he is tall and straight, and the wrinkles on his face have completely disappeared. If it wasn't for his gray hair, he would even be younger than a 30-year-old. Young. Congratulations to the two doctors. It seems that the vitality potion and anti-aging serum have been successfully developed. Lancelot was not surprised at all. He just looked at the group of scientists in front of him with a smile on his face. On the road of evolution, Mutant has gone a long way, but this group of scientists can help Mutant go further. Science, in the long-term civilization of the Earth, is it not a genetic mutation, a variant civilization? Long ago, the House of Mutant Evolution conquered all human diseases except cancer through evolution master Darwin. Then Dr. Leonard started to work on Sabretooth Victor's self-healing factor research, and at the same time Darwin led scientists to conduct extreme compression experiments on cell vitality. Although the time is short now, with all the strength of the scientists of the entire evolution house, 2 medicines suitable for humans and mutants have been developed. Vitality Potion and Anti-Aging Potion. Vitality Agent, also known as cell activity stimulator, is a special factor discovered by Darwin in the process of constantly adapting to evolution. This factor can make the cells of the whole body full of vitality like a stimulant without side effects. When the Vitality Potion was developed, it was directly produced in batches, and then all the people in the mutant evolution house were allocated some Vitality Potion. And this group of scientists often took this Vitality Potion as a meal. When they felt tired, they immediately injected a Vitality Potion, and then continued to devote themselves to research work. It is also because of this that the bioengineering of the House of Evolution is rapidly improving at an exponential rate. My lord, you and your mutant comrades are the lighthouses of biological evolution. We have only achieved some results by relying on the guidance of the lighthouses. Dr. Leonard looked at Lancelot enthusiastically, and said from the bottom of his heart. Only after entering the House of Mutant Evolution, Dr. Leonard finally knew what mutant really meant. As Lancelot once said, mutant is a guiding beacon on the path of human evolution, a great explorer, and a great leader. Let's go. Take me to see how my mutant comrades are doing now. Lancelot waved his hand, and then ordered, "Yes, my king." Dr. Leonard and Dr. Graham nodded, and then ordered the scientists behind them to prepare a super luxurious car for Lancelot. Mutant, as a symbol of mutation and glory, needs to live in the inner city of the base according to Lancelot's regulations. Humans live in the outer city of the base. Definitely, those humans who have made great contributions to the base can also live in the inner city, just like the group of scientists in front of them. 10 minutes later, Lancelot and the others stopped at a huge amount of experimental building in the inner city. This is the center of the entire base, and there are agents from the House of Evolution stationed inside and outside the experimental building. Entering the experimental building, some scientists were conducting some seemingly complicated experiments, but Lancelot didn't stop to watch. He went directly to the top floor of the experimental building under the leadership of Dr. Leonard. After entering the top floor, Dr. Leonard led Lancelot to several huge amounts of liquid tanks. These metal grooves are filled with a green solution, and mutants with dissimilated bodies are soaking in the solution. First of all, Mr. Matthew Harlan. He is the most enthusiastic about injecting mutant growth hormone. Dr. Leonard walked to a metal groove and introduced it with some excitement. As early as a few days ago, after Lancelot ordered to inject mutant growth hormones into the previously recruited alienated mutants, Dr. Leonard has been busy with this matter. In order to prevent accidents, and to record the experimental data of various body mutations and alienation, and therefore after obtaining the consent of these people, Dr. Leonard placed all the mutants injected with growth hormone in the metal groove. The process of awakening is recorded by special experimental instruments. Laugh. Dr. Leonard pressed a button, the metal groove opened, and the original solution faded away like a tide. The mutant Toad in it stretched his waist as if waking up from hibernation, and then jumped out of the metal groove with both hands. My king. At this moment, Toad's head has completely returned to normal, just like a normal person, and there is no such sticky, heavy mountain feeling on his body anymore, and he feels very relaxed. Toad spanned a distance of 5 meters with just one jump. He knelt in front of Lancelot on one knee, looking at Lancelot with fanatical and reverent eyes, as if he was looking at a god. Matthew, my mutant comrade, show me your ability. Lancelot glanced at Toadman Matthew Harlan, and ordered, "Yes, my king." Toadman Matthew responded, and then he fell to the ground on all fours. His whole body began to inflate, as if inflated. In just a few seconds, a giant toad more than 3 meters high appeared in Lancelot in front of. Huge and wide mouth, strong jaw and teeth, extremely hard and strong skull, covered with jagged carapaces all over the body. The huge body crouched on the ground, like a colossus. My lord, this is my awakening state, and I call it the devil frog. The giant toad opened its mouth and made a wide sound. The sound was like a frog's cry, and it was like a muffled drum. Siberia Base, number 2 Mutant Evolution House. Since the Toadman Matthew Harlan completed awakening, there have been some mutant awakening with body alienation one after another. Among them is the mutant gray silk with strange patterns all over the body. After the injection of the mutant growth hormone, a pair of huge amounts of butterfly wings grew on the back of this Caucasian girl, and the original patterns were also automatically transferred to the above the wings. And her variant awakening state is to incarnate a butterfly with huge amounts of 2 meters. By flapping her wings, she can produce butterfly scale powder, which has some kind of hallucinogenic properties. The other mutant Clementine with cat eyes grew cat ears and claws after being injected with the mutant growth hormone, and her awakening state also became a black adult file size cat. Mutant Jack Yorkton, who has always had an extraordinary fanatical recognition of the mutant glory theory, is even more special after being injected with the medicine. The yellow scales that could only cover the face are all over the body, and he originally only had one. Michi's body soared to 2.7 meters, and his originally fair skin also turned blue. The combination of blue skin and yellow scales made his body sparkling, with an aesthetic feeling unique to the deep sea. Jack Yorkton has changed from a human to a murloc similar to Pirate World, and his strength and speed have all been greatly improved. The only regret is that he does not have an awakening state. It seems that this is what he looks like after the alienation gene is fully effective. It has to be said that when Jack Yorkton metamorphosis became a murloc, the scientists in the entire family of evolution became a sensation. For scientists, Jack Yorkton's murloc form just filled a gap in the scientific world. If humans don't leave the ocean, will they eventually evolve into murlocs? Even Lancelot couldn't help appearing in front of Jack Yorkton and gave him some encouragement and praise. My lord, Jack's experimental data is out. Inside Lancelot's room, Mystique Raven walked over with a copy of the experimental data and said with a chuckle. Lancelot took the experimental data in Raven's hands casually, and his eyes were shining like rubies. The strength, speed, and resilience are all 6 times that of human beings. If the scientists who study super soldier serum find out, they will go crazy. Lancelot looked at the experimental data in his hand playfully, then turned to face Raven looked over. Raven, how is the situation at Hellfire? Lancelot was more concerned about the situation at Hellfire Club than Murloc Jack's experimental data. The first decisive battle of Mutant is getting closer and closer. Hei Huang Shao of Hellfire Club is still flying around the world, avoiding Professor X's telepathy while continuing his nuclear explosion career. Hei Huang Shao had long forgotten White Queen Emma, and it never occurred to him that Professor X and Magneto would not be free to look for Hei Huang Shao now. The Cold War between the two superpowers is on the verge of breaking out. All kinds of warships and nuclear submarines have been deployed in the waters around Cuba at this moment, and they are gradually moving closer to Cuba. Hei Huang Shao also began to absorb the dissipated nuclear energy inside the nuclear submarine he snatched again, making himself stronger. And the Red Devil Isuzuo and the Rapids are inseparable from Hai Huang Xiao, like guards, always guarding Hai Huang Xiao's side. Even just 3 days ago, Black Emperor Shao relied on his own planning to finally meet General Maxim Ivanov, a powerful figure in the Soviet Union, and reached a pre-war alliance agreement with this general. And Hei Huang Shao never imagined that the so-called General Maxim he saw was his mutant compatriot Mystique Raven. Speaking of which, our mutant comrade, Hei Huang Shao is really a crazy mutant. Mystique Raven thought of facing the 3 comrades of Hellfire Club for the first time, and listened to Hei Huang Zhao's eloquent talk about the new era of nuclear explosions. She couldn't help laughing a little. Even she, the mutant, couldn't help but sigh at the madness of Hei Huang Shao. Yeah, the loss of White Queen Emma's telepathy made Hei Huang Shao a little restless, and it also made Hei Huang Shao lose himself. Lancelot took out a document from the table again. This document was Hellfire Club. The Red Devil Isuzuo was sent to the KGB base. It records all the plans of Hei Huang Shao in detail, as well as the tentative time to start the ultimate nuclear explosion 3 days later. In 3 days, Raven, go and tell Black Emperor Shao that the time he made was too hasty, and he postponed the plan to half a month later. Lancelot handed the document to Raven, and Raven immediately understood. Nodded. I see, my king. I will let them postpone the plan. But, before you do it again, please let me serve you. Mystique Raven showed a smile on his face, and the whole person instantly transformed into a very beautiful beauty. Impressively, it looks like Black Widow Claire, and her figure is even more exaggerated than Black Widow. Raven, that's why I like you. Lancelot had a smile on his face, and then stepped forward to hug the stunner in front of him. While Lancelot and Raven were playing poker, 100 meters underwater in the high seas, a nuclear submarine was quietly moored, and inside the submarine, Black Emperor Shao, Red Devil Asazo, Rapids, and Dragonfly Girl Salvador were all frowning at this moment. Azazuo, are you saying that you haven't found Professor X and Magneto? Black Emperor Shao was wearing a spiritual defense helmet at the moment, and looked at the Red Devil Asazuo, standing in front of him with a little irritability. Since losing White Queen Emma, Black Emperor Shao has been keeping that somewhat ugly helmet on his head. Even when he is sleeping, he dare not take it off. He once fought against Professor X and Magneto for a short time. Hai Wangxiao didn't care about Magneto's ability. No matter how powerful Magneto was, it was all cultivated by Hai Wangxiao, still as weak and pitiful as when he was a child. What really makes Black Emperor Shao afraid is the spiritual power of Professor X, which is a powerful power that White Queen Emma has never possessed. In the face of Professor X's huge spiritual power, even Emma can only temporarily avoid the edge. It is a psychic power that can easily erase the consciousness of others. This kind of power made Hai Wangxiao dare not face Professor X alone without any protective measures. Even with the passage of time, Professor X has become a heart problem for Hai Wangxiao. He desperately wants to find the positions of Professor X and Magneto, and then go directly to the door and forcibly kill Professor X. However, what made Hai Wangxiao restless was that Professor X and Magneto seemed to have evaporated from the world, and no matter how hard they searched, they could not be found. How's the situation at Maxim's side? Black Emperor Shao asked the Red Devil Azazuo again. The Red Devil is the only mutant of the 5th level space system. As long as it is an area where the Earth exists, he can reach it in an instant, and the Phantom John, even if it spans a small half of the Earth, is extremely reluctant. Therefore, the Red Devil Azazuo became the right-hand man of the Black Emperor Shao. I've already sent our plan to the KGB base, but I haven't received a response yet. The Red Devil Azazuo shook his head. The complicated and religious patterns on his red skin made him look like a real devil. Phew, I see. I will continue to absorb nuclear energy for the next few days. I will leave this place to you. Once Maxim agrees to our plan, we will act immediately. Hai Wangxiao opened a dark room and left go in, and the metal door closes. He wants to accumulate strength, and he wants to take advantage of the last moment of civilization to absorb as much power as possible, so that his mutant new future after the nuclear explosion can still become the Black Emperor and surpass Mutant. My lord, I'll take my leave first. In Lancelot's office, Mystique Raven, who had ended his poker career, smiled sweetly at Lancelot, and then left the room. What a sexy stunner. Lancelot's face is full of smiles. As Mystique, Raven can simulate any female body, and what makes Lancelot most satisfied is that Raven is always changing his appearance and body constantly. Thousands of faces, let Lancelot linger. Phew, my body can't take it anymore. The body of a normal person really can't satisfy me now. Lancelot let out a slight breath, and couldn't help but said with a wry smile, it is imminent to solve my weak body. Fortunately, there are still 20 days until the lucky draw for God-level pupil art. I hope this time the lucky draw can change my frail body. Lancelot couldn't help but said hopefully. Unknowingly, Lancelot has been in the Marvel world for almost 3 months, and the God-level pupil lottery system will conduct a pupil lottery draw every 3 months. Ever since getting Geas, Lancelot has been looking forward to what pupil spell he will get in the second draw. According to the prompt of the system, even if it is a secondary lottery, the drawn pupils will still exceed Lancelot's imagination. In this Marvel world without pupil techniques, there are many secondary pupil techniques, which can also be called God-level pupil techniques. Lancelot is looking forward to this very much. John. Lancelot straightened his clothes, then tapped the table lightly. Boom. A phantom appeared in front of Lancelot, and then Phantom John took off his Western cowboy hat, bowed slightly, and waited for Lancelot's order. Take me to the CIA headquarters. Lancelot stood up, put his right hand on the Phantom John's shoulder, and ordered. Yes, my king. Phantom John nodded to Lancelot, and then disappeared into the office with Lancelot. United States, Virginia, CIA headquarters. Bradley was sitting leisurely on a luxurious sofa at the moment, surrounded by monitor screens. Beside Bradley, there are several CIA staff responsible for sorting out information, and they all look at Bradley respectfully at this moment. Mr. Bradley, please also pass this information on to Field Agent Johnson. A young and beautiful female agent looked at Bradley adoringly at the moment, and then handed a document to Bradley respectfully. In front of Ledley. Okay. Bradley glanced at the document, and then pressed his right hand on his temple. Far away in the CIA safe house in Las Vegas, the fax machine in the room was completely unplugged, and started to work, and then an encrypted file was sent out. After the documents were sent out, Agent Johnson, who had been staying in the safe house, took the documents and left here directly. Done. Bradley put down his right hand and snapped his fingers easily. At this moment, Bradley just feels like a fish in water. As a mutant, he has the ability to control any electronic device through his mind. This kind of mind manipulation is not a psychic power like Professor X. In fact, according to the research of scientists at the Mutant Evolution House, when Bradley released the ability, his thoughts would turn into a special electronic pulse command. At this time, Bradley's brain completely became a huge signal tower, an intelligent control center. It is also because of this that Bradley can control any electronic device just by relying on what he thinks in his heart, and this electronic pulse has stable energy fluctuations. Bradley can use the electronic pulse released by his thoughts to give power some unpowered devices. It is also because of Bradley's power that Lancelot sent him here to constantly exercise his mutant ability with various electronic equipment from the CIA. Just when Bradley was about to show off to the girl beside him, a phantom appeared in this room. Then Lancelot walked out of the phantom, and the Phantom John disappeared in a teleport again. My king. Bradley immediately stood up from his seat after seeing who was coming, and then stood respectfully in front of Lancelot. Bradley, how do you feel? Lancelot glanced at Bradley and asked. Lancelot has some expectations for Bradley. In Lancelot's view, Bradley's variant ability still has a lot of room for development. He wants to train Bradley into Ultron. Even if he can't reach the level of Ultron, he must reach the level of JRVS created by Tony Stark. It is only 1962. The internet has not yet become popular, and there is still plenty of time left for Bradley to grow up. My lord, I feel great. Through the CIA's control system, I feel that my mind can extend far. Lancelot said excitedly. As long as it is an electronic device, whether it is a household appliance, a lamp, a pager, a telephone, or a military device, an encrypted satellite phone, the internet, a computer, or even a medical device, etc., he can control it. Moreover, as long as these electronic devices are in the same central control system, Bradley can override his thoughts. Very good, Bradley. Lancelot nodded. In fact, it was the current era that limited Bradley's performance. If it is the modern age of the 21st century, the mobile internet has almost become globalized and family-oriented. I believe that Bradley's mutant level will also become a level 4 or even a level 5 mutant. However, Professor X's brainwave strengthening machine may be able to enhance Bradley's mind control area. Lancelot looked at Bradley and inevitably thought of Professor X's brainwave strengthening machine. Moreover, the brainwave strengthening device is also an electronic device. In theory, Bradley can control it through his mind. Bradley, turn on the surveillance video of Xavier Manor. Lancelot came back to his senses, ordered casually, and then sat on the sofa. After receiving Lancelot's order, Bradley pressed his right hand on his temple again and manipulated a projector to project the monitoring screen of Xavier Manor onto a huge curtain. Maybe even Professor X doesn't know that hundreds of pinhole cameras have already been buried by CIA agents in his home. This was before Lancelot took control of the CIA headquarters, and Humferson had already ordered the agent to go to the Xavier Manor to make some arrangements. As expected of Beast Hank, he has built a brainwave strengthening device again. Lancelot was sitting on the sofa at the moment, gazing at the picture in front of him leisurely. In the picture is a manor with huge amounts of. The manor occupies a huge area. The former Professor X's parents are well-known super rich in New York, and their Xavier family is a former British aristocrat. However, times have changed. With the end of World War II, Professor X's parents passed away one after another, leaving only this luxurious manor and a huge inheritance for Professor X. Yes, the famous Professor X is a super rich. This is also one of the reasons why Professor X has always been unwilling to be an enemy of human beings. Professor X can be said to have grown up with a golden spoon in his mouth, and even the inheritance left by his parents is enough for him to spend 2 lifetimes. He has never experienced after seeing the hardships of the people. It is impossible to understand the dire straits of the mutants at the bottom. Lancelot looked at the huge manor in front of him with complicated eyes. Compared with his number 1 evolution home, the manor in front of him was not far behind. The Xavier Manor is really too big. In the center of the manor is a majestic building like a medieval castle. On both sides of the castle, there are rows of buildings. The buildings are like wings, guarding the castle in the center. At this moment, Lancelot is setting his eyes on the garden behind the castle. In the center of the garden is a hemispherical receiver with huge amounts of it, which is slowly rotating at this moment. Brainwave strengthening machine. Next to the brainwave strengthening machine, Professor X and Magneto are fine-tuning the direction of the brainwave strengthening machine according to Hank's instructions. Charles, can they really grow into qualified fighters? Magneto opened his right hand at the moment and asked seriously while adjusting the direction of the brainwave strengthening machine. Definitely, Eric. I have great confidence in them. Professor X shrugged, and then reached out and pinched the bridge of his nose. 4 days have passed since he met Sabretooth and fled back to Xavier Manor in embarrassment. During these 4 days, Professor X spent 3 days adjusting his mental strength and brain, and he finally recovered completely yesterday. Come over. And his good friend Magneto is also in the same situation as him. He was injured in the battle with Sabretooth Victor, who was in a state of rampage. He was lying in the hospital for 4 days and has not recovered until now. Come on, Eric. You should also improve your ability. Professor X glanced at Magneto and had to say that the battle with Victor Sabretooth made them all realize their own shortcomings, especially when Victor turned into a 5-meter giant Sabretooth. The feeling of oppression made the two of them almost unable to return. So, learn from the pain. The first thing Professor X did when he came back was to formulate the X-Men training plan. He provided a complete set of training plans according to each variant ability. Now these X-Men have been training for 4 days, and everyone has made some progress. Now it's time to train Magneto. Concentrate, forget the hatred, and recall the most peaceful moment in your heart. Professor X followed the persuasion and used the power of the mind to enter Magneto's brain. And as Wong Ping calmed down, Magneto's power to manipulate metal also increased geometrically, and he opened his right hand, aiming at another huge amounts of windmill in the distance. As time went by, the windmill, which was originally motionless, began to turn slowly under the control of Magneto, and then turned faster and faster, until the blades of the windmill were no longer visible. I made it, Charles. I made it. Magneto clenched his right hand excitedly, far away from him. The flying car that was spinning rapidly stopped suddenly. At this moment, Magneto felt that if he met Sabretooth Victor again, he would definitely not be as embarrassed as before. And Professor X has come to the X-Men at this moment. Looking at the X-Men in front of him, Professor X nodded to Beast Hank. He has been adjusting his brain for the past few days, and the training of the X-Men has been completed with the help of Hank. Even the equipment worn by the X-Men was developed by Hank. Professor X looked at the Siren Sean Cassidy, who was standing in the first place. The Siren Sean in front of him was wearing a set of hang glider. Hands can reach in. Kraken, let's test your training results in the past few days. Professor X glanced at Sean the Kraken, and then reminded him. Okay, Professor. Siren Sean was already eager to try, and he quickly reached the top of the castle, more than 40 meters above the ground. The Siren attacks. Sean the Siren made a gesture towards Professor X and the others below, and then let out a strange cry, with a sharp sound wave from his mouth, and his whole body jumped directly. The sound waves were transmitted to the ground layer by layer, and the sea monster turned and moved in the sky relying on the sound waves, screaming excitedly. And Professor X glanced at Sean the Siren in the sky with satisfaction, and then looked at Shockwave Alex Summers. At this moment, Alex is wearing a special disc device on his chest, which can concentrate the energy rays in his body on his chest. Boom. Shockwave Alex clenched his hands tightly. A ball of dazzling red light emerged from his body, and then a beam of huge amounts of red energy rubbed Professor X's scalp and hit a big tree behind Professor X. Under the bombardment of the energy beam, the big tree was instantly shattered into pieces, and then the whole tree began to burn violently. Hank, it's your turn. Professor X looked at Beast Hank, but at the moment Hank was showing a little resistance. Obviously, he still can't identify himself as a mutant. However, compared to the conflict in the original plot, Hank is no longer conflicted about his identity after being exposed to the theory of mutant glory expounded by Lancelot. Sorry, Professor, I'm not ready yet. After struggling for a moment, Hank McCoy still shook his head. After all, he couldn't convince himself that he was going to inject the mutant inhibitor when he went back. Okay, Hank, follow your inner choice. Professor X just looked at Hank with some helplessness, stretched out his hand and patted Hank on the shoulder, and then turned his head to look at the last X-Men. Logan, are you still adapting here? Professor X asked Wolverine Logan with a gentle face. I'm fine here, Professor. Wolverine Logan, smoking a cigar, glanced down at Professor X before replying. At this moment, Wolverine Logan is wearing an X-Men combat uniform. Compared with Kraken and others, she wants to be a qualified X-Men. Logan, I hope you can forgive me in the future. Professor X's eyes flashed with guilt, but then he adjusted. Let's go see what Miss Moore is up to. Professor X turned around and left the training ground with Wolverine Logan. Wolverine Logan didn't need a training camp. The reason why he stayed with these little kids these days was just to relieve the fact that he was defeated by his mutant brother Sabretooth Victor. Compared to saving the world, Wolverine Logan's greater wish is to become stronger, at least to catch up with his mutant brother Victor. Bradley, keep monitoring the X-Men. They should be training for a long time. Lancelot stood up from the sofa, gave Bradley a brief instruction, and then left the room. Now the first battle of Mutant has entered the final preparations for the decisive battle. Lancelot has already seen the strength of the X-Men, and it will take at least half a month to form a fighting force. If it wasn't for Lancelot's secret plan to suppress the Hellfire Club, I'm afraid this group of X-Men would be forced to go to the battlefield tomorrow, and then they would be easily killed by the Black King Shao. However, the only thing that surprised me was that Professor X finally learned to hide. Lancelot sighed a little. After the life and death crisis before, this young Professor X finally knew that there are people beyond people, and there is a sky beyond the sky. He is no longer blindly arrogant, and has even begun to learn to hide. According to what Bradley monitored, after Professor X and Magneto returned to Xavier Manor, they used their psychic power to cover the entire manor. Anyone who sees the Xavier Manor will subconsciously ignore its existence, forget their original purpose, and walk away from here uncontrollably. It is also because of this that the Xavier Manor is clearly located here, but the Red Devil Azazel has been back and forth more than 10 times in the past few days, but he still has not found the appearance of the Xavier Manor. Perhaps, I should also build such a spiritual protection field. Lancelot's ruby eyes shone with a deep brilliance. At present, the Mutant Evolution House is tackling the evolution of the biological body. It seems that it is time to put the evolution of the mind on the agenda. John, take me to House of Evolution number 1. After Lancelot walked out of the room, he whistled softly, and the Phantom John suddenly appeared in front of Lancelot. After Phantom John appeared, he bowed to Lancelot, and then brought Lancelot to the number 1 Mutant Evolution House in Virginia. In the entire House of Evolution, thousands of scientists are conducting their own experiments in the laboratory at this moment, and Darwin's female assistant, Rena, is also wearing a scientific white coat at this moment, and is looking at the experimental platform in front of her intently. Lancelot didn't disturb the experiment of Rena and others. He just walked to the observation window and looked at the experiment platform. On the test bench was a strong white man. At this moment, the man was lying on the bench a little nervously and excitedly, staring at the experimental equipment in front of him. This man is called Isaac Monroe. He is an ordinary human being. He originally had a perfect family, but a year ago he suffered from leukemia. In this era, leukemia is synonymous with death. And to make matters worse, Isaac Monroe did not purchase medical insurance in order to save money, which meant that Isaac had to pay huge medical diagnosis fees. He really couldn't afford it. In order not to drag his family down, he left without saying goodbye and became a homeless man. For a year, he was constantly suffering from leukemia, and his body was getting thinner and thinner. Just when he was about to wait for death in despair, he was found by a group of mysterious organizations. This group of organizations called themselves the House of Evolution, a scientific research organization that helped humans step into evolution. Now this organization needs some people to conduct human experiments, and they chose themselves. Isaac doesn't care about mysterious organizations, the House of Evolution, etc. For ordinary people, even the most notorious Hydra organization is very far away from them. What really moved Isaac's heart was that the organization said that he had the ability to heal him. He didn't want to die, so he agreed. After that, he was taken to a mysterious base, and after being given a simple injection, he was taken to a room to recuperate by himself. Since Isaac was injected with a light yellow liquid, he felt as if his body had been reborn, and he felt that his body was recovering rapidly. 3 days later, Isaac has become like a normal person. In just 3 days, his terminal illness was cured, which made Isaac full of shock and interest in this mysterious organization called Evolution House. In the next few days, Isaac discovered that he could walk around the living area at will, which allowed him to see many creatures that he couldn't even imagine. There are mice that can live in water, cat with wings, a fish swimming constantly within the sand. There are even puffer fish that float in the air like balloons, a puppy with metallic skin. At this moment, Isaac Monroe felt as if he had entered a fantasy zoo, and everything in front of him made him feel unbelievable. Mutation and glory. Just as Isaac fell into shock, a black man in a scientific white coat walked over beside him. Can blacks still become scientists? Looking at the black scientist in front of him, Isaac Monroe frowned slightly. This era is the most serious moment of racism. It's really a bad white supremacist. The black scientist snorted coldly. As the assistant of the scientist Rena, he was going to eat, but he was ridiculed by the guy in front of him. He decided to give this person nothing. An experimental subject who understands a lesson that will never be forgotten. The black scientist took out a light golden box from his pocket. He gently opened the box and began to choose a suitable injection. Skin metallization? This potion is not stable yet. Pass. It doesn't work if you turn it into rock, and the bones in your body will also turn into rock. Growing wings from a body? Flashy. Why did Master Darwin adapt to so many evolutionary methods? Isaac Monroe looked at the black scientist in front of him with some doubts and muttered for a long time before taking out a shining syringe from the pale golden box, and then under Isaac's blank gaze, the black scientist injected the syringe into his right arm. Base. Following the injection of the syringe, the veins on the black scientist's arm exploded, and then 3 bone claws popped out from the back of his hand. Mommy fuck. Isaac looked at the scene in front of him in horror, and felt as if he was dreaming for a while. Pissed. Without any explanation, the black scientist pierced the bone claw of his right hand into Isaac Monroe's chest. Isaac only felt a sharp pain in his chest, and then fell into a coma. This is a lesson for you. Remember, this is the home of evolution. As a human being, you must always remain humble, because there will always be races greater than us here that are forging ahead and helping us evolve. Oh, by the way, when you wake up, learn about the variant glory theory of the great king. Before he fell into a coma, Isaac Monroe heard the indifferent words of admonition from the black scientist, and at the same time, he felt that something was being injected into his right arm. The effect of the quick healing potion is stronger. It's just that the lasting effect of the mutant serum is too short. It can only last for 1 minute. After the black scientist injected the quick healing potion into Isaac, he began to take out his portable experiment notebook and began to record everything here. Down. Mutation and glory. Once terminally ill, homeless, white supremacist racist, Isaac Monroe transformed. Ever since he was taught by that black scientist, Isaac has changed. Taking advantage of the few days before the experiment on the experimental body, Isaac began to study the theory of variant evolution in the library of the living area. With the deepening of his studies, Isaac had a clear concept of mutant glory and mutant evolution, especially after seeing that ordinary humans can also become supermans, defeating illness, aging, and even death. Isaac Monroe, a former white supremacist, became a fanatical proponent of mutant evolution. In the past few days, he has been frantically learning about mutations and the glorious theory of evolution of mutations, and he can't wait to join the human experiment. Glory and evolution. Isaac Monroe, who was lying on the experimental table, came back from his own thoughts, and he shouted frantically, and the originally nervous mood calmed down. Dr. Rena, let's get started. In front of the test bench, a scientist assistant reminded Rena, who was wearing a scientific white coat. My king hail. This is the first time Rena presides over a scientific experiment, and it is such an important human experiment. There was also a hint of apprehension in her eyes, but then the shadow of Lancelot appeared in her mind, as well as the voice and smile of her mentor, evolution master Dr. Darwin. Dr. Rena took a deep breath, walked directly to the side of the experimental subject Isaac Monroe, and then skillfully began to debug the directed evolution device. Isaac Monroe, tell me your choice. Maintain yourself, or choose to evolve. After adjusting the directed evolution device, Dr. Rena looked at Isaac with a cold gaze, and then asked seriously wrote. As early as when he became a test subject, Isaac Monroe had already signed an agreement that the House of Evolution would be responsible for treating his terminal illness, and he himself would become the test subject of the House of Evolution. Isaac Monroe has only one chance to choose. If he maintains himself and ends up becoming an experimental subject, the price is to be erased from the memory here and thrown out of here. From then on, he will never have a chance with the House of Evolution. Once you choose to continue to evolve, it means that Isaac agrees to the experiment, and Isaac will receive the friendship and honor of the family of evolution. Evolve the future. Mutation and glory. Seeing Dr. Rena's serious expression, Isaac was silent for a moment, then raised his arms and shouted. No one is willing to be ordinary, and no one is willing to be mediocre. I choose to evolve. Isaac's firm words won the approval of the scientists present, and they spontaneously applauded and cheered for Isaac. In that case, let's enter the directed evolution cabin. Dr. Rena nodded, and then opened the streamlined training cabin of the directed evolution instrument, allowing Isaac to enter it. After Isaac entered the training cabin, Dr. Rena closed the hatch, and skillfully took a Rubik's Cube box full of sci-fi colors from the assistant's hand. Then, Isaac Monroe, choose your direction of evolution. Dr. Rena held the Rubik's Cube in her hand, and asked again. Underwater breathing, heat resistance in deserts, metallized skin, anaerobic respiration, and ancestral evolution. Dr. Rue Na said the evolutionary directions one by one, and other scientists have long been accustomed to it. Isaac Monroe was blown away, breathing underwater. It didn't take long for Isaac to choose his own evolutionary direction. Since he was a child, Isaac had a deep yearning and fear for the ocean, so he heard that he could breathe underwater. After breathing, he directly made his choice. As you wish, Isaac. Dr. Rena nodded, then lightly tapped on the Rubik's Cube, took out a light golden evolution serum from it, and injected it into the cultivation cabin. The first evolution experiment has begun. Dr. Rena's face became serious, and then she directly turned on the evolution serum input and directional incubator of the directional evolution instrument. A group of dazzling golden light rose from the training cabin, and then illuminated the entire laboratory in a magnificent manner. It hurts. An hour later, Isaac Monroe's painful roar came from the training cabin. After hearing Isaac's painful voice, Dr. Rena frowned slightly, and then looked at the scientist behind him. Inject Isaac with analgesic serum. Dr. Rena's order was issued, and the scientist immediately got busy. 5 minutes later, the painful expression on Isaac Monroe's face disappeared, and the analgesic serum made him unable to feel the pain in his body at all. 2 hours later, in the training cabin, Isaac Monroe's body wasted away at a speed visible to the naked eye, and soon became skinny. Inject vitality potions and nutrients. Looking at the vital signs of Isaac in front of him, Dr. Reyna calmly ordered. And after Isaac's body was infused with vitality potions and nutrients, he recovered, as if inflated again. In the next 4 hours, 2 parotid glands appeared on both sides of Isaac's shoulders, and fish-like alveoli appeared in his lungs. Evolved cells integrate 95%. The experimental subjects have no adverse reactions. Directed evolution integrate 84%. The physical characteristics of the experimental body are good. The parotid gland, the directed evolution organ, is integrated with the cells of the shoulder according to the predetermined plan. The style is beautiful and light. Alveoli that can adjust water gravity appear in the lungs, and the experimental subjects have no adverse reactions so far. The voices of scientists sounded in the laboratory, and as the scientists reported, the serious expression on Dr. Reyna's face gradually relaxed. Evolutionary cells integrate 100%. Directed evolution integrates 100%. Directed evolution organ parotid gland and experimental body perfectly integrate. Our experiment was a success. We created an evolutionary. Dr. Reyna looked at the data in front of her and suddenly jumped up excitedly, and she announced loudly with an excited expression. Boom. Following Dr. Reyna's words, the scientists in the entire laboratory were excited, and Lancelot, who had been standing in front of the observation window watching this experiment, couldn't help but smile. You have created history, and the House of Evolution will be honored by your research. Lancelot walked to the center of the laboratory, looked at Dr. Reyna and others with admiration, and praised. My king. After Lancelot appeared, all the scientists stopped cheering, spontaneously stroked their chests with their right hands, and bowed to salute. Dedicate yourself to my king, until you die. All the scientists shouted enthusiastically in unison. Variation and glory. The future will shine because of you. Lancelot nodded, and then looked at Isaac Monroe, the first evolutionary created by the House of Evolution. The first directed evolution experiment of the Mutant Evolution House successfully created the first evolutionary, Isaac Monroe. Lancelot personally tested the data of Iskar Monroe. When Isaac Monroe was in the water, the shoulders would automatically open the 2 parotid glands, and automatically close the lung respiratory system, transforming into the parotid gland respiratory system. Moreover, unlike humans who will be disturbed by the water flow when entering the water, the special alveoli in Isaac Monroe's lungs will open after entering the water. Through the special alveoli, Isaac can adjust his center of gravity in the water as he likes. This allowed him to swim in the water like a fish following the current, adjust his alveoli, lower the gravity, and run on the underwater riverbed with his legs. According to Lancelot's tests, Isaac can run twice as fast underwater as he can run on land. After Isaac left the water, the parotid glands on his shoulders would automatically close, leaving only 3 marks similar to horizontal tattoos on his shoulders. Unless he enters the water again, the other respiratory system in his body will not have any impact on his life. After confirming Isaac's experimental data, Lancelot left the laboratory, and he still had a lot of things to deal with. Dr. Spencer, how is the development of the biological weapon program? Lancelot came to the core experimental area of the House of Evolution and found Dr. Spencer, the person in charge of the weapon research and development program here. Dr. Spencer, originally a cutting-edge weapon research engineer, has been ordered by Lancelot to study some special weapons after he became a scientist in the House of Evolution. My king hail. Dr. Spencer is a handsome middle-aged scientist with blonde hair. His handsome face is full of respect at the moment. After saluting, Dr. Spencer brought Lancelot to the core area of the weapons laboratory, where a group of scientists were debugging several pieces of sci-fi equipment. My lord, this is the steel wing that we cultivated based on Mr. Aaron's cells. Dr. Spencer brought Lancelot to a huge amount of steel wing, and said excitedly, looking at the smooth wings in front of him, shining with metallic luster, Lancelot nodded slightly, then gently opened his right hand, and pressed on the steel wings. Base. With the touch of Lancelot's right hand, the steel wings seemed to come alive. A pair of wings opened automatically, and metal feathers began to extend from the center. These metal feathers automatically covered Lancelot's back, and then connected with Lancelot's body. The skin is perfectly integrated together. This steel wing also combines the evolutionary adaptation cells of Master Darwin, and has added the characteristics of Mr. Bradley's mind control device. When used, it can be used like an arm and a finger, and can be sent and received at will. Dr. Spencer looked at Lancelot, wearing steel wings, introduced again. Swish. Lancelot concentrated slightly. The huge steel wings behind him spread out, and Lancelot also flew into the air directly. It's not bad. What about the others? Lancelot simply tested it, and then separated the steel wings from his body. The biological weapon plan is not just a piece of steel wing equipment. In fact, Dr. Spencer did not disappoint Lancelot, and he presented 3 special biological weapons to Lancelot again. A potential energy conversion energy gun developed by Gambit Remy's potential energy conversion kinetic energy and explosive variant ability. This energy gun can convert potential energy into kinetic energy, release a red energy beam, and has the characteristic of exploding when it hits an object. The other is a biological variant armor developed by Sabretooth Victor and other animal mutant body mutations. Dr. Spencer named it Beast God General. And the last one is a kind of conscious memory infusion device developed according to the spiritual ability mutant, such as White Queen Emma. Through this device, you can instill other people's knowledge into your own brain. Dr. Spencer has already done it after passing the test. A soldier of the family of evolution has all the biological knowledge of a doctor of biology. Other biological weapons programs include teleporter, space teleportation device. The Beast God made the biological armor. Let our people test it, and if there are no problems, let's mass produce it. Lancelot inspected the biological weapon plan, and then gave orders to Dr. Spencer. Of order, my king. Dr. Spencer nodded excitedly. He had wanted to test his biological armored Beast General for a long time. John, send these pieces of equipment to Raven. Lancelot randomly selected a set of Beast Generals and a few energy guns, and handed them to the Phantom John behind him. After taking over the weapon device in Lancelot's hand, Phantom John disappeared here immediately, and Lancelot walked out of the core area of the Evolution House, and came to the living area. Because the number 2 House of Evolution requires a large number of people to build, the living area that was originally full of people seems a little deserted. And at the moment in the leisure area of the living area, mutant Silver Fox Carla is looking at the girl who is exercising in front of her with a smile on her face. Carla's sister Anna. At this moment, Anna, with the help of the mutant gene stabilizer, has been able to freely control her mutant ability. Although sometimes it will turn into a stream of water due to emotional agitation, but it will no longer be life-threatening. Sister, what are you thinking? Anna was manipulating the water glass in front of her, and the water in the glass was slowly converging towards her palm, but then she saw the absent-minded Silver Fox Carla. My king. Silver Fox Carla made no secret of her thoughts. Since seeing Lancelot, she has been deeply attracted by Lancelot. It is a kind of kingly temperament, and no woman can refuse this kind of temperament. No woman wants to be queen. However, Silver Fox Carla can only think about it. After all, her figure is not as good as Mystique Raven, and her appearance is not as good as White Queen Emma. With these 2 women around, she has no advantage. However, if it's Anna, with her mutant ability, she must be able to please my king. Silver Fox Carla looked at Anna. Anna also has a beautiful face, and compared to White Queen and Mystique, Anna, who is only 19 years old, looks pure and tender. Moreover, Anna's variant ability is to manipulate water flow, and her body can also be transformed into water flow to a certain extent. Anna, come with me to meet my king. Looking at her younger sister Anna, Silver Fox Carla became more and more satisfied. She grabbed Anna's arm and was about to take Anna to find Lancelot. Carla, do you want to see me? Lancelot looked at the 2 girls in front of him, then chuckled. My king. X2. Silver Fox Carla and Anna turned around and saw Lancelot immediately, which made their eyes shine, staring at Lancelot enthusiastically, and bowed in salute. Anna, stay with me for now. Lancelot came to the living area, originally for Anna. Anna is the only one of Lancelot's subordinates who has an elemental ability like Iceman and Pyro. As long as Anna can grow up, she will be able to reach the level of a 6th level mutant just like Iceman and Pyroman. Obey, my king. Anna was a little flattered after hearing Lancelot's words. She was stunned for a long time before finally reacting, and hurriedly stood beside Lancelot. Silver Fox Carla, you can manage this base for now. Lancelot glanced at Silver Fox Carla, and then gave a simple order. Yes, my king. Although Silver Fox Carla was a little disappointed, she still responded enthusiastically to Lancelot. In Las Vegas, a stretch Lincoln parked at a private club. The car door opened, and Mystique Raven in the form of Maxim Ivanov stepped down, holding a lockbox in her right hand. As Raven got out of the car, several mutants in suits quickly followed behind Raven. My lord, I'm coming in. Raven, transformed into Maxim, touched his ear after entering the private club. In the CIA headquarters building, Lancelot was sitting on the main seat. Beside him stood the water figure Anna, and in front of him was Bradley, who was using his mind to remotely control electronic equipment. At this moment, Bradley has already controlled the surveillance equipment around Raven through his mind, and projected the surveillance video in front of Lancelot through a projector. Looking at Mystique Raven in the picture, Lancelot showed a smile on his face. The reason why Mystique Raven turned into General Maxim Ivanov this time was to meet the Hellfire Club. Raven, when the time is right, you can disclose the X-Men's special training to Black Emperor Shao. Lancelot tapped the table lightly, and then reminded. Under Bradley's ability, Lancelot can easily transmit his words to the Raven headset in Las Vegas even without a communication device. Okay, my king. After hearing Lancelot's order, Mystique Raven nodded, and then swept his eyes towards the private club. The entire private club was full of sexy dancers. Raven curled his lips slightly, then put on a lewd expression, and walked towards the VIP area ahead. General Maxim, you haven't been here for a long time. Although Raven is now a general of the Soviet Union, he was still warmly welcomed by the dancing girls. And in the core VIP area of the private club, He Huang Shao of the Hellfire Club was looking at the monitoring screen in front of him with a serious face. He just glanced at Raven and noticed several people dressed as bodyguards following behind Raven. Mutant. With just one glance, He Huang Xiao recognized these so-called bodyguards as mutants, and at the same time, He Huang Xiao also understood why Maxim would agree to come here. Naive, just recruited a few mutants in the Soviet Union. Do you feel that you can be confident? Black Emperor Zhao's face was full of ridicule and disdain, although he didn't know what kind of ability the mutants protecting Maxim had. But no matter what kind of ability he has, it's not enough to look at in front of his Hellfire Club. Salvador, go and meet our partner. He Huang Shao picked up a glass of red wine, lightly collided with the dragonfly girl Salvador, and then ordered in an unquestionable voice. Yes, Black Emperor. Dragonfly girl Salvatore nodded, and the wings of the dragonfly on her back waved, and she floated into midair and followed the special passage in this room to the private club. General Maxim. Long time no see. However, before Salvatore found his target, a familiar figure had already appeared in front of Raven. You are. Raven showed a hint of doubt just right, but she looked at the blonde girl with outstanding figure in front of her with playful eyes. My lord, it's Agent Mora. Raven turned slightly, clearly reflecting the girl in front of him. It seems that Professor X has also discovered the cooperation between Hellfire Club and the Soviet Union. In the CIA building, Lancelot looked at Agent Mora who was barely dressed in the screen, and a deep smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Raven, take her. Professor X must be nearby too. Lancelot already knew that Professor X was here too after seeing Agent Mora in a dancing girl costume. Remember to open the mind shield on your body. Lancelot ordered again, and under Lancelot's order, Mystique Raven lightly pressed his right hand on his ring, and a ball of mind force field shook Mystique Raven's body coverage throughout. Wait. Outside the private club, Professor X, who just wanted to use his psychic power, suddenly felt waves of electromagnetic interference in his brain, which forced him to let go of the idea of manipulating General Maxim. Charles, are you really sure that Hellfire Club's Black Emperor Shao is here? Beside Professor X, Magneto reconfirmed with hatred in his eyes. They seem to be hiding in a special place, and my spiritual power can't detect it, but I have seen Salvatore the Dragonfly Girl. Professor X frowned slightly, and Magneto couldn't calm down every time he met He Huang Shao. But this time, when they came to this high-end private club opened by Hellfire Club, they got the news that Black Emperor Shao would secretly cooperate with Soviet high-ranking Maxim Ivanov here. Although I don't know what the content of their cooperation is, Professor X guesses that it is likely to be related to World War III. In any case, Professor X must know the exact information. Moreover, this time it's not just the Hellfire Club. I also found people from the Mutant Evolution House. Professor X's words made Magneto calm down immediately. He looked at Professor X in astonishment, and recalled in his mind shot of being hammered by Sabretooth Victor. The House of Mutant Evolution? How did Lancelot's people appear here? Are they also preparing to start World War III? Also Charles, what the hell is that Lancelot guy's mutant ability? Magneto's series of questions not only revealed the doubts in his heart, but also the doubts in Professor X's mind. So far, they've only seen Lancelot once in the first place, and in the memories of the X-Men and Sabretooth Victor. They haven't figured out Lancelot's ability at all. Before he knew it, Lancelot became more mysterious and terrifying than He Huang Shao. It's an ability that surpasses the power of the mind. In the face of that terrifying power, my mind power seems as small as an ant. A power comparable to that of a god. Professor X inevitably recalled the short confrontation with Lancelot in Sabretooth's memory again. He only saw a pair of flying birds and unrivaled strength. But what this force is, he has no idea. Okay, let's not pay attention to the people in the House of Mutant Evolution. Our primary goal is still the Hellfire Club. Shaking his head slightly, he expelled the fear of Lancelot's power in his mind, and then Professor X's spiritual power overwhelmed him again. The entire private club. General Maxim, the Black Emperor welcomes you. At this moment, Mystique Raven had already seen the dragonfly girl Salvatore. Looking at the familiar girl in front of her, a smile appeared on Mystique Raven's face. Let's go. Take me to see Sebastian Shaw. A thick and old voice came from Raven's mouth. She stretched out her hand and pulled Agent Mora who was still courting at the side, and then gave orders arrogantly. Just like the owner here. Inside the CIA building, Lancelot sat on a soft and high-end sofa, watching the video in front of him with great interest. The surrounding of the entire private club has already been incorporated into the same control system by Lancelot's mutant Bradley. Professor X and Magneto didn't even notice that the camera on a street lamp above their heads was silently watching them. Even Lancelot didn't think that he just sent Mystique Raven to meet with He Huang Xiao from Hellfire Club, and by the way, he got all of He Huang Xiao's plans. But it never occurred to them that this meeting would turn into a tripartite meeting of the Mutant Big Three. Hellfire Club, home of the X-Men and Lancelot's mutant evolution. Interesting. Does this count as the prelude to the first battle of Mutant? Lancelot tapped the table lightly and murmured expectantly. Raven, be careful. Lancelot reminded, and then watched quietly. This is the first meeting of the Mutant Big Three, and it is very commemorative. At this moment, Mystique Raven, incarnated as General Maxim, is hugging left and right, sitting on the soft sofa in the VIP seat, playing with his hands up and down, having a great time. Behind Raven, there are several silent mutants of the evolutionary family of mutant. Where's Sebastian Shaw? Let him come out to see me. Raven looked up at the time, and then angrily reprimanded Salvador at the side. At this moment, Raven, after playing General Maxim for a long time, already has a kind of majesty of a superior. Just sitting on the sofa, there is a feeling of not being angry. You guy, how dare you call the Black Emperor by his name? Salvatore, the dragonfly girl who was standing beside her, was already dissatisfied with Raven, and when she heard that Raven called the Black Emperor by his name, she was a little furious. Just when dragonfly girl Salvador wanted to do it directly and teach the human general in front of him a lesson, a puff of red smoke appeared. Amidst the smoke, Black Emperor Shao, Red Devil Azuo, and Torrent Quest came out. Stop, Salvador. Don't neglect my honored guest. Black Emperor Shao glanced at dragonfly girl Salvador with displeasure. Yes, He Huang. Seeing He Huang Zhao's gaze, Salvatore lowered his head in fear. She is very clear that although He Huangxiao often talks about the mutant family theory, once someone really disobeys his decision, he will absolutely show no mercy. Salvador still remembers that he was slapped flying by He Huangxiao because he questioned He Huangxiao's plan, and he lay on the bed for 3 days. General Maxim, long time no see. After reprimanding Salvador, He Huangxiao smiled gently at Raven with a gentle smile on his face, as if he was an old friend. Sebastian Xiao, put away your hypocritical smile, you lunatic who only knows how to destroy the world. Raven slapped He Huangxiao's arm open and said mercilessly, although the two parties are now in a cooperative relationship, at this moment Raven represents the Soviet Union. Although the Cold War continues, if the Soviet Union is really determined to be a turtle, World War III will never break out. Therefore, in order to carry out his plan smoothly, Black Emperor Xiao has always regarded himself as a subordinate of General Maxim. Hee, General Maxim, you didn't come here this time just to mock me, did you? The smile on He Huangxiao's face disappeared. He thought he was the leader of the mutant group, but at the moment Raven ridiculed him like this. The face is dull. However, just as Lancelot expected, although Black Emperor Xiao was furious inside, on the surface he still had to make false claims with Raven. Okay, you all go down. Raven sat on the main seat and waved to the dancers beside him, leaving only Agent Mora. Xiao, tell me about your plan. How will you start a war? After all the idlers left, only Mutant was left here. Oh, and there was also a human Agent Mora. As you wish, General Maxim. After hearing Raven's question, He Huangxiao smiled again. He glanced at the red devil Azuo behind him, and then a Seizo turned into a red mist and disappeared. When he reappeared, the red devil had already brought a huge amounts of world map. We are planning to plunder an unmarked ship in Cuba, and then send missiles to the US warship in Cuba, the center of the US-Soviet confrontation. He Huangxiao picked up a model ship from the map and threw it at the Cold War dividing line between the two superpowers. Raven looked at He Huangxiao's actions noncommittally. She already had some understanding of He Huangxiao's plan. It was nothing more than creating chaos on the dividing line of the Cold War, making both sides think that the other side had crossed the line. Either the Soviet Union or the United States will start the war without hesitation. Definitely, if the situation changes, I will let the Red Devil directly sneak into the US nuclear submarine and press the button to launch the nuclear bomb. He Huangxiao continued to add, obviously, he has already made up his mind about how to provoke a world war. At the same time, I will let the torrent release a tornado on the sea surface, set off a tsunami, and move all the ships of the two sides towards the dividing line. When the ships of the two sides collide together, even if they do not get orders from their superiors, they will do nothing. The war of hesitation. Black Emperor Xiao talked eloquently, and Agent Mora, who had been sitting next to Raven, broke out in a cold sweat, because no matter what it was, Agent Mora found that he was powerless to stop it. In Black Emperor Xiao's plan, world war has become an inevitable. If this does not start a nuclear war, then I, He Huangxiao, will release the power of the nuclear bomb and destroy the American fleet myself. The red light in He Huangxiao's eyes flickered, and a huge amount of energy followed He Huangxiao's words burst out violently. The facilities in the entire room are all in a state of slight weightlessness. Is this the power of the Black Emperor Xiao? Even the well-informed Raven was a little surprised at the moment. Then Raven took out a document and put it on the table. According to our Soviet high-level meeting, your plan needs to be postponed until 15 days later. Raven's words made He Huangxiao's face darken. Why? He has been planning this war for a long time. Originally, he thought that he would be able to implement his plan to destroy the world immediately, but now he heard that Raven would delay it by 15 days, which made him unable to restrain himself anymore. Anger. He wanted to show the Soviet general in front of him the true power of Mutant. According to the intelligence of our KGB agent, the US military has a special mutant force, the X-Men. And according to the information we have detected, this X-Men is on alert. As far as I know, this X-Men has only one target, and that is you and your Hellfire Club. In other words, Black Emperor Xiao, you are in trouble. Raven gave He Huangxiao and Agent Mora a meaningful look, then nodded to the mutant of the Mutant Evolution House behind him. Sure, Shiren out of here. X-Men. Black Emperor Xiao watched Raven leave with cold eyes, and then couldn't hold back his anger any longer. A ball of red energy shot out from his right hand and bombarded the wall in front of him. Suddenly a breach appeared in the wall. Don't let that old guy Maxim leave. He Huangxiao was going to directly control Raven in order to coerce the Soviet military to cooperate with his plan. Eric, I can see He Huangxiao and the others. Outside the private club, Professor X's pupils shrank slightly, and he found that he could see He Huangxiao and others with his spiritual power. Do it, Charles. After hearing Professor X's words, Magneto immediately raised his hands, and his whole body rose into the air. Sure enough, both He Huangxiao and Magneto couldn't hold back anymore. It's just right. I can use this battle to test the strength of my mutant army. Lancelot watched the changes of the X-Men and the Black Emperor Xiao in a state of rage, and his ruby-like eyes suddenly became deeper. Las Vegas, in front of the private club of Hellfire Club, Raven, incarnated as General Maxim, came out with a group of fellow mutants, and at the same time, Raven received an order from Lancelot in his ears. Win glory for the House of Evolution. Lancelot issued only one order, but Raven's face turned solemn. She stopped in her tracks, and then turned around to give Lancelot's order to the mutants behind her. Obey, my king. My king hail. The mutants following Raven are all mutants who have just awakened this time, led by Toadman Matthew Harlan and Murloc Jack Yerkton. Paul, you are responsible for escorting Ms. Raven back. Lancelot's eyes sparkled with fiery red birds, and then the eyes of all the Evolution House agents around Mystique Raven turned red. Geas Rampage mode. In this mode, Lancelot can not only see what these people see, but also use Geas to transmit orders over a long distance. I obey, my king. A tactical team, led by Paul, immediately responded in a calm tone. In the Geas Rampage mode, all soldiers have the characteristics of absolute reason and no fear of pain. Raven left here under the escort of Paul's team, and when Raven just left, a cloud of red mist appeared on the street, and then the Red Devil of Hellfire Club appeared in midair. Wanna leave? The Red Devil Asazo glanced at Raven's vehicle, and then prepared to teleport there. However, before he could teleport, he suddenly saw a swift tongue wrapping around his body. Boom. The tongue suddenly retracted like a spring, and the Red Devil Asazo was caught off guard, and was directly dragged and hit the ground. This way is not going to work. Matthew Haroon of Toad looked indifferently at the Red Devil Azazuo on the ground, and then shook his head twice. Basu, pum. The Red Devil Asazuo suddenly turned into a puff of smoke and disappeared above the ground. When he reappeared, he had already returned to the front of Black Emperor Xiao. Let Maxim run away. The Red Devil Asazuo looked a little embarrassed. His forehead had already turned purple. He glanced at He Huangxiao, and then said helplessly, run away. He Huangxiao frowned slightly, but he didn't blame the Red Devil, but nodded slightly. Now, my mutant brothers, let's use your strength to your heart's content. He Huangxiao had already felt the familiar metal fluctuations, which made He Huangxiao's face solemn. Facing the Red Devil and the Torrent, the Dragonfly Girl 3 said, rumble. And just after He Huangxiao finished speaking, the entire private club instantly rose from the ground and flew into the air, and on the ground, only the terrified human dancers remained. Get out of here. A vast spiritual power enveloped this place, and the human dancing girl who was originally terrified, as well as the people on the surrounding streets, suddenly dispersed. In just a few minutes, there is only mutant left. Eric, my child, why don't you be polite when you see your teacher? He Huangxiao looked at Magneto floating in the sky with interest, and said in a low voice, Sebastian Shao, Magneto, who was floating in midair, descended slowly, looked at He Huangshao with resentment in his eyes, waved his hands again and again, and pieces of metal quickly spread all over the sky. Go to hell. Magneto tried his best, and the metal above his head fell like a meteor, carrying magnetism and gravity, and swarmed towards He Huangxiao. Eric, you still haven't learned how to control your mutant ability. You still disappoint me now. He Huangxiao crossed his arms and turned a blind eye to the metal fragments that hit him. At this moment, he looked at Magneto with eyes full of disappointment. Rumble. Countless metal fragments fell down like meteors. However, no matter how amazing the momentum of the metal fragments made by Magneto was, after hitting He Huangxiao, it was like a mud cow falling into the sea. All the fragments lost their energy and fell on the ground. Above the ground, Black Emperor Sebastian Shao is a real level 5 mutant. Its variant ability, which absorbs and stores energy, is enough to make him immune to all attacks. Whether it is magnetic energy, electrical energy, kinetic energy, potential energy, as long as it is energy, he can absorb it. Magneto's attack, in He Huangxiao's view, was just to replenish energy for his body. Eric, come join me. I will develop your ability well. He Huangxiao even had time to invite Magneto. Falker, damn it, Farker. However, He Huangxiao's invitation was met with hysterical abuse from Magneto and an even more terrifying metal storm. It's too weak, it's too weak. Magneto's curse made He Huangxiao's face completely gloomy. He raised his right foot and then slammed on the ground. Rumble. With He Huangxiao as the center, a dazzling energy explosion swept out. Layer after layer of energy pulses spread out, and the surrounding cars, ground, building ruins, etc., were all reduced to ashes. And Magneto was blown upside down, and his whole body was embedded in an iron plate in the sky. Ahem, cough. Is this the power of the He Huangxiao? Magneto looked at the He Huangxiao standing proudly below him in horror. For a moment, I was terrified. He has imagined the power of He Huangxiao as much as possible, but at the moment, he still underestimated He Huangxiao. No. After panic, endless anger followed. Magneto's clothes were rattling at this moment, and the ability to control metal exploded with overclocking. Kakaka. The metal buried under the ground began to rise from the ground, and the whole ground rolled like an earth dragon. Countless metals formed huge amounts of metal tentacles, and they grabbed He Huangxiao with great momentum. Sure enough, he is a man of the scene. Although Magneto has used his mutant ability extremely, but in terms of the grandeur of the scene, it is still Magneto. At the moment in the CIA building, Lancelot looked at the scene man Magneto and the Black Emperor Shao in front of him with great interest. Battle. Even Lancelot couldn't help admiring the massive metal tentacles Magneto had created. However, just relying on manipulating metal, it's still a bit unsightly in front of He Huangxiao. Shaking his head slightly, Lancelot was more optimistic about He Huangxiao than Magneto.